Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the What If Guy, back with another fanfiction. This is the second part of What If Issei Had Throne of Heroes. Now before starting, please give this video a like, and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Lug just laughed as he joined in the song, singing along with the other drinkers, their loud voices drowning out the storm raging outside the castle walls. It is God who suffered them, though he restrained them. They landed with horror, with lofty deed, in their cloud of mighty combat of specters, upon a mountain of con make me of connect, without distinction to discerning Ireland, without ships, a ruthless course. The truth was not known beneath the sky of stars, whether they were of heaven or of earth. They all cheered as the song came to an end and more drinks were passed around the room before the god ducked under a throne tankard, the flying mug sailing over his head and hit a drinker behind him, causing the god to get socked in the face by the drenched drinker. A wide grin spread across his face as Lug returned the punch and knocked the drinker off his feet, overturning a table and spilling the drinks of another group of merrymakers. The group cried in outrage before one of them grabbed a chair and smashed it over the sun god's head, shattering the chair into wooden fragments. Lug just laughed in response as he picked up the man and threw him at the rest of his friends, knocking them all off their feet as the god ducked under another thrown bottle. By this time, the entire hall had devolved into their own personal bar fights as the staff just sighed, clearly used to this kind of behavior. Grinning Lug grabbed an empty bottle and smashed it over one of his attacker's head, knocking the man out as the bottle broke. One of the four remaining attackers grabbed another chair before throwing it at Lug, who dodged to the side before snatching a still full tankard of ale and sculling it. Giving a sigh of satisfaction, Lug blocked an incoming right cross to his chin before elbowing the man in the face, causing his opponent to fall to the ground unconscious as the sun god stepped over his fallen body. The other three piled on top of him as they tried to pin Lug to the ground, only for the sun god to simply stand up with the three hanging off his body. Lug then smiled as he shook his body vigorously, like a dog, and sent the three men flying across the room before they landed on the floor with a groan. Having fun there, Lug asked in an amused male voice. The sun god smiled as he recognized the voice and spun around to see a jolly-looking man with a smirk on his face. Well, if it isn't the Issei attire himself. What brings you here, Dagda? Come to grab a drink and join the fun. I'm good for a round two. The smirk on Dagda's face dropped to a serious expression as he gestured for Lug to take one of the few undamaged seats left. Not today, Lug. I think you know why I'm here. Lug just frowned in confusion as he sat down. Oh, and what would the leader of the Tuatha De Danann want with me? Dagda stared at him with a calculating expression. I've heard some troubling rumors recently. Rumors, repeated Lug with a clueless look on his face. Dagda nodded as he kept his gaze focused firmly on Lug. Yes, apparently the immortal witch has left the land of shadows and is currently in the human world. Something that has not happened in centuries. The sun god laughed. I did not think you would take stock in such things. Are you sure you're not going senile in your old age, Dagda? You know as well as I that if Scathach had left the other world, then we would have sensed it. Dagda's eyes narrowed. Indeed we would have. Unless she had help. And what makes you say that? Asked Lug as he reached across the table for one of the still full tankards. The rumors say that she was seen talking to you and Morrigan before the two of them disappeared, replied Dagda, making Lug pause before he started cursing silently in his head. Are you insinuating something? Dagda? Morrigan hasn't been here since she left. She's still on her vacation in the human world. You know that? Replied the sun god as he downed his drink. Yes, strange that she chose to tell only you of this before she left. I wasn't aware the two of you had gotten that close, commented Dagda. We're not exactly close, but I'm one of the few among us that doesn't treat her like crap after the incident, so we do talk occasionally, growled Lug as he leveled a glare at his friend. I see, and what do these talks usually entail? Asked Dagda with raised eyebrows. Oh, you know, reminiscing about better times, drinking ourselves to oblivion, the usual, laughed Lug with a smile. Dagda just sighed tiredly as he stared at his friend. Lug, what are you and Morrigan up to? What makes you think I'm planning anything with Morrigan? He asked with a frown. She has been gone in the human world on vacation for an abnormally long time and has already missed one of our meetings, reasoned Dagda. Morrigan has always been like that, Dagda. You should know that better than me. You know how she feels about politics. In fact, I think that's one of her more redeeming qualities, mused the sun god. True, but she at least used to show up for our meetings, despite the hostility she got from the others. And she certainly wouldn't miss one because of some vacation, argued Dagda. So she finally got fed up with how they were treating her. I can't say I'm that surprised. You know how she is treated, Lug replied, glaring at his friend. Dagda just sighed under his friend's glare. Yes, I'm aware, but I also know Morrigan wouldn't shirk her duty due to some hostile name-calling, nor would she mask her presence from us just so she could enjoy her vacation undisturbed. An amused grin spread across Lug's face. Who knows how the mind of that woman works? Perhaps she found a nice human to spend some time with, a way to let off some steam. We might have another demigod in the making. Elsewhere, a certain goddess got the inexplicable desire to kill the sun god. Don't think you can talk your way out of this one, Lug, frowned his friend. Like I said, I'm not trying to talk my way out of anything, responded Lug with a shite-eating grin on his face. I see, then this has nothing to do with the supposedly second Gibal that Morrigan found, questioned Dagda, causing Lug to freeze momentarily. What makes you say that? Asked the sun god. I just find it odd that Morrigan decided to go on vacation immediately after it was discovered, and that she would neglect to tell us where this second Gibalg is, answered Dagda, his gaze still firmly fixed on Lug. The sun god just shrugged. What can we say? Morrigan does what she wants. Why do you think she'd tell me anything? You know that Morrigan and I don't often see eye to eye on things. A frown spread across Dagda's face as he responded. Exactly, you don't often see eye to eye. And so what makes this different, Lug? Why are you two working together, and with Scathach of all people? I told you we're not up to anything, sighed Lug, beginning to sound like a broken record. There is only one common factor that is shared between the three of you, and that's Kuchulain. No, don't deny it, Lug. I'm not the only one who has made this connection, reasoned Dagda, causing the sun god to look down at his empty mug. Lug, what were you and Morrigan thinking? You of all people should know how dangerous Scathach is. Whether we like it or not, Scathach is considered one of us by the outsiders. We don't need her causing an incident, growled Dagda angrily, while Lug just said nothing in response. We don't have the luxury to be making enemies of the other pantheons, let alone to be fighting amongst ourselves, he continued, drawing a groan from Lug. This again, Dagda, the Fomorians are dead and gone. You're jumping at shadows that have long passed, said the sun god with a shake of his head. Dagda just shook his head as he stood up from the table. Out of respect for you, Lug, I will let you and Morrigan play your little games. But understand this, Lug, if your little scheme gets out of hand, I swear that as leader of the Celts, I will personally put an end to it. Lug just watched as the Celtic god of life headed towards the exit, only to pause at the door as he left. Oh, and one more thing, I checked your vault and was surprised to find Gibalg missing. I wonder, why would the great Lug ever part with his son's treasured spear? Now alone, Lug glanced up at the door as it shut before grabbing another drink and sighing, I'm getting too old for this crap. Looks like he's coming around, commented a female voice. About time, he's been out for 2 whole hours, replied a different voice. What happened? Groaned Issei, struggling to sit up. Easy there, Issei. Your wounds aren't completely healed yet, warned Scathach as she pushed him back down to the bed. Scathach, Morrigan, what happened? Where am I? He asked, weakly. That's what we want to know, Issei. How did you manage to overlord the rune necklace? The boundary field it generates should have been able to mask and contain more power than you could amass, questioned Scathach as she pointed at the cracked necklace hanging around his neck. Oh, so that's what it did. Why did you give it to me anyway? Replied the teen, curiously. Morrigan just sighed. Issei, if other factions find out about those cards, they will kill you, especially the Greeks. The teen's face paled when he heard this. What, but why? You're using artifacts of their champions without their permission, some of which have been lost for centuries. They will see that in 2 ways, as an insult, or they will see you as a thief and hunt you down because of it, explained Morrigan. Upon seeing the teen's horrified expression, Scathach smiled. Don't worry, Isay, it's still functioning, if only barely. As long as you don't draw the attention of people who are uniquely connected to the artifact, you should be fine. Much to the worry of the 2 Celts, Issei's expression just grew more concerned. Morrigan, quick question, ... Does the Shinto pantheon exist? The goddess of death slowly nodded with a frown. Indeed, we've had to hide our presence from them since we came to this country. Why? Would they be able to sense an artifact being used, thanks to the damaged necklace? Asked Issei in concern. The 2 Celts' eyes zeroed in on him. Issei ... What did you do? Asked Morrigan, reminding him of a scolding parent. All right, but you can't be mad at me, replied Issei. What did you do? Repeated Morrigan, through gritted teeth. Okay, first, I was minding my own business, started the teen. Oh really, scoffed the goddess. I was, he cried. And exactly what happened while you were minding your own business? Interrogated the goddess, while Scathach just had a smile form on her face. So I was delivering Rhea's message when I see a man murdered on the floor. Suddenly I'm attacked by an insane exorcist and his fallen angels before they kidnap one of my friends, reiterated Issei. I couldn't use Gibalg or Tarapalos, so I tried my new card and ... kind of burnt down the entire building, he admitted with a sheepish smile. The goddess just shook her head. Issei, why is it every time you fight a building is destroyed? He definitely takes after me, doesn't he? Said Scathach with a proud smile, causing Morrigan to glare at her. Still, property damage aside, how does this affect the Shinto pantheon? Asked the goddess. Well, the caster card contained Tamamo no Mi, replied Issei, only to get 2 confused looks from the Celts. Issei, we're Celts, we don't know the lore behind the Shinto faction, reminded Scathach, making Issei give them an embarrassed smile. Right, sorry. Well, Tamamo was a facet of the Shinto sun god Amaterasu ... and I kind of used her abilities to fight off the fallen, he explained, drawing horrified expressions from the 2 Celts. The god's power being used by a human and in her own territory, no less ... It's no wonder the necklace cracked, murmured the witch. So they know about him? Questioned Morrigan with a frown. Scathach shook her head. They know that something is in their territory. Thankfully the necklace was still able to mask his location. I'll have to make a stronger necklace tomorrow. Good, so can I go now? I have to rescue Asia, groaned Issei as he got up from the bed. Issei, you're not going anywhere, you're still injured, scolded Morrigan. The teen ignored her as he got to his feet. If I don't do something, God knows what they'll do to her. You don't even know where to start looking, Issei. Wait until your wounds have healed, reasoned the goddess. It will be too late by then, shouted Issei, only to cough as pain spread from his stomach. Morrigan only sighed before she left the room, leaving Issei alone with the witch, whom was staring at him with a confused expression on her face. Eventually Scathach just sighed as she walked over to his drawers and a small knife appeared in her hand. "You going to go anyway, aren't you?" she asked, with a frown as Issei nodded in reply. "Rune magic is a very useful thing, isn't it? I remember how surprised I was when I saw the ease at which my student picked it up. In fact, he even had learnt obscure runes that most don't bother with, like the rune of searching," commented Scathach, making Issei glance at her in confusion. The witch just ignored the confused looks being sent her way and smiled as she broke off a piece of his wooden drawer. "That rune is a funny one. Simply picture what you want it to find and it will hunt it down, be it an item, place ... or person." Scathach then carved a rune into the piece of wood before she held it up for Issei to see as she continued explaining, "But it has a very limited range. However, after studying rune magic for years, I developed a way to increase this range to a small town, almost a size QO." The witch then threw the piece of wood onto his bed as she began heading for the exit. Right before she closed the door, the witch gave him an amused smile. "Of course, you'd need to have knowledge on rune magic in order to use it," she finished, and the door clicked shut. Issei just looked at the door before a smile grew on his face as he picked up the piece of wood, include Lancer. Hearing this, Scathach just grinned in amusement before summoning Gibalg and heading for the door, only to be stopped by Morrigan once she reached downstairs. "Where are you going?" questioned the goddess with a suspicious look on her face. "Just for an enthusiastic walk around town," replied Scathach with a grin. "Armed with Gibalg," commented Morrigan, raising her eyebrows. The witch's grin just widened. "A very enthusiastic walk. Why did you let him go? He is in no condition to fight," sighed Morrigan, glaring at the witch. Scathach just nodded. "True, but short of holding him hostage in his own home, there is nothing we could do to stop him. And if he gets himself killed, what then?" growled the goddess. The witch just fixed her with a deadpan expression before she pushed past Morrigan and continued on to the door, only to pause and turn back to the goddess with an amused expression on her face. "You know, I never thought that one of the Tuatha would be so dishonorable. Or did you forget the oath you made to Issei's father?" she asked, before shutting the door behind her. Morrigan stood in the silent room, only to growl in frustration as she summoned an ebony spear and followed the witch. "Where's a shitty devil when you need one?" groaned Freed as he sat in one of the many pews in the main foyer of the church. Still, at least this was better than simply sitting downstairs and watching them kill that damned witch. After all, there was always a chance that kid could show up for a round two. A grin spread across his face at the thought of a rematch. He still needed to pay back that shitty mage for the burns to his face. The exorcist's thoughts of revenge were interrupted as he felt something small slam into the back of his head, causing Freed to growl angrily as he picked up what had hit him. Examining it in the dim light, Freed noticed it appeared to be some piece of wooden debris. "This shitty church really is falling apart." The exorcist was about to throw the piece of wood away in anger when he caught sight of something carved onto one side of it. Frowning, he brought it over to a nearby candle and examined it in the dim light, noting what appeared to be some kind of symbol or rune carved onto its surface. "What the hell is this shitty thing?" he growled, only to hear the locked double doors of the church get kicked down. Spinning around, Freed saw Issei walk in with Gibalg held in one hand. "Honey, I'm home," smirked the teen. "Well, if it isn't the shitty mage, I was just thinking about you," grinned Freed as he drew his gun and sword. "Sorry, but I don't swing that way," replied Issei as he glared at the exorcist, and they began to approach each other. "Here to save your little witch friend, how romantic," teased the exorcist as the two fighters heard the clap of thunder before the sound of rain hitting the roof echoed throughout the otherwise silent chamber. "You're confident, facing me on your own like this," noted the teen as he searched the room for any hidden enemies. Freed just laughed hysterically. "They're all downstairs with the witch, besides, as if I'd let them interfere. You and I have got a score to settle. Get out of my way, Freed, and I might let you live. I've got bigger things to worry about," ordered the teen with another glare. Freed plastered a fake thoughtful expression on his face before shaking his head with a smirk. "Tempting, but I'll pass. Oh, I know once I kill you I'll have some fun with that witch's body. I won't be able to hear her scream, but it should still be entertaining, don't you think?" Issei said nothing as he glared at Freed in anger, his pupils becoming narrow slits as his iris started glowing orange, making the exorcist's grin widened as he activated the light sword. "Yes, that's better. That's the killing intent I wanted to see. Hey Issei-kun, will you marry me?" Again, there was no response as the two fighters just glared at each other, the only sound filling the room coming from the droplets of rain leaking through the roof. As if an unspoken signal had been decided, the minute they heard the water droplet hit the floor, both fighters started rushing towards the other. Freed fired his gun as the exorcist charged Issei, the trio of bullets all rapidly approaching different vital areas of the teen's body. Issei didn't stop his advance though, he didn't even slow down. Instead, the teen spun Gibalg in front of him as he approached, the spear hitting and deflecting the blessed bullets before they could reach their targets. Eyes widening, Freed leapt into the air, passing over Issei before spinning around and slashing the teen across his back. However, instead of a cry of pain, all Freed heard was a loud clang reverberate through the empty church halls as Issei quickly twisted his body in a half-turn, allowing Gibalg to block the strike at his spinal cord. Freed wasn't deterred, however, as he brought his gun up to Issei's face while Gibalg was still caught on his light sword. Growling as the barrel of the gun was pointed towards his head, Issei kneed the exorcist in the gut before slamming the of Gibalg in a downwards that smashed into Freed's head. Crying out, the exorcist was sent flying backwards, crashing through 3 layers of pews before rolling to the side as Issei appeared above him with his spear ready to pierce Freed's rotten heart. Jumping back to his feet, the exorcist fired at Issei again, only to see the same result as the first time. How the hell is he doing that? He shouldn't even be able to see those bullets, let alone track them. Freed kept firing his pistol at Issei in the hopes of getting a lucky shot, but was frustrated when he saw Issei deflect each bullet. Suddenly, they both heard the familiar sound of the gun clicking empty. Smiling, Issei immediately leapt towards Freed with Gibalg eagerly stabbing at the exorcist, not giving Freed a chance to reload his pistol as he was forced onto the defensive. The exorcist struggled to hold back Issei's assault as Gibalg began to greedily draw with every successful hit, causing pain to spread throughout Freed's body. In desperation, the exorcist threw his empty pistol at Issei, catching the teen off balance as he knocked the impromptu missile aside with his spear, only for his eyes to widen as he saw Freed's light sword slashing towards his head. Unable to completely dodge the attack, even with the speed provided by the lancer included, Issei leaned back as far as he could and watched with a grimace as the light sword passed over his eyes and carved a shallow cut along his forehead. Seeing his compromising position, Freed smiled before he sweep-kicked the teen's feet from under him, sending Issei crashing to the ground. The teen saw Freed approaching and tried to bring Gibalg up to block the incoming sword, only to find his spear caught underneath one of the pews. Unable to get Gibalg out fast enough, Issei instead let go of the spear and used both his hands to grab the exorcist's wrist, halting the light sword just above his neck. As the boosted gear appeared on his arm, Issei was able to use his newly doubled strength to push the light sword back and towards the exorcist. The two were now caught in a deadlock as Freed tried to overpower him and slice through his neck before Issei could boost again. Issei had to close one eye as he felt from his forehead wound trickle down into his eye, making a smile come to the teen's face as an idea formed. Placing a hand on his forehead, Issei then removed the wide hand and quickly drew a rune on the exorcist's arm with his own. Freed tried to move his arm away, but he was still trapped in the deadlock and couldn't do anything but watch as the rune on his arm began to glow a deep crimson red. Suddenly, the exorcist's entire arm was engulfed in flames as the rune of fire activated, causing Freed to scream in pain as he quickly withdrew his sword from Issei's neck. Grabbing Gibalg, Issei immediately leapt to his feet and turned around to see Freed put out the fire on his arm by sticking it in the church's holy water. "You know, for a priest, you're not too good at that whole must-not sacrilege stuff," teased Issei. Freed smirked as his burnt arm now hung limply beside him, making Issei frown as the exorcist placed his sword in his other hand. "You shitty mage, you've already lost." "What do you mean?" replied the teen. Freed's smirk just grew. "What do you think the others were doing while we were fighting? By now they should have removed that witch's sacred gear. In short, you lose, you little shit." Upon hearing this, Issei glared at the exorcist as Gibalg began glowing a baleful red. "I didn't want to use this on you. A quick death is too good for someone like you, but it seems I'm short on time." Feeling the lust that began filling the room, the exorcist's smile dropped as for the first time a look of fear appeared on his face. The exorcist just stood frozen as he saw Issei's brown hair seem to turn a shade of blue, while the teen's glowing orange iris shone out among the darkened room. He came out the call as the room became lit by the ominous red glow from the spear. Freed just watched as Issei thrust his spear forward, his voice sounding as if two were speaking as one. "Bolg." The noble phantasm flew straight towards the exorcist's heart, like a hungry dog that had just been let off its leash. Freed tried to use his sword to intercept the red glowing projectile. The white light of his sword briefly met the crimson glow of Gibalg, only for the light blade to shatter as the noble phantasm continued on course. The exorcist's eyes widened into an expression of shock as the spear pierced his heart before coughing up and collapsing to the ground. Issei just grasped Gibalg as the spear returned to his outstretched hand, his eyes returning to normal and his hair losing its blue color. Not giving the corpse a second glance, Issei ran down the stairs to find himself in a large underground cavern with some sort of structure housed in the middle of the room. His eyes widened as he spotted Asia hanging off the top of the structure, surrounded by over 100 chanting exorcists with Rainier watching him next to Asia. "So that noise upstairs was you after all. You really are a stubborn boy, aren't you?" she commented in a condescending tone. "Give Asia back, now," he demanded, causing the chanting exorcists to stop as everyone turned to look at him in disbelief. Rainier just snorted as he saw 2 silver rings form on her fingers. "If you want her so bad, then fine, we're done with her anyway." With that announcement, the fallen angel grabbed the nun and smirked before she dropped her. Seeing this, Issei rushed forward as he leapt into the air and caught her falling body. Landing with a painful groan, Issei panted in exhaustion as Gibalg reverted back to its card form, the teen too exhausted to keep it manifested. Asia, are you okay?" cried the teen. The nun weakly opened her eyes before nodding her head slowly, causing Issei to embrace her in a tight hug. "I'm sorry, Asia, if I hadn't let them take you. If I hadn't taken so long to get to you, then none of this would have happened." Asia just gave the teen a sad smile as she gripped his hand with her own. "Don't worry, Issei, it's not your fault. Don't worry, Issei, it's not your fault," smiled his mother before her hand slipped from his grip and collapsed to the ground. "Hurry up and die already," ordered Rainier. Issei was snapped out of his memories as he saw a light spear suddenly pierce Asia and, making the nun cough up as she continued to stare up at him in confusion. Huh, it hurts. It really hurts. Issei, are you still there? I can't see you. It's getting dark. I can't see anything, asked Asia fearfully. Don't worry, Asia, I'm still here and I'm not leaving you, assured Issei as he lightly squeezed her hand. A happy smile then spread across the nun's face. Thank goodness. Hey Issei, do you think we can be friends? Tears started streaming down Issei's face as he nodded his head. Of course we can. In fact, after this I'll take care of you. I'll teach you to read and write, how to eat a cheeseburger, and we can have fun together just like last time. So please don't go. Asia just gave Issei's hands a gentle squeeze. Don't worry, Issei, even if everything's dark, I'm not scared as long as you're with me. With you next to me like this, I don't have to worry, because you'll always take care of me. You were the first person that was ever kind to me, Issei. Thank you. I just wish we could have spent more time together, commented the nun, wistfully. Hey Issei, coughed Asia, softly. What is it, Asia? Asked the teen. Issei watched with tear-filled eyes as Asia's image was combined with that of an albino girl wearing a purple dress as they both gave the same sad smile in unison and said, It's kind of cold, isn't it? Asia's hand then slipped from his grip as Issei just sat there, staring at her body as it slowly stopped breathing. No, not again, damn it, Asia, wake up, Asia. Asia, shouted Issei as he shook her unmoving body, only to hear the sound of condescending laughter coming from Rainier. Oh, looks like you failed after all, such a shame. But with her sacred gear, not even you can beat me, gloated the fallen angel. As Issei looked at Asia's body, he felt something he'd never experienced before as he sensed his hand instinctively going towards the card holder, a pure unrelenting rage. Hearing Rainier still laughing arrogantly, he growled and turned to her, neither caring nor noticing that her image started changing to that of a blonde man as more and more red-hot rage began burning through his body. She killed her, he killed her, Asia, Ilya, Rainier, Gilgamesh, I'll make you pay, I will kill you. Issei's head began aching as memories of a smiling albino girl mixed with that of Asia as the rage continued to course throughout his body. The teen began trembling as he stood up and faced the woman with a rage-filled expression. That was a mistake. Why is that? Because you've got no one left to die for, scoffed Rainier confidently as, once again, the image of the arrogant blonde was superimposed over her. No, growled the teen as he pulled out a glowing card from the holder and caused a violent atmosphere to begin to fill the chamber. Because now, I've got no reason to hold back. Oh please, you're injured, exhausted, outnumbered and outgunned. Even if you have a Longinus and Gibalg, you must realize that you've lost. Out of respect for the Celts, I'll let you leave without harm if you turn away now, offered Rainier with a smug smile. Issei didn't answer and everyone in the chamber took a step back as they saw the card's glow begin to grow brighter, the teen's rune necklace gaining more cracks until it appeared to resemble a spider web. The minute the necklace cracked, they all felt an overwhelming power and rage emanating off the teen and everyone had a shiver run down their spines as Issei was engulfed in the card's light. I'm going to make you all pay, Rainier. None of you are leaving this place alive, promised Issei as his rage-filled voice echoed across the now silent chamber. Include, Berserker. An old man suddenly froze as he stared at the earth beneath the clouds. Brother, what's wrong? Asked the well-built elderly man next to him. It's nothing, Poseidon. I just thought I felt something familiar. Never mind, I need to go check on that idiot descendant of my son, replied his brother, walking away. Poseidon frowned. His brother had never cared for his son's descendants before. Why the sudden unexpected change? Honestly, first it was Artemis and Apollo acting odd, but now it's Zeus himself. Just what is going on around here? He sighed before walking off. The light finally died down and everyone in the chamber saw Issei holding a large stone axizord that was easily his height and length, a murderous aura surrounding the teen as he slowly advanced. The floor shaking and the tiles cracking beneath his feet with every step he took as Issei kept his gaze focused solely on Rainier. The fallen angel felt a shudder run down her spine as she shouted, "What are you all waiting for? Kill him." With her shout, everyone snapped out of their fear-induced state and readied their light weapons while the few magic casters they had began chanting their spells. The entire underground cavern was lit up brighter than the sun as hundreds of weapons and spells were pointed at Issei. However, the teen didn't seem worried by this as he just continued his slow approach. "You why idiot, now you die," gloated the fallen angel. Issei showed no concern as his vision was blinded by the light of the incoming attacks from his opponents, as if the very heavens themselves had descended on the lone teen. The entire building shook as the attacks landed, engulfing Issei in an explosion that tore the very earth beneath them to shreds and caused his opponents to laugh at the teen's foolishness. He didn't even try to dodge. "How dumb can a human be?" muttered Rainier with a shake of her head as she started to descend back to the ground. The fallen angel just stared at the crater and the unmoving body of Issei, who was laying in the middle of it with his axizord still gripped in his hand. At the end of the day, he was nothing but a lowly human after all, thought the Rainier as she turned and headed for the exit. "No way," gasped a horrified voice. "That's not possible," exclaimed another. Hearing this, Rainier frowned as she saw the exorcist staring at something behind her in shock. Rainier roared a loud voice and the fallen angel froze at the rage contained in that one word. Slowly turning around, Rainier blinked as her mouth dropped open at the sight that greeted her. Standing in the middle of the smoking crater was Issei, completely unharmed and glaring at her. "And no way," she gasped as Issei jumped out of the crater, causing the ground to crack as he landed. Rainer, he roared again and caused the fallen angel in question to back away slightly. Damn it, attack him already, screamed Rainer as she summoned her own light spear. The rest of the stray exorcists did the same with their own weapons before the melee attackers charged the teen en masse, intending to overwhelm Issei with their numbers. Issei didn't even glance at them as he lifted his axe sword into the air before bringing it crashing down on the floor in front of him. The force from the blow knocking the exorcists off their feet and causing debris from the floor to rain down on them, injuring or killing most of the attackers. The few that didn't die growled in anger as they entered close range and started attacking Issei. Again, the teen didn't show any reaction as the light swords came sailing towards him. The first sword-wielding exorcist swung his blade in a decapitating swing at Issei's neck, while another two went to stab him and a fourth tried to cut off his axe sword-wielding arm. The last two exorcists just stood back and waited for an opening to reveal itself. Everyone expected to see the light sword sink into the teen's flesh. Everyone expected to see the teen fall over dead with the victorious exorcist standing over him. Everyone was wrong. Instead, there was a low growl of frustration from Issei as, to the shock of everyone in the room, the light sword simply bounced off his skin. Before any of the attacking exorcists could react, the axe sword in the teen's hand carved the two that attacked his in half. As the two bisected corpses fell to the ground, Issei kicked the exorcist that tried to cut off his arm and, hearing the bones in the exorcist's rib cage break as he was sent flying across the room and collapsed to the ground. The fourth exorcist finally recovered from his shock and this time tried to attack Issei's eyes, trying to find a weakness in this apparently armored skin. However, Issei just growled again as he grabbed the exorcist by his priest clothes. "You're in the way," he snarled before hurling the man across the room and into his fellow exorcists, killing the man and some of his friends from the impact. The last two exorcists just looked at each other in shock before they both ran at the teen with hate-filled expressions on their faces, their anger over their dead comrades overriding what common sense they had. Issei just grabbed the two by their heads before slamming them into the concrete floor, causing the two exorcists to stop moving instantly. The rest of the exorcists opened fire with spells and blessed bullets as they saw Issei begin slowly walking towards them again. Once again, the teen faced the oncoming onslaught with nothing but annoyance on his face as he kept walking towards his target. This time the exorcists could clearly see their bullets ricocheting off the teen's skin, and while the spells appeared to hit, they seemed to have no effect at all as Issei continued unencumbered towards them. "No way, he's not human," murmured one of the exorcists fearfully. "Damn it, somehow he's immune to our attacks," thought Rainer in anger before her eyes came to rest on the support pillars and a smile grew on her face. "Everyone aim for the support pillars. If we can't damage him normally, then we'll just crush him under debris," ordered the fallen angel. The exorcists nodded and immediately started breaking each of the pillars, causing the ceiling to shake with each one. Seeing Issei about to pass one of the pillars, Rainer smiled before she threw her spear at it, causing the pillar to come collapsing on top of him and throwing dust and dirt into the air. The fallen angel breathed a sigh of relief while the rest of the exorcists cheered as their opponent finally succumbed to their might, only for the cheer to die in their throats as they saw the pillar begin to move. No one said a word as they watched the stone pillar get lifted up and thrown aside as the teen emerged from underneath it. "He's not even using boosted gear. He can't be that strong," thought the fallen. "I'm coming for you, Rainer," growled the teen, and both the fallen and exorcists briefly saw a hulking monstrosity of a man appear behind Issei as he approached them. "He's a monster," cried an exorcist before the man turned and ran for the exit. "Get back here," snarled Rainer, whom quickly threw her spear into the fleeing exorcist. The fleeing man fell to the ground dead, but it was too late. The damage had been done. Like a pebble signaling an approaching avalanche, more fearful mutterings began as the exorcist's morale finally broke. "If anyone else runs, I'll kill them personally," threatened Rainer as she realized how dangerous her situation had just become. The exorcists were silent as they looked between her and the monster slowly approaching them, silently judging where their best chance of survival lay. It was an obvious choice really, as the humans broke ranks and fled for their lives to the exit, leaving Rainer at the teen's mercy. "You deserters, Azazel will hear of this," yelled the fallen angel as she tried to follow them, only to find Issei standing between her and the exit. A satisfied grin spread across Issei's face. "I've got you now." "How the hell did he move there so fast?" wondered Rainer as she summoned another spear before healing her wounds with her newly acquired sacred gear. As Issei saw this, his smile dropped as he stabbed his axe sword into the ground and another rage-filled expression crossed his face. "You dare use her power, you dare to use it in front of me, you dare taint her gift like that, I quote, I'll kill you," he roared in fury before she felt the murderous aura surrounding him skyrocket. The next thing that she knew was intense pain as Issei grabbed her by the head before slamming the fallen angel into the jagged remains of the floor beneath them. Rainer cried out as she felt a piece of the floor jab into her stomach, only to feel herself get lifted up again and thrown across the room. Healing herself as best she could with her sacred gear, Rainer hissed in pain as she got herself up from the ground and watched as Issei began walking towards her. The fallen angel just backed up before she pumped all her energy into her light spear, which started glowing with energy that was barely being restrained by the spear. "Feel honored, human. This is the first time I've had to use my trump card on someone. Now prepare to face the wrath of a fallen of the Grigori," snarled Rainer as she charged Issei with the glowing spear. As the spear hit, there was a blinding flash of light that enveloped the two fighters, causing the underground cavern to shake as the last support pillar left began to crack and debris was thrown everywhere. As the light died down, Rainer's bestial snarl dropped into a horrified expression as she saw Issei holding her spear with one hand. The teen gave another low growl as he began to squeeze, and Rainer watched as her spear gave a metallic screech and cracks started forming before the spear shattered, unleashing the energy that was still coursing through the weapon and knocking Rainer backwards. Groaning, Rainer got to her feet as she heard Issei pick up his axe sword from the ground as he approached, fearfully shuddering as she saw her death now getting closer. As she watched him approach, the fallen angel's eyes came to rest on the last support pillar as a desperate idea came to mind. I'm dead either way, at least this one has a better chance of survival. Summoning her spear, she confidently began walking towards the teen in order to get closer to the exit that was still being blocked by Issei, positioning her body so that she was in front of the last pillar. Rainer then took a deep breath before she put a smug grin on her face. You really did care for that girl, didn't you? Then you'll love this. Before we killed her, I let Freed have his way with the little witch, announced the fallen angel as Issei just froze before he began trembling again. Raynar, yelled the teen furiously before Issei rushed towards her, making the ground shake with his every step. She just stared at the oncoming berserker with a smile on her face. Waiting right until Issei was about to hit her, Rainer suddenly dived to the side as the teen crashed into the last support pillar, causing it to break and setting off a chain reaction throughout the building. Seeing her plan succeed, Rainer quickly sprinted towards the exit as she heard Issei roar in fury again and felt the roof of the underground cavern begin to cave in. The fallen angel quickly rushed out of the abandoned church as the building shook before collapsing in on itself. Breathing a sigh of relief as the teen was buried under tons of earth and rubble, Rainer looked around to find the rest of her surviving minions, ready to kill the deserters for abandoning her. However, as she turned around, the fallen angel stopped in shock at the sight that greeted her. All around Rainer were the dead bodies of the deserters. Well, looks like we got another one, a fallen by the looks of her. You want this one or should I take it? Asked a female voice. Rainer quickly glanced towards the nearby gate to see two females lying down on the steps outside the main building. Both were armed with spears and one was wearing purple leather armor while the other was wearing black. I wouldn't recommend it, Morrigan. Something tells me that Issei will want to deal with this one personally, replied the purple one. If you say so, Scathach, sighed Morrigan as she stood up from the ground. Who are you? You're interfering with Grigori business. I demand you leave at once unless you wish to pick a fight with us, growled Rainer as she summoned a light spear. You see, funny thing about that boy is under our protection. Meaning this is now Celtic business. I wonder how Azazel will take to hearing this, replied Morrigan as she glared at the fallen angel. What Azazel doesn't know won't hurt him, and once I kill you too, then the secret will be safe with me, grinned Rainer as she threw a spear at the purple-armored warrior, only to see Scathach deflect the incoming projectile with her own spear. Scathach then just laughed as she let a fraction of her power leak out, instantly making Rainer pale before the fallen angel leapt into the air and rushed towards the city, intending to flee as fast as she could. She barely made it more than a few feet before Scathach threw her spear at the fallen's wings and sending Rainer crashing back to the ground. Just because we won't kill you doesn't mean we're going to let you go, commented Morrigan as they walked over to the downed fallen angel. Rainer just met her glare with a smug smile. Well, sorry Celts, but I'm afraid you failed. That bastard child of Kuchu Lane is dead. The two Celts glared at her before Scathach grabbed Rainer by the neck and the fallen sensed more power beginning to leak off the witch. If Issei didn't want to kill you himself, I would personally drag you into the land of shadows for such an insult, growled the witch as she placed her spear against Rainer's. Enough, Scathach ordered Morrigan as the witch dropped the fallen to the ground. You said he's dead, but I'm afraid your mistake, fallen. Issei is very much alive. Impossible, he's crushed under tons of rubble. I made sure of it, spat Rainer. Scathach burst into laughter. You dropped a building on him, is that all? Trust me, if he's anything like Kuchulain, then you've only delayed the inevitable. Suddenly all three of them felt the ground beneath them shake. Looks like he'll be here soon, commented Morrigan. Rainer just looked at her in shock as the ground began shaking more violently and they heard the sound of rubble moving near the remains of the collapsed church. Suddenly debris exploded outwards as a loud announcement filled the air, making Rainer fearfully try get up from the ground, only for Scathach's spear to pin her to the earth. The three of them then saw a red-clawed gauntlet emerge from the newly made hole and stab an axe sword into the ground as Issei pulled himself up from the rubble, carrying Asia's body cradled in his arms. Upon seeing the two Celts, Issei gave them a nod before he gently placed Asia's body on the ground. Rainer, growled the teen as he approached, and the fallen angel stared at him silently, realizing that her death was all but assured. What happened to Freed, she asked, trying to stall for time. Don't worry, you'll be joining him soon, informed the teen as he lifted his giant axe sword high in the air, and in that moment Issei was once again replaced by the hulking berserker that she saw earlier. 9 lives, the shooting 100 heads. For a brief moment Rainer was confused as she felt the axe sword hit her body in 9 places at the same time. The moment of confusion only lasted a second though, before her brain realized that the body was dead and began shutting down. Issei just stared at the dead body of Rainer before he felt the rage finally begin to dissipate and took deep breaths as the axe sword glowed and turned back into the berserker card. Quickly running back to Asia's body, he gently shook her, praying that she would open her eyes. Issei, I'm sorry, but your friend's soul is passing into the path of death, informed the goddess with a sad understanding look on her face. Then perhaps I can be of help, announced a male voice. I was wondering when you'd reveal yourself, commented Scathach as she picked up her spear from Rainhair's corpse. You knew I was here, asked a dark green-haired male as he emerged from hiding behind a chimney before flying down to meet them, revealing his devil wings. Of course we did. You're not the best at hiding your demonic signature. Now why are you here? You're not a member of those two other devils' peerages? Questioned Morrigan with a suspicious look on her face. The boy nodded. Indeed, my name is Deodora Astaroth, heir to the Astaroth clan and brother to Beelzebub. As for why I'm here, I came to rescue my dear Asia. Unfortunately, it appears I was too late. You know Asia, replied Issei. Deodora nodded. Indeed, I was the devil that she healed. When I heard that she had been taken by the fallen angels, I rushed to find her and rescue her from those damned crows. I take offense to that, muttered Morrigan with a deadpan expression. Ignoring the goddess' remark, Issei looked at Deodora with a hopeful smile on his face. You said you could help her. Does that mean? The devil nodded with a smile. Correct, I have an evil piece left unclaimed. A suddenly hostile atmosphere filled the area as Issei and Deodora turned to see Morrigan and Scathach glaring at the devil. Leave now, devil, and take those abominations you call evil pieces with you, growled the goddess of death. Morrigan, Scathach, what are you doing? He can save Asia, cried Issei as he jumped to his feet. Both Celts gained dark expressions as they turned to him. So you would condemn your friend to a life of slavery? Asked Scathach. She would be my servant, not slave, argued Deodora. Call it what you will, devil. The result is still the same, growled Morrigan. So you would rather she just die, replied Issei in outrage. Issei, said Scathach, drawing the teen's attention and making him flinch under her unyielding gaze. Say he resurrects her as a devil, what happens next? I'll look after her, shouted the teen. The immortal witch slowly walked over Issei until they were inches apart, her deep red eyes burrowing into his. And what happens when you die? What do you mean? Asked Issei with a frown. Devils have an extremely long lifetime, often reaching into the thousands of years. So what happens when you're nothing but ashes and dust, replied Scathach. The witch then broke eye contact as she stared at Asia's body with a sad expression on her face. She will be left in solitude, all alone, unable to even pray to her god for comfort, simply waiting for death to claim her. Scathach frowned Issei as the hostility left his eyes, and he stared at the witch, who then turned back to face him, shocking the teen as he saw the deep sadness hidden behind those crimson orbs. That is no mercy, Issei, that is a torture, she finished with complete certainty in her voice. The teen just looked between Asia's body and Scathach before he sighed and knelt down to close the nun's eyes. Sorry, Asia, looks like I won't be able to take care of you after all. I'm a pretty terrible friend, aren't I? Tears fell down his cheeks as Issei turned back to the devil. Sorry, Deodora, but I'm going to refuse your offer. What, you just let her die? What kind of friend are you? Snarled the devil. Please, Deodora, just go, asked Issei, softly. The devil just gained an angry expression as he pushed Issei away from the nun's body and grabbed an odd-looking piece. Fine, I don't need your permission anyway. However, before he had moved more than an inch, Deodora felt something hit him and then was sent flying into the brick wall of a nearby building, cracking the bricks upon impact. Groaning, the devil got back to his feet to see Scathach glaring at him as she stood protectively between him and Issei, Gibalg ready to claim another life. You heard him, devil. Leave now or I will take matters into my own hands, growled the witch as she fixed him with a stare that promised nothing but death. How dare you all have you know that my older brother is Adjika Beelzebub, one of the Mao, one of the strongest among us devils? You wouldn't dare touch me, informed Deodora, bringing a fearful look to Morrigan's face as she stared at Scathach. The witch just had a scarily grin on her face as she stared at the devil. So your brother is strong, is he? She asked, curiously. He is considered a superclass devil. His power even exceeds the original 4 Mao. In fact, the only other devil to be in this class is Sirzech Lucifer himself, boasted Deodora, making Morrigan pale as she realized what would happen next. Scathach just disappeared in a blur of movement before she reappeared in front of the devil, Gibalg resting above his heart. That's good, I've been looking for a strong opponent. Your brother sounds promising. Gibalg suddenly began glowing with a crimson light as the spear began releasing its lust, causing Deodora to fearfully look at Scathach's excited expression. If I kill his younger brother, then the Mao is sure to fight me, isn't he? Morrigan swallowed fearfully as she realized that there was no stopping the witch now, and there was no way the devils would take to the killing of one of their Mao's siblings lightly. A war between the Celts and devils, all because of her. Looks like Lug was right about Scathach after all. Damn it, raged the goddess, as she watched what would be the catalyst of the next great supernatural war. Scathach, stop, ordered a male voice. Everyone turned back to see Issei picking himself up from the ground as he walked over to the witch. Scathach, enough has been spilt this day without you adding more just to pick fights. Let him go. Scathach stared at the teen with a frown. Scathach, please, just let him go. We have to bury Asia anyway, pleaded Issei sadly. Morrigan just watched in complete shock as Scathach looked between Issei and the devil before she sighed and the crimson light from Gibalg died down. Removing her spear from Deodora's, the witch backed up as the lust surrounding the area disappeared. No way. The immortal witch abandoning a fight? That's a miracle, thought the goddess as her jaw dropped, making Scathach and Issei give her confused expressions. I'll remember this, Celts, hissed Deodora before a magic circle appeared beneath him and he teleported away. Hopefully he brings his brother next time, mused the witch, wishfully. As the near crisis was averted, Morrigan finally snapped back to the present as she saw Issei standing over Asia's body motionlessly, and frowned. She could do it. After all, the teen just averted a war because of her, so she did owe him, even if he did it unknowingly. Her decision made Morrigan sigh as she began charging up her reserves of power, drawing the attention of Scathach, whose eyes narrowed as the goddess began approaching Issei. Morrigan, she's been dead for too long. UNLESS. You plan to use that, don't you? Frowned Scathach as her companion nodded. Morrigan, are you sure about this? You know this will blow our cover, and Dagda will not be happy, warned Scathach as the goddess walked up to Asia's dead body. The goddess of death just sighed and nodded. I'm aware, but I know how it feels to let a loved one die. I don't want the kid to feel that, besides I owe him now. Upon hearing this, the crying Issei looked up at Morrigan in confusion before he felt Scathach drag him away from Asia's body, unable to do anything but watch as the witch dragged him to a safe distance. Feeling her hand let go, Issei struggled to his feet, only for Scathach to push him back to the ground. Trust me, Issei, it's better if you're not standing for this. The teen was about to respond when he froze in fear, his legs going weak and his body trembling as an aura of death filled the area. Swallowing shallowly, Issei turned to find the source of this aura, only to see Morrigan glowing a deep black as raven feathers began sprouting from her flesh. By the power of the Trinity Goddess of the Tuatha De Danann, in the name of Bodibi, Matcha and Anand, I demand passage through the pathways of life and death, intoned the goddess, her voice resonating power and sounding as if three people were speaking at once. Suddenly the ground shook as Issei saw a massive doorway erupt from the earth, giving off a very chilling aura that pressed down on the human and nearly knocked him unconscious. Fighting off the effects as best he could, Issei examined the doorway and found it looked to be made entirely from what seemed like silver branches. What is that? He asked, fearfully. It is the doorway to the world of incarnations, the world that governs both life and death, the entrance to the path of death and the path of life, explained Scathach as they both saw a small light begin to form in the doorway. The goddess who cast away fertility, sovereignty and her connection to the very earth itself. The goddess who exchanged them all for death, destruction, strife, fate and war. The goddess who was once three and became one, now opens the passage to her domain, chanted Morrigan, her voice getting louder by the second. The two observers just watched as the light forming in the doorway suddenly grew until it covered the entire archway before turning to a deep black. It almost reminded Issei of a black hole as he stared into its fathomless depths, only to snap out of his trance as he felt Scathach shake him slightly. What's going on? He asked the immortal witch. She's reincarnating your friend, informed Scathach. She's reviving Asia, exclaimed Issei hopefully. By my authority, hear me, wandering soul. The path of death is now close to you, hear the call of the Morrigan, and by my command return to the path of life, called the goddess, and Issei saw what looked like two silver rings fade into existence around Asia's fingers as the goddess lifted the body in her arms. Scathach just frowned as she watched this, in a manner of speaking. Yes, your friend had been dead too long for her normal methods to work, so instead she's changing your friend's predetermined reincarnation pattern and returning her soul to the world of the living, essentially letting her skip the quest, so to speak. Morrigan then carried the body over to the silver branch doorway before placing Asia's body inside the portal, causing Issei to fall to the ground from the power now pressing down on him. Scathach seemed unaffected as she drew a rune into the ground, and instantly Issei felt the pressure around him vanish as he got back to his feet. The goddess of death has made her declaration. Your time has yet to come, Asia Argento. I offer you a catalyst. Now return to the flesh which you born with. In the name of the Morrigan, the phantom queen of the Celts, I command you, finished Morrigan as she withdrew Asia's body from the portal. The two of them just watched as the silver branch doorway receded back into the earth and Morrigan placed Asia's body gently on the ground before collapsing. Issei rushed over to the two of them and tears of joy appeared on his face as he saw Asia's body breathing softly. Her wound seemingly vanished. Realizing that she was okay, he walked over to the collapsed Morrigan and saw Scathach picking her up from the ground before slinging the goddess across her shoulders. Come on, we should get back. After that display, Morrigan will be wanted back by her fellow Celts. And we have some things that we need to discuss before then, ordered the witch as Issei nodded and picked up Asia. Morrigan, are you sure you're okay? Asked Issei in concern. I'm fine, Issei, just a little tired. Manipulating souls is very exhausting, even for someone like myself, replied the goddess. Man, just how powerful are devils if their evil pieces can do things like that by themselves, murmured the teen. Scathach just shook her head. Issei, I told you, there is a difference between resurrecting someone and reincarnating them. Morrigan nodded. Those infernal artifacts can only revive someone if their soul has yet to embark on the path of death. Something to be eternally grateful for. How is Asia? Asked the teen, thinking back to the nun now resting in his room. The goddess just gave him a tired smile. Don't worry, Issei, she'll be fine. She's a surprisingly strong soul. Give it a day and she'll be back to normal. I see. So what is it you two wanted to talk to me about? Replied the teen. The two Celts just glanced at each other before Scathach stepped forward. Issei, we don't have much time, so please we need to know. How are you connected to Kuchulain? Is he still alive? Where did you get your Gibalg? Is this why you sought me out? Asked the teen. The two Celts nodded. Remember what I told you about that rune necklace? You didn't think we wouldn't notice Gibalg's use. Just be grateful that it was Morrigan that was sent to investigate. Issei frowned as he debated his options. He could just lie or say that he didn't know. It would definitely be the safer option. But after what they've done for me, it just doesn't feel right to lie to them like that. Oi, Ddraig, what should I do? He asked the dragon. A smile spread across his face. Thanks, Ddraig. You know, one of these days I'll have to ask you about these others you keep mentioning. Ddraig just laughed softly in amusement at Issei's reply before the dragon answered. I have my suspicions, he replied with a smirk. Still, I would like to meet them at some point. I'm going to have some mean words with Lancer after this. Seeing that the two Celts were still staring at him, Issei took a deep breath as he came to a decision. A smirk grew on his face as he channeled a bit of Zelrich. It's quite simple really. Kuchulain and the rest of the souls in these cards come from another world, he stated in amusement. His good mood lasted a grand total of 3 seconds before he felt hostile atmosphere fill the room as the two Celts were surrounded by demonic black auras. You're such a funny boy, aren't you, Issei? I thought I taught you to stop making those kind of jokes during our sparring session, growled Scathach. Suddenly Gibalg appeared in the witch's hand as she gave Issei a chilling smile. It looks like you need a reminder of that lesson. Issei groaned in pain as he got up from his couch and went to go check on Asia, who was still resting in his room. Feeling his body still aching from numerous bruises that dotted his body, did those two have to be so violent? It was just a joke. Still, at least he managed to calm them down before they damaged anything more permanently, though not from a lack of trying. Once they'd calmed down, the teen explained what he knew about the class cards, heroic spirits, and even the Holy Grail War. In fact, the only thing he left out was Zelrich, simply saying that the cards were given to him by an old friend who'd passed away. The two Celts seemed skeptical at first, but after a grilling interrogation by them, which Issei could actually answer thanks to Ddraig and the others, they seemed to believe it. To say that the Holy Grail Wars outraged Morrigan and Scathach was the understatement of the century, the two Celts calling it an abomination of a ritual. Issei could understand why, if they hated devils for using evil pieces, then summoning hero spirits from beyond the grave as familiars was like a slap to the face for them. Even more so since they found out about Kuchulain's master in his last war. He almost felt sorry for the man as both Scathach and Morrigan began discussing ways to get there and kill him personally. Yep, definitely not telling them about Zelrich and Kaleidoscope, decided Issei as he began walking over to the stairs when he spotted a familiar purple-haired girl sitting outside and staring up at the moon. Hey Scathach, you're up late, greeted Issei softly as he approached the witch. Scathach turned to face him as a sad smile spread across her face. Just thinking about what you said, it's hard to believe that there's another world. Another me. I wonder if she got her wish. Oh, stated the teen, unhelpfully before he walked over to her and sat down beside the witch. Technically there's an infinite number of worlds, not just one. But remember that while there may be many Scathaches, there is only one of you. That hasn't changed. I find that it's better if you think of it that way. No sense pondering on how things might have been different, replied the teen as he placed a hand on her shoulder. I see, murmured the witch, softly and plunging the two into silence. Looking around, Issei noticed the lack of a certain goddess, whereas Morrigan, you two are rarely apart from each other. She's getting ready to go back to the other world. After her display here, Dagda will want to speak to her, informed Scathach, making a worried expression appear on his face. Seeing his expression, the witch just laughed. Oh, don't be like that. Morrigan knows how to keep a secret. She won't tell anyone about you except Lug. No need to give him false hope, you know. Issei just nodded, a guilty expression appearing on his face. Yeah, poor guy. Can you tell him I'm sorry for that when you see him? Scathach's face suddenly gained a manipulative grin that made Issei's heart sink. Oh, I'm not going. What, but I thought you two were only here to figure out the Kuchulain connection. Besides, aren't you both in trouble with this Dagda guy? Frowned Issei in confusion. Dagda may be the leader of the Celts, but I work with them, not for them. He has no power over me and he knows it. Besides, explained the witch with a hostile growl. Besides, prompted the teen, curiously. Scathach gave the teen another grin as she stared at his arm. I hear that dragons tend to attract all kinds of powerful entities. Who knows, maybe if I stick around you long enough, I'll find someone who can grant me my wish. Plus, I don't want to miss any time with my new sparring buddy. Issei was silent as he stared at the witch with a look of pity in his eyes. Scathach, about your wish ... Is it true that you want to die? Much to his disappointment, Scathach just nodded her head. That's right, I've lived a long time, Issei. Far longer than I've wanted. I'm ready for death. But that just seems wrong, to want to give up your life like that, argued Issei, causing the witch to smile sadly at him. Do you remember what Morrigan told you, Issei, when death has no meaning? Is life really that fulfilling? Replied Scathach as she turned back to look at the moon. But what about all the experiences that you'll never have, the possible events that await you in the future? Shoot back the teen, making Scathach sigh. Issei, I appreciate what you're doing, but I can tell you right now that there is nothing I haven't already experienced left waiting for me in this world. No adventure, no excitement, no beauty, no change, just the same old thing repeating itself over and over again in an endless cycle, she responded, wistfully. Do you truly believe that? Scathach asked Issei as he looked at her with a familiar expression, bringing memories to the front of the witch's mind. Do you truly believe that? Scathach asked the blue-haired man. Scathach just sighed at the question. I don't believe it, Satanta, I know it. The man just fixed her with a sad expression. I see, take care then, Scathach. I hope that one day you are given your wish. These two, so alike in so many ways, she thought with sad smile as once again the past began to repeat itself in front of her. I don't believe it, Issei, I know it, she said with a sigh, waiting for the predictable response. Then you're an idiot, replied Issei with certainty, causing Scathach's eyes to widen in shock as she turned to face him. Seeing this, the teen continued, tell me, Scathach, have you ever been to school before? Have you ever been out of the other world in centuries? Do you know with 100% certainty that everything will repeat itself in exactly the same way? The immortal witch was silent as she just stared at him in utter shock, making Issei sigh as he looked up to the starry night sky with an amused smile on his face. An annoying old man once told me something. Tell me, Scathach, when you think of alternate realities, what do you think of? Snapping out of her shock, the witch frowned as she joined his stargazing, the two of them staring up at the sky as Scathach replied, a world that is exactly the same. Issei just nodded, and you would be right for the most part. Most worlds are the same except for just a single difference. A single person's life has changed slightly and suddenly it's a new world, even if only a select few are affected. The teen then lay down on his back as a shooting star flew over the sky, bringing a smile to his face as he gestured for Scathach to do the same. Frowning, the witch lay down next to Issei and stared at him in confusion as the teen continued his speech. However, sometimes that one little change is just a signal of something much greater. The calm before the storm is bit by bit. That one insignificant difference suddenly changes everything around you. These small little differences eventually adding up to create something entirely different from what you used to know, he replied with a smirk. Scathach sat up from the ground as she turned to face him with a confused look on her face. Issei, why are you telling me this? The teen just got up from the ground and placed a reassuring hand on the witch's shoulder. Scathach, while the past may repeat itself, there are always small changes to them. You just have to be willing to look for them. Don't focus on how everything is the same, but rather how everything is different. You have the opportunity to observe people as time goes on. Why waste it? The witch was silent before a soft laughter escaped her lips as she smiled at him. This old man was truly a wise one. The damn troll does have his moments, agreed Issei, grudgingly. The pair then fell into a comfortable silence as they turned back to the sky, each absorbed in their thoughts. Eventually the silence was broken as Scathach felt Issei's hand leave her shoulder, making the witch turn to see him give her a determined stare. Scathach, I promise you that I will make your life have meaning again. I will make you see that you should never just give up on life like that, he promised without a hint of uncertainty in his voice. Issei, why do you care so much about this? It's my choice after all, frowned Scathach in confusion. Because Scathach, I care about you. You and Morrigan both. You helped me when I needed it and now I'm going to return the favor. Besides, trailed off Issei, not noticing the witch's eyes widen slightly. Besides, prompted the witch, bringing an embarrassed smile to Issei's face. Besides, a pretty girl like you shouldn't have such a sad expression on your face. It looks much better with a happy smile, replied the teen as Scathach quickly looked away, hiding her face from view. Don't ask for the impossible, Issei ... but thank you, murmured the witch as a true smile spread across her face, a light blush forming on her cheeks. What was that? Asked the oblivious Issei. I said you should head off to bed, it's getting late after all. Don't worry, I'll check on your friend, lied the smiling Scathach. Issei just shrugged his shoulders as he got up from the ground. If you say so, Knight Scathach, give my regards and thanks to Morrigan if you see her. Of course, oh, and Issei. Catch, replied Scathach as she threw something at him. Try not to break it this time, she scolded with a smile as Issei looked down and saw another rune necklace in his hands. Not my fault, the last one was made with shoddy craftsmanship, he replied before head back into the house, causing Scathach to laugh softly as she looked back up at the stars. One small difference, huh, murmured the witch with a thoughtful expression on her face. High above the Hayadu residence, the crow that had watched the entire exchange smiled before it flew away, eventually disappearing with a flash of light. The Celtic sun god, Lug, just sighed as he ordered another round of drinks. What the hell was she thinking? All that work we put into the plan and she ruins it in only a few days. As his drinks arrived, the Celt heard the sound of the door opening before he saw a familiar figure walk over to him and sit down at his table. Lug, we need to talk, said Morrigan, causing Lug to put his drink down. That we do, so tell me, how was your vacation, Morrigana? Did you and your sister enjoy school? He teased, only for his eyes to widen as he saw Morrigan grab his drink from him before sculling it in one go. That bad, how, he replied, after getting over his shock of seeing Morrigan actually drinking. The goddess' only response was to grab another of his drinks before chugging it down as well, her companion just watching as she downed all his drinks in stunned silence. Eventually she ran out of alcohol and ordered another round, stunning everyone in the castle into silence. I swear, Lug, Issei is a walking disaster. His luck doesn't just rival Ku Chulane's, it surpasses it. Honestly, how the hell can a teenage boy stumble across a murder, be attacked and burn down a whole house in only 20 minutes? She complained to her fellow god, a light flush on her cheeks. A grin spread across Lug's face as he replied, so the boy's name is Issei, is it? I can't wait to meet him. I haven't seen you act like this in years. To think there's a human that can even break the Morrigan herself out of her shell. He just seems to have that effect on people. Lug, hell, even Scathach has become tolerable when he's around, shrugged Morrigan. A frown suddenly crossed the sun god's face. Speaking of the witch, where is she? Still with Issei, she decided to remain there with him for now, replied the goddess. Are you sure that's a good idea, leaving her unsupervised like that? Morrigan, you know what she's like, and Dagda is already furious with us? Asked Lug, worriedly. Hic, don't worry, she won't start anything. Besides, it's not like I could force her to come with me, hiccuped the goddess with a wave of her hand. But how can you be so sure? Questioned her companion, now starting to get a bit worried about the goddess' state. Morrigan just stared at the alcohol swirling in her mug as she replied without a trace of uncertainty in her voice, because Issei won't let her. And you think this boy can get her to give up on her wish? What makes you say that? Scoffed Lug. Morrigan just thought back to the incident with the devil before she remembered Issei and Scathach's private discussion, picturing the thoughtful look on the witch's face as Issei left. The goddess then gave Lug an amused smile, just a feeling. Call it a woman's intuition. Morrigan, if you're trying to reassure me, then you're doing a terrible job, sighed Lug. Lug, sometimes you need to take a leaf out of humans' books and just have faith that everything will turn out okay in the end, replied Morrigan as she held one of her drinks out to him. Lug just sighed as he accepted the mug from her. All right, Morrigan, if you say so, but you're going to be the one that tells Dagda about this. Joy, deadpanned the goddess. The two then sat there drinking for a couple of minutes before Lug spoke up again, the expression on his face instantly sobering Morrigan up completely. Morrigan, I need to know, what the hell were you two thinking, revealing yourselves like that? Do you know how long I had to listen? Dagda rage about how we nearly caused a war with the Shinto pantheon by sneaking into Japan, he growled. There were some extenuating circumstances, replied Morrigan, refusing to meet his eyes. Lug just raised his eyebrows. Oh, and were these circumstances worth it? We blew our cover, freed Scathach, and even gave her Gibal. All for it to go to waste in only a couple days, all our hard work down the drain, and now we have both the Shinto pantheon as well as Dagda watching our every move. Considering I got the truth from Issei about Kuchulain, I would say it was worth it, concluded Morrigan with a smirk. The truth, repeated Lug in confusion. That's right, the truth, and trust me, we're both going to need more drinks before this is over, sighed Morrigan. Before what is over? Asked a male voice, making both the gods' eyes widen. The two of them turned to see Dagda as well as a woman wearing a golden kimono with suns woven into it standing before them, both looking very displeased as the entire room went deathly quiet. Dagda, greeted Morrigan, stiffly with a nod. Morrigan, replied Dagda, returning the gesture. What brings the god of life himself to our little welcome back party? She asked with a frown on her face. Indeed, you look to be having quite the celebration, Morrigan. I was under the impression that you didn't drink, he replied, eyeing the numerous empty mugs surrounding the goddess of death. Only on special occasions, shrugged Morrigan. Dagda just nodded his head as his eyes narrowed on her own. I see. Well, we heard you were back from your vacation to Japan and wanted to come speak with you. Since when did you care about my personal life, Dagda? You lost that right long ago, retorted the goddess with a frown. Since you decided to infiltrate my territory, growled the kimono-wearing female. Morrigan, meet Amaterasu. She apparently has some questions for you regarding your stay in Japan, introduced Dagda. Lug and Morrigan were quiet before the Celtic sun god turned to his companion with a bemused smile. Morrigan, are you sure you didn't bring the kid's luck home with you? Berserker includes state, STR, C+, Con, C, AGI, C, MGI, C, LCK, D, Mad Enhancement, N, A. Usually at a B ranking, this ability is sealed when in the include state by the class card in order to protect Issei's mind. However, the card is not able to completely negate the effect of this skill. Because of this, when Issei includes the Berserker card, he will receive feelings of extreme rage and anger. This skill increases the ranking of all basic stats by 1 but at the cost of the user's sanity. Since the skill has been sealed, this enhancement is no longer in effect. Battle Continuation, B. Unlike Kuchulain, whose battle continuation came from his unwavering fighting spirit, Heracle's ability instead comes from his famed ability to endure anything the gods threw at him. This ability functions the same as Kuchulain's, except exhaustion is no longer a problem for Issei. Bravery, a plus. The ability to negate mental interference such as pressure, confusion, and fascination. Heracle's ability also allows him to increase his damage dealt when in melee. However, this ability is locked when under the influence of Mad Enhancement. Divinity, B. Heracles was a demigod born from the Greek god Zeus, and upon dying, he was granted a place on Mount Olympus and acknowledged as a god by his father. Because of this, he has divinity equaling a god's, and a large portion of this divinity is granted to Issei when he includes the card. Eye of Mind, C. A natural sixth sense that a hero is born with and later fine-tuned through experience in multiple battles. It is a natural talent to avoid danger that is so engraved into the hero that it is active even when under the maddened state from Mad Enhancement. This helps Issei to see through half-hearted feints and makes him immune to most ambushes. However, due to the reduced rank and Issei's lack of experience, it is not perfect and can be fooled. 9 lives. The shooting 100 heads, C a plus. Type, depends on the target. Maximum number of targets, 1. The most trusted of all of Heracle's noble phantasms, it originally had the form of a bow and arrow, which was used to slay the Hydra, an immortal 9-headed serpent. After slaying the Hydra, this technique became a noble phantasm that could then be utilized by other weapons, including swords and even shields. When this technique is used, it allows the user to release a high-speed attack that consists of 9 consecutive strikes that are so fast they appear to be overlapping. This noble phantasm is lost when under the influence of mad enhancement. God's Hand, C. Type, Anti-Unit. Maximum number of targets, 1. The great hero Heracles underwent 12 labors as a form of atonement for murdering his family in a maddened rage that was induced by the jealous goddess Hera. Upon his completion of all 12 labors, the gods rewarded him with an immortal body. His skin became impervious to all mundane weapons, and he gained multiple lives that could not be taken by the same method twice, representing each labor that the hero completed. These lives can be regained at a rate of 2 lives every 3 days, and regardless of whether or not the attack kills him, the hero will gain an immunity to the attack or weapon after encountering it for the first time. These immunities were set after the Issei exits the install or include state. Due to this noble phantasm's reduced ranking, Issei only has protection from weapons that are C rank and below. The teen also only has 3 lives instead of the hero's original 12 that need to be taken. Arthur and his sister Lefay slowly approach their faction's hideout, ignoring the commotion being caused by Kuroka and Biku as the pair stared drinking. "Arthur, come share a drink with us," greeted Biku. "I'm afraid I cannot," replied the descendant. "Silly Biku, you know he's much too proper to let himself let loose like us." "Naya," laughed the Nekashu. Arthur just ignored her as he turned to Biku. "Have you seen Volley? He apparently wanted to talk to us." Biku just nodded and pointed off into the distance. "Wait until you see him. I haven't seen Volley act like that in a long while." "What do you mean?" asked Lefay, curiously. "You'll see," replied Biku with a wave of his hand as the pair returned to their drinking. The 2 Pendragon descendants frowned as they headed off into the direction that their friend pointed to and spotted Volley leaning against a tree. Not too unusual, except for his expression. Arthur could count the number of times he'd seen the Hakuryuku smile like that on a single hand. Again, the 2 Pendragon siblings exchanged looks before they approached him. "Volley, you asked to see us," said Arthur, causing Volley to turn and face them. "Arthur, Lefay, indeed I wish to discuss something with you," answered the Hakuryuku with a nod. "Volley, you look oddly happy. Did something good happen?" asked Lefay, tilting her head in confusion. "We have a new recruit for Kao's brigade," informed Volley with a smile still wide on his face. "Oh, I never expected you of all people to be happy about something like that." "Who is it?" replied Arthur, frowning in confusion. "Just an unimportant devil of the Astaroth clan," answered the Hakuryuku with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Then what has put you in such a good mood?" questioned Arthur as his frown deepened. "It was the information he gave us upon joining our faction," explained Volley, making Arthur's eyebrows raise. "And what might that be?" he asked, as Lefay just looked between the 2 of them in confusion. "The Sekiryute has been found," announced Volley, his smile widening to extreme proportions. Arthur's eyes widened in surprise at this. "Truly so, your rival has finally revealed themselves. Who are they? They must be pretty impressive if you're this excited." "I don't know much, but apparently he's a human who has been living a normal life in the Gremory territory," making Arthur's frown return to his face. "A human? Forgive me, Volley, but I fail to see how a normal human could make you act like this. Besides, the devils are aware of him now. I doubt they will just leave him be," he informed the Hakuryuku. Volley shook his head. "Actually, the devils are still none the wiser about him. Our recruit didn't inform them about him. After all, it would raise quite a few questions about why he was in Gremory territory unannounced." "And you're mistaken, he's not normal, Arthur. This human single-handedly drove Cockabeel's fallen angels out of his hometown, all without the devils knowing." A thoughtful expression appeared on Arthur's face. "That is impressive, I'll admit. However, Volley, those fallen were weak. They were nothing compared to us. There's something else, isn't there?" The Hakuryuku nodded. "Indeed, apparently he has already been claimed by the Celtic pantheon." Both Lefay and Arthur adopted expressions of pure shock at this news. The Celts, so they've finally ended their isolation. But why would they go all the way to Shinto territory for this boy? There was an excited look in the Hakuryuku's eyes as he replied, "Why indeed, apparently the boy is a descendant of Kuchulain himself, the son of Celtic son Lug... who's one of the 10 strongest beings in the world." The 2 Pendragon siblings' shocked expressions grew even larger. "Volley, are you sure about that? As far as we know, Kuchulain never had any living descendants. One of the fallen angels called him the bastard child of Kuchulain," reported Volley. "They could have been mistaken," pointed out Lefay, causing Volley to nod his head. "True, however, he is both Celtic goddess of death, Morrigan, as well as the immortal witch, Scathach, herself staying with him. A normal human could never manage that," informed the Hakuryuku. "I see, a descendant of the Shield of Ulster. That must have caught Cow's attention," murmured Arthur with a heavy sigh. A soft laugh escaped Volley's lips. "Indeed, from what I heard he's trying to find out who this boy is. Unfortunately, we only have his first name. Plus, none of us can afford to be spotted stirring up trouble yet, so for now we've been ordered to leave him be." The Hakuryuku paused at this before his eyes narrowed on the 2 Pendragon siblings. "And that leads me to why I asked you here. I have need of the 2 of your services." What is it, Volley asked Arthur. You are aware of Cockabeel's plan with the Excaliburs, questioned Volley, causing the two of them to nod their heads. Of course, there is not anyone in Kao's brigade who isn't. There's also no one that thinks it will work, replied Arthur as a confused expression appeared on his face. True, his plan is doomed to fail, especially after the loses my rival inflicted on his pawns. Cockabeel has been reaching out for more personal and is in need of a skilled swordsman, agreed Volley. You want me to join him, guessed Arthur, his confused expression never leaving his face. I want you both to. It will allow you to visit Kuo without angering our colleagues and let you search for my rival, explained Volley. You want me to test him, asked the descendant. You're a skilled fighter, Arthur. If he passes your test, then I'll know that what they are saying about him are true, answered the Hakuryuku. And what happens if Cockabeel actually succeeds? You know, as well as I, that we're relying on him to fail, questioned Arthur. If my rival and the devils are unable to stop him, then the Hakuryuku will step in to defeat Cockabeel and chase off the two rogue members of the Pendragon household, redeeming the Grigori and ensuring that I'm present for the meeting as Isay plans, replied Volley, making a sigh escape from Arthur. I see, but we'll need a good reason to give to Cockabeel for the both of us wanting to suddenly join his forces, replied the descendant with a frown. Volley smiled at him again. We already have one, Arthur. What descendant of the King of Knights himself wouldn't want to see his ancestor's sword remade? To wield Excalibur at its true glory. True, so what's the name of this boy I should be investigating, conceded Arthur, realizing that such a lie would be easily believable. His name is Isay. I'll give you the file we have on him. It contains what little we know about him, as well as the numerous theories we've made about the human, answered Volley. Understood. If you'll excuse us, my sister and I have to contact a certain fallen angel, acknowledged Arthur as the two Pendragon members walked away. I'm looking forward to see how you fight, my rival, grinned the Hakuryuku as a white wings briefly erupted from his back. It's nice to meet you, Lady Amaterasu, greeted Morrigan as she bowed before the Shinto goddess. Yeah, I'm always happy to meet a fellow sun god, agreed Lug as he just nodded towards her. I wish I could say the same about you too, growled Amaterasu, causing the two of them to share a concerned glance with each other. With all due respect, Lady Amaterasu, what have we done to earn your ire? Questioned the Celtic goddess, a frown appearing on her face. Don't play dumb with me, Morrigan. Your leader informed me of the situation when I went to meet him, frowned the Shinto goddess. Did he now? Stated Lug, giving his friend a betrayed look. Dagda just sighed at the looks he was getting from the two of them. I told you, Lug, if this situation got out of hand, then I would put an end to it. Don't look so surprised, Lug. Dagda likes to betray the people closest to him, snarled Morrigan, causing Dagda to flinch. Morrigan, you know why I had to do that? He sighed, tiredly. And that's supposed to make me feel better, she growled, and suddenly the goddess was surrounded by a black aura as feathers began sprouting off her flesh. Dagda just glared at her before he was surrounded by a white outline that began pulsing against the black aura, the entire hall shaking at the forces that were starting to be unleashed. The rest of the drinkers in the castle hall just glanced at each other before sculling the last of the drinks and evacuating the halls. Are sure you want to do this, Morrigan? Remember who taught you everything you know, warned Dagda as a massive club materialized in his hands. Enough, roared Lug, and immediately the temperature around the gods skyrocketed as the Celtic sun god rose from his seat, his power instantly engulfing the energy being given off by the other two Celts. Everyone turned their attention to Lug as they saw him surrounded by a bright orange and red flames. Dagda, Morrigan, perhaps we shouldn't be discussing these things when we have a guest from the Shinto pantheon present. Dagda's eyes widened slightly before an ashamed expression spread across his face as he sat back down and turned back to the spectating Shinto goddess. Indeed, my apologies, Lady Amaterasu. It is fine, Dagda. The Shinto pantheon is no stranger to infighting. Shall we get back to purpose of the meeting? Replied the still standing Amaterasu, never taking her eyes off Lug as the chaotic atmosphere began to subside. Of course, please have a seat, offered Dagda, causing the member of the Shinto pantheon to take the seat next to him. So that's the power of the Celtic sun god. It would seem the tales about him were not exaggerated after all, she thought, wearily. The four of them were silent as Lug and Morrigan sat on one side, while Amaterasu and Dagda sat on the other. First off, I want to state that the actions of Morrigan, Lug, and the witch Scathach were not sanctioned or supported by the Celtic pantheon, announced the leader of the Celts. The Shinto god nodded. I'm aware, Dagda. What I want to know is why they were in my territory. Your territory, scoffed Morrigan. I think the devils would beg to differ there. They only exist because we allow it, Celt, and you know that, growled Amaterasu. Morrigan just shrugged. If you're willing to let devils in your territory, then I see no reason why we should be any different, unless you think that we're inferior to them. Stop putting words in my mouth, Celt. The fact that I'm here discussing this with you personally should show the respect I have for the Celtic pantheon, replied the Shinto goddess as hostility began emanating off her. Seeing this, Lug quickly stood up and tried to calm down the two goddesses. Lady Amaterasu, we understand that you're angry at us, but should it really go this far? In fact, you should be proud. The splendors of your country are so vast that even the Phantom Queen of the Celts decided to head there for a vacation. Amaterasu's glare moved off Morrigan and instead found themselves boring into Lug's head. You think I'm angry about that? Morrigan and Lug exchanged another glance before the goddess of death spoke up. Forgive me, Lady Amaterasu, but what exactly are you angry about? Amaterasu slammed a fist onto their table as she replied, "You helped the Godslayer infiltrate my country, not only that, but you even left her there completely unsupervised. If you don't tell me why you did this, then I will assume the worst ... and respond in kind. That ... was an unfortunate blunder on our part. Forgive us, we weren't trying to send a message to the Shinto pantheon," soothed Lug diplomatically. "Then what were you doing?" asked the Shinto god as she began to calm down. "All right, fine. I'll tell you the real reason that we did this," sighed Morrigan as she folded her hands over the table. "Real reason?" frowned Amaterasu. "Indeed. Dagda, do you remember the second Gibalg we detected?" replied Morrigan, turning to face the leader of the Celts. "A second Gibalg?" repeated the Shinto sun god, as Dagda nodded and turned to face her. "Nearly a week ago we detected what seemed like our cursed spear appear out of nowhere and disappear without a trace, almost as if it had vanished off the face of the earth," explained Dagda, causing Amaterasu's eyes to widen slightly in recognition. "It disappeared without a trace, are you sure?" she replied, frantically. The three Celts frowned at her reaction before Dagda replied, "Positive." After that, Morrigan volunteered to investigate it. "I tracked it back to the Shinto territory and decided to investigate," informed Morrigan as she took over the story. "Why didn't you just inform us about your visit? We would have allowed it for something like this," asked Amaterasu. The Celtic goddess just sighed tiredly. "At the time I was suspicious of the Shinto pantheon. After all, it did happen in your territory. You thought we were responsible for it." "I see. Tell me, what did you investigation find?" questioned Amaterasu, eagerly. "Why do you want to know?" asked Morrigan in return. "We had a similar incident with one of our artifacts. It's not impossible that the two are related," lied Amaterasu, without missing a beat. "So they did detect Issei?" "Not well," thought Morrigan worriedly as she plastered a blank expression on her face. "I sincerely doubt they are related, Amaterasu. You see, we found a descendant of Ku Chulainn in your territory," she lied, causing both Dagda and Lug to spit out their drinks in shock. "A descendant of Ku Chulainn? Impossible," exclaimed the Celtic god of life. "Now you see why we were being so secretive about this, Dagda. After all, you told us that we couldn't afford in fighting," sighed Lug as he immediately tried to hide his shock. "So you're telling me that a descendant of a Celtic demigod is currently living in my territory without me knowing?" "Forgive me, Morrigan, but I find that highly unlikely," replied Amaterasu as she leveled a suspicious glare at the Celt. Morrigan just shrugged her shoulders again. "Unlikely or not, it's the truth." "And what's Scathach's role in all this?" questioned Dagda. "We can't be around him all the time, so she's serving as a bodyguard and mentor for the kid. Cost us a hefty price to do so," lied Lug, a sad expression on his face. Gibalg guessed his friend, remembering the spear being missing from the vault and causing Lug to nod. "Fine, but I have one last question for you, Morrigan," replied Amaterasu, her eyes never leaving the Celts. "And what might that be?" asked Morrigan. "Does the name Tamamo no Mi mean anything to you?" questioned Amaterasu, her eyes narrowing slightly as she saw a tiny flinch from the goddess. "Should we Celts have been out of the loop for a while?" answered Morrigan. A small growl came from Amaterasu as she replied, "I just find the timing of your visit to be a little too convenient for my liking." A smug grin spread across Morrigan's face. "I would ask you to stop making baseless accusations, Amaterasu, unless of course you have more proof than simple circumstantial evidence." "I see. In that case I'll take my leave then. However, Morrigan, if you ever enter my territory without my permission again, there will be consequences," warned the Shinto god as she got up from her chair. "Of course, I'll keep an eye on her." "Thank you for your understanding, Amaterasu," assured Dagda. The Shinto goddess just nodded her head before silently leaving the castle halls, as the three remained Celts to let out breaths they didn't know they were holding. "Well ... that went better than expected," commented Lug as he went to grab another drink. Dagda shook his head as a small, amused smirk appeared on his face. "Lug, just shut up and hand me that drink, would you? I'm going to need it." "Are you going to tell the others about the kid?" asked Lug as he handed the drink over to the Celtic god of life. Dagda was silent before he nodded his head. "I have no choice, Lug. The devils will find out sooner rather than later. However, I will tell them that he is currently under the protection of the immortal witch as well as the two of you as well. That should keep them from trying anything. But are you sure that Scathach won't cause trouble?" "Of course not. She is a Celt after all. However, I'm confident she won't cause an incident now that she has to take care of the boy," scoffed Morrigan. Dagda just fixed a tired look at Morrigan before he nodded. "I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'll trust you, Morrigan." Lug frowned as he stared at his friend's expression. "Oi, Dagda, what's wrong? You look exhausted." Dagda sculled his drink before replying. "After Morrigan's display, I've been receiving multiple messages from factions around the world, wanting to make connections now that the reclusive Celts have ended their isolation." "Not our problem," said Morrigan. Everyone could hear the smug satisfaction and amusement in her voice. Dagda just glared at her before an amused smile spread across his face, making Lug and Morrigan slightly worried. As he got up from the table, "Wrong, it is your problem now." "Congratulations, Lug. Morrigan, you two are now in charge of foreign affairs." "What?" cried Morrigan. "Dagda, you can't be serious," said Lug. "You two made this mess, Lug. Now you have to clean it up." "Think of it as your punishment," replied Dagda as he began walking towards the exit. "Better hope that Scathach doesn't make life hard for you. Have fun," he said with a smirk before closing the door behind him. Well, that was a thing, so a descendant of Ku Chulain Ha, commented Lug with raised eyebrows. Lug, follow me, I have things to tell you that aren't meant for unwelcome ears, ordered Morrigan with a frown on her face as she stood up. I see, lead the way then, Morrigan, replied Lug as he followed her out of the hall. The Shinto sun goddess was fuming as she arrived back home and was greeted by her brother Tsukayomi, whom took a step back at her hostile atmosphere. Amaterasu, how was your meeting with the Celts, he asked, causing a low growl to escape the goddess as she walked out to their garden and sat down in front of the pond. Informative, in more ways than one, she replied, watching her reflection in the still water. What do you mean, frowned Tsukayomi as he sat down next to her. Amaterasu fox ears twitched slightly as her eyes narrowed. That Celt, Morrigan, she knows something about that fragment we detected. She might even be the one hiding it. The moon god's jaw just dropped in an expression of utter shock. That's a bold accusation, Amaterasu, are you sure? Completely, I don't have any evidence right now, but my instincts are telling me that she's hiding something, replied Amaterasu with a nod, not a trace of uncertainty in her voice. Speaking of which, have you told Susanoo about the fragment yet? Questioned Tsukayomi. Of course not. Our brother has the patience, restraint, and subtlety of a child, you know that. Who knows what he'd do if he found out ... Why, answered the goddess, in confusion. Because he asked me about it while you were off with the Celts, replied the moon god. So he did sense it after all. What did you tell him? Sighed Amaterasu with a shake of her head. I told him that you had begun visiting the human world again, informed Tsukayomi, causing his sister to give him an approving nod. Good idea. That should keep him from doing anything reckless, agreed the goddess, only to frown as she saw the bitter expression appear on the moon god's face. Tsukayomi, what's wrong? Her brother sighed. I don't feel comfortable lying to him like this, Amaterasu. You didn't see his expression when I told him that. He was so proud and happy for you that he looked like a completely different person. Amaterasu just laughed. Tsukayomi, I think you're giving him too much credit. We both know what Susanoo is like. I guess ... So what's our next move? Replied the moon god sadly. For now we'll do nothing except continue to monitor the ley lines. Did any of our followers in Kyoto find anything? Ordered Amaterasu. Nothing but some strange activity in one of the areas the devils claimed, informed the moon god with a frown still on his face. Strange activity, repeated the goddess. Tsukayomi nodded. Yes, it was in the same place that we detected the Celt. Instantly Amaterasu's eyes narrowed as she spun to face him. What happened? Apparently, a group of rogue fallen angels had taken up residence there. Have all been wiped out. It seems the devils are just as clueless as we are about it, answered the moon god. Morrigan was likely the cause of it, stated the goddess, only to frown as her brother shook his head. That's what we thought as well, but... He trailed off, but prompted Amaterasu. The moon god had gave another tired sigh before he replied, while you were away, I got a message from Zeus asking if we had detecting anything off in our territory. What did he mean by off? She asked, curiously. Tsukayomi just shrugged. Apparently, he thought he detected the power of his son somewhere in our territory. The descendant of Heracles, why would he care about that? He never cared about the descendants before, muttered Amaterasu, causing him to shake his head. No, you're misunderstanding me. I said his son, not his descendant, informed Tsukayomi, making his sister's jaw drop. What, but that's not possible, Heracles, started the Shinto goddess, only to be interrupted by her brother. Is dead, I know. However, just a couple of days ago I received a similar message of Apollo and Artemis. At the time I didn't want to bother you with them and dismissed it as pure nonsense, but with Zeus asking, as well as the impossible fragment we detected. Tsukayomi again trailed off. Suddenly they don't seem to be that far-fetched any longer, finished Amaterasu as she stood up from the ground. Something is going on in our territory, Tsukayomi, and I want to find out what. So what do you want to do? Asked Tsukayomi with a worried expression. Find Scathach and the boy she's with. If they're involved with Morrigan, then I want to know how and why, replied Amaterasu as she began walking away, only to be stopped by Tsukayomi placing a hand on her shoulder. They're currently in the area the devils claim though, and not only that, but they are siblings of the Mau. I won't let you risk a conflict between us for something as trivial as this, Amaterasu. Until you find definitive proof, then you won't interfere with them, informed Tsukayomi. A low growl of frustration echoed from her before she took a deep breath. Very well, Tsukayomi, in that case I'm going to contact the Greeks. I think we would all benefit from comparing notes. Amaterasu, perhaps you should take a break from this investigation. You're beginning to act like our brother, requested her brother in concern. Oh please, I'm much more focused than that oaf, scoffed Amaterasu as she walked off. That's what worries me, murmured Tsukayomi, sadly. My son has brought home another foreign beauty. Truly this is a miracle, cried Mr. Hayato, causing the teen to sigh as his father engulfed the shocked Asia in a massive hug. Asia, I'm really sorry about him, apologized Issei, while Scathach just simply laughed softly in the background. It's okay, Issei, I don't mind, but are you sure it's fine if I stay here at your house? Asked the nun, making Mr. Hayato nod his head eagerly. Of course you can, Asia. After what those terrible arsonists did to your home at the church, you can stay here as long as you like. In fact, I want you to think of me as your father, reassured the man. Thank you, Odausen, replied Asia with a beaming smile, an angelic light seeming to reflect off her body. Oh, what a nice, loving girl. Issei, marry her right now, ordered Mr. Hayato, making the two in question blush heavily. And that's it for me. Asia, we're going to see if we can get you into school. In the meantime, just stay here with him, okay? Asked Issei. Yes, thank you again, Issei. And can you thank Morrigan when you see her? Replied Asia. Unfortunately, Morrigan had to return home to Ireland for a while, but I'm sure I could send her a message for you, informed Scathach as she smiled at the nun. Thank you, Scathach. May the Lord bless and keep both of you, prayed the nun, making an amused smirk appear on Scathach's face as the two waved their goodbyes. Once they were outside, the witch's smirk simply grew, the Christian God blessing a Celt. The day that happens is the day the lug turns into a leprechaun. The Celts and Christians don't like each other, questioned Issei in surprise. Scathach shook her head. We're not on bad terms, but then again we're not on good terms either. Ireland used to be the source of all Celtic worship, but when Christianity came, we lost a great deal of followers. Some of the gods still are angry about that. I see, murmured the teen, before his mind drifted back to Asia's situation. Issei sighed at the thought of the nun currently being forced to stay at his house with his father, and after I said I would take care of her too, that promise lasted longer than I expected. I hope she's okay at home with Dad. Apparently hearing his sigh, Scathach turned around and smacked him on the shoulder as she smiled reassuringly at him. Don't worry, Issei, if everything goes well with our meeting with the devils, then Asia should be able to join us soon, she reminded him. Yeah, that's true. Still, don't you think I should be informing them about you going to meet them, or at least let me tell them who you are beforehand? Asked Issei with a frown. Scathach shook her head. No, that would draw too much attention and panic. We'll tell them during the surprise meeting. All right, Scathach, if you say so, sighed Issei. As the two entered through the school gate, Issei yawned as the last restless night on the couch finally caught up to him. Man, it is too early. Suddenly the teen felt himself hit someone as they both tumbled to the ground. Groaning, Issei looked down to see whom he had collided with, and instantly his froze. Hey Kaichu, how are you this morning? He asked, as he quickly tried to push himself off her, only to feel something squishy grasped in his hand. Looking down at his hand, Issei just sighed. Oh, she pervert, screamed Sona as she punched him in the jaw and sent him skidding across the school cot before coming to a halt as he hit the building, collapsing to the ground. Well, I'm awake, groaned Issei as he rubbed his head and got to his feet, only to freeze as he saw snow beginning to fall to the ground. Snow in July, it's odd, he thought before his eyes widened as the teen noticed the snow only falling around the school grounds. Swallowing fearfully, Issei slowly turned back to Sona and felt her radiating enough rage to rival Berserker. Turning to Scathach for help, he saw her glaring at him before she continued on to class. By pervert, called Scathach, abandoning the teen to his fate. Well, why is she angry? I didn't do anything, did I? Questioned Issei, confused. The drag, what are you talking about? Asked the clueless teen. Issei, high out of your dead, shouted Sona, drawing his attention back to the present. And that's my quetigo, muttered Issei as he ran across the school courtyard with the Citri heiress in hot pursuit. Get back here, you pervert, I'll flay the skin from your bones, screamed Sona, causing all the students present to stare at the pair with amused expressions. It was an accident, forgive me, Kaichu, cried Issei as he ducked from a stone thrown by the heiress. Never, she snarled, as the crowd watching them grew larger, before they began murmuring to each other, softly. Those two at it again, honestly, why don't they just make up already like every good couple should, sighed one of the students, bringing blushes to the faces of Issei and Sona. There's no way I would ever date him, they shouted in unison, before coming to a stop as they glared at the crowd and making the whispers increase tenfold. Oh please, Kaichu, everyone knows about how the Ice Queen of Kyo took the Oppai Baka himself to her office for some punishment, scoffed a student, making Sona start stuttering. Oppai Baka, muttered Issei in a slightly depressed tone. Not only that, but he's the only one that can actually break the Ice Queen's cold exterior. He must have really warmed your heart to melt through that, continued another student with a perverted smirk. Issei quickly glanced over at the Citri heiress, who was fidgeting slightly, a far cry off her usual cold and composed aura that she usually gave off, and sniggered, softly. Realizing that she was currently distracted, Issei quickly bolted and tried to get away from the heiress, only to hear her growl before chasing after him as they disappeared from the crowd's sight. Suddenly Issei dived to the side as the water fountain in front of him erupted with a spray of water in front of him before turning into a spiked wall of ice, blocking him off. Hey, that could have seriously hurt me, then he cried fearfully as he spun around and saw Sona with a blue magic circle appearing around her hand. For the good of the school, no, the good of all society, I must kill you. This I swear as a member of the Citri household. Now stand still, damn it, she growled as he dodged another magic attack. Like hell I will, shot back Issei as he once again began fleeing for his life, the enraged Sona not far behind him. Where are you, pervert? Growled Sona as she rounded a corner and found Issei missing. Rushing down the school hallways, the Citri heiress skidded to a stop as she spotted Riaz exiting from one of the classrooms. Sona, what's wrong? Asked the Gremory heiress in concern about her friend's behavior. Riaz, have you seen Hayatu anywhere? Asked Sona, frantically as she grabbed her fellow devil's arm. Yeah, he just ran down that way. Why? Replied Riaz with a nod as she pointed down one of the hallways. You won't escape me now, IseihyoudoU, screamed Sona as she rushed off in the direction that Riaz had pointed. Riaz just stared in the direction that Sona ran down for a couple of minutes before breathing a sigh of relief and looked down at the mirror in her hand. That was too close. Thank God, Tamamo, I love you right now. Immediately he felt a warm, comforting feeling coming from the mirror tucked under his arm, causing the teen to frown as he brought it up to his face. Upon lifting it up to his face, Issei immediately flushed as he saw Ria's reflection staring back at him with a flustered expression on her face. She is quite pretty, isn't she? He thought as he tried numerous expressions on his new face, only to flinch in pain as a sharp shock came from the mirror. For a brief moment he could have sworn he saw Ria's reflection get replaced by the image of a glaring Tamamo before Issei shook his head as he came back to his senses. What was that? He wondered in confusion about the sudden shape in the mirror. Ugh, I think Motohama and Matsuda are beginning to affect me. Not only that, but I'm starting to see things. Well, sanity is for the weak, I guess, replied Issei as he shrugged his shoulders. Yeah, very funny, D-Drake. Still, that went surprisingly well. Too well, in fact, muttered Issei as a frown appeared on his new female face. But is that you? Aren't you supposed to be in the clubroom? Called a male voice. Yep, there we go, sighed Issei as he turned around and saw Kiba approaching him. Yeah, lucky me, scoffed the teen sarcastically. Kiba, I had some business to take care of quickly, lied Issei as the knight nodded. I see, in that case I'll accompany you back to the clubroom, replied Kiba. No, exclaimed Issei before coughing as he plastered a calm expression on his face. I mean, that won't be necessary, Kiba, I'm sure you've got class to head to. It's fine, Butchu, as your knight it is my duty to accompany my king, dismissed Kiba with a wave of his hand. God damn it, why does he have to keep up this white knight act, thought Issei in frustration. I know, D-Drake, we're going to be in some serious trouble if we're caught here. Damn it, where's Scathach when you need her, growled Issei in his head, not noticing Kiba looking at his mirror curiously as the pair began walking back to the orc clubroom. Butchu, I was wondering, why do you have that mirror, he asked Issei, making the teen curse softly. Oh well, I heard it was supposedly meant to be some old Japanese artifact and decided to buy it, lied the teen. An understanding expression appeared on Kiba's face as he nodded. Ah, you always were a bit of an otaku for anything Japanese. Rias is an otaku. I guess you really can't judge a book by its cover, thought Issei in mild surprise. Well, we'll get Kaneko and Akino to have a look at it once we get back to the clubroom. They know quite a bit about Shinto artifacts. They might be able to identify it, informed the knight. Yeah, that's not happening. I have enough problems as it is, groaned Issei as the grip on his mirror tightened. I'm working on it. That's it, thought Issei as a happy smile spread across his face. Kiba, you can go on ahead. I need to go inform Issei that I need to see him during the break, he ordered the knight. Don't worry, Butchu, I can do that for you, offered Kiba, making Issei cheerful and joy internally. Hook, line and sinker, he thought, giddily. That would be greatly appreciated. Thank you, Kiba, replied Issei, the grin still on his face as he faced the knight. Of course, Butchu, replied the knight as he rushed off to find the wayward teen. Not a moment too soon, sighed Issei as he turned and began looking for a good spot to change back to normal. Butchu, how did you get out ahead of me? And was that? Kiba questioned a familiar female voice, making Issei groan as he turned to see Akino behind him. That's it, I swear to God. If you're not dead and I find out, then I'll personally come and kill you for this, screamed Issei internally as he again put another clam mask on his face. Akino, what are you doing here? He asked, causing the queen to frown in confusion. Honestly, doesn't any of them ever go to class? Why are they never singled out like me? Thought Issei, annoyed at the clear special treatment. Butchu, I always leave school at this time to head to my shrine, replied Akino, making Issei again curse softly. Oh, of course, my apologies, Akino. I'm afraid I have a lot on my mind right now, he replied, truthfully. I understand, Butchu. The situation with Riser is a troubling one, said Akino with an understanding expression on her face. Who the hell is Riser? Thought Issei, in panic. Right, Riser, that's it, murmured the teen as Akino gained another frown on her face. Butchu, are you okay? She asked, in concern. Of course I am. Why do you ask, Akino? He answered as the teen felt a few drops of sweat begin to run down his back as Issei struggled to maintain his calm expression. It's just, I've never seen you utter his name without a snarl on your face, said the queen, causing Issei to simply blink in response. Alright, seriously, who the hell is Riser? Damn it, he cursed in his head as Akino noticed the mirror in his hands and her eyes widened slightly. Butchu, that mirror, may I see it? She asked, holding her hands out to take the noble phantasm. Damn it, well, let's cross fingers and hope for the best, I suppose, he thought in anger as he handed the mirror of Yuka over to the queen. Butchu, this mirror. Where did you get it? Questioned Akino as a fearful expression appeared on her face. Crap, if I tell her I bought it, then it'll cause problems when she asks Rias about it later. No choice, I suppose, mused the teen as he took a deep breath. I borrowed it off someone, he replied, vaguely, who interrogated the queen frantically. Why, what's wrong? Akino frowned. Issei. That mirror, I could be mistaken, but I'd like to ask its owner a couple of questions, replied Akino as Issei grabbed the mirror back off her. I'm sorry, Akino, but my source asked me to keep their identity a secret, he lied, hoping that it would put an end to this conversation. Butchu, please, if I'm right about that mirror, then we're all in danger, exclaimed Akino, and making a prim expression appear on Issei's face. Akino, as an heiress of the Gremory clan and your king, I am ordering you to drop the subject and never bring it up to me again. Is that understood? Impersonated Issei, trying his best to act like Rias would. Akino just flinched before she nodded stiffly. Understood, but you, if you'll excuse me. Issei just watched as Akino walked off and sighed as he found a nice isolated corner to transform back to normal, his mirror reverting back to its card form. Hopefully that won't cause problems for Rias. Akino looked pretty upset, he thought, sadly. Deidre, do me a favor and stop talking, I'm in no mood for it, growled the teen as he opened the door to his class and was immediately yelled at for being late by his teacher. Issei Hayadu, how could you, cried two voices as the teen was grabbed by his collar once school ended. Madohama and Matsuda, what's wrong, the kendo club beat you up again, asked Issei as Madohama lifted him up and Matsuda growled at him. You know what you did, we trusted you, Hayadu, snarled Madohama, only for all three of them to flinch as they felt a murderous aura fill the room. The three guys all turned to see Scathach smiling menacingly at them. Issei and I have a very important meeting to get to, so I would recommend removing your hand from him now. If not, I could do it for you. That is if you don't mind losing a limb. Whoa, hold on, Scathach, exclaimed Issei as he placed himself between his friends and the witch before turning back to them. So what did I do, guys? The two of them growled softly as Matsuda answered. Milton, does that name ring a bell to you? Milton, no. Should it? Replied Issei with a frown of confusion. It's the number you gave us for our date, roared Madohama. Oh yeah, I did that, didn't I? Sorry, things have been a bit hectic right now, I completely forgot about that. So how was the date? Asked Issei with a sheepish smile as his two friends began crying anime tears. Not good, huh? Sorry about that, guys. But you know what they say, plenty of fish in the sea and all that, replied Issei sympathetically. Why are you mocking us, Issei? I thought we were friends, comrade in arms to obtain the wonderful gift of Appai, exclaimed Matsuda. Well, we are friends at least, and I am truly sorry that things didn't work out between you two and Milton, comforted Issei, only to be surprised as both perverts gained even angrier expressions. How dare you have the nerve to say that to our faces while you're getting friendly with one of the transfer students? I bet you've already made her your girlfriend, right? Snarled Madohama, making a surprised expression appear on Issei and Scathach's faces, the latter's face briefly blushing as she looked away from them. What, Scathach and me? No, you've got it all wrong, we're just friends, laughed Issei, making the witch's head to snap around to face him before sighing as she returned to glaring at the perverted duo. Issei, who are these two idiots? She asked, hostilely. Right, I haven't introduced you yet, Scathach. Meet Madohama and Matsuda. Some of the only friends I have in this school, and people I would not appreciate being dismembered, he replied with narrowed eyes. No promises. Besides, I think you have a pretty poor taste in friends if this is whom you chose, scoffed Scathach. Then what does that make you, Scathach? Besides, they're not that bad. They begin to grow on you after a while, argued Issei. So does a fungus. That doesn't make them any better. In fact, from now on their names are Pubert 1 and Pubert 2. Besides, they haven't stopped ogling me since I arrived, shot back Scathach angrily. Look, just go on ahead. I'll catch up after I deal with this, sighed Issei, realizing a lost cause when he saw one. Fine, but you better hurry. It's not nice to keep a lady waiting, Issei, smirked the witch. If I meet one, I'll be sure to keep that in mind, replied Issei with his own smirk on his face, making a demonic aura surround Scathach as she again sent them a smile that gave the boys shivers. Such a funny boy, aren't you? Let me rephrase that. It would be hazardous to your health to keep me waiting, she warned, sweetly before walking off. Exactly. As long as she's angry at me, then her attention will be focused off these two, replied Issei as he turned back to Madohama and Matsuda. Ignoring the dragon, Issei just frowned at them. Listen, guys, be careful around Scathach, okay? She has quite the temper when angered. In fact, it's probably best if you lay off the perverted stuff when she's nearby. Believe me, the kendo club is nothing compared to her. Seeing the two of them nod, the teen then sighed. So what's the problem with Milton? The two perverts paused before they stared him. You really don't know. Issei, tell me, how did you get that number? Asked Madohama. Kaneko gave it to me. Why? Replied Issei in confusion. So you never actually saw who Milton was? Pressed Madohama. No, answered Issei with a shake of his head. The two perverts exchanged shocked looks. He has to be lying, doesn't he? Muttered Matsuda. There's one way to check, replied Madohama as he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Tell me, Issei, would you like to see a picture Milton sent us? Sure, why not? Shrugged the teen as he examined the picture that Madohama brought up. The entire class jumped as they saw Issei fall to the ground, an expression of horror appearing on his face, making both Madohama and Matsuda look at him with pity. Judging from your face, that pathetic expression that says you're about to vomit, you saw it, didn't you? I'm sorry, Issei, it appears you really didn't know, apologized Madohama. Issei didn't respond as one thought echoed across his mind. I saw hell. All right, Issei, are you ready? Scathach asked the still slightly shaken Issei Hayadu. As I'll ever be, just please let me do most of the talking, Scathach, and remember these people are also friends, okay? So please behave yourself, begged Issei as he finally had some color return to his face. Come on, Issei, it's me, replied the witch with a grin. I'm serious, Scathach. Two of them are siblings of the Maos, and that means no hurting them simply to fight their siblings, informed the teen, making her sigh tiredly. Fine, if you care that much, then I'll do it. I, Scathach, the immortal witch of the land of shadows, swear not to harm any of the devils at this school without a just cause, she vowed, with a serious expression on her face. Thank you, Scathach, smiled Issei, this time noticing the witch quickly turning away from him. Well, it would cause you trouble if I did that, wouldn't it? She replied with a shrug. I suppose it doesn't really matter, I just need to wait for someone else to show up. Besides, if the Greeks find you, then I'll get the best fight I've had in years. No offense, Scathach, but I hope that never happens, deadpan the teen. Spoil sport. Anyway, shall we? Tease the witch with a smile as they approached the orc clubroom door. Yeah, hopefully Riaz is in a good mood, nodded Issei as they pushed the door open. Entering the room, Issei paled as he saw not only Riaz and her peerage present but also Sona, Saji and Tsubaki, the Citri heiress, glaring at Issei before turning to examine Scathach with a wary expression. Are we interrupting anything? Asked Issei. No, we were just making arrangements for Sona's trip to the familiar forest tomorrow, replied Riaz, happily, as she saw Issei. Familiar forest, repeated Issei. The place where new devils are allowed to find a familiar to serve them. Since Riaz doesn't have any new servants, I was allowed to take her place for Saji, answered Sona, coldly. Oh, congratulations, Saji, cheered Issei, making the devil grin happily. Enough about us, Issei, it's good to see you. Who is this? Asked Riaz, cheerfully as she finally noticed Scathach. Riaz, that's one of the Celts, informed Sona, and instantly the upbeat atmosphere changed into a wary one as all the devils stared at Scathach. Indeed, pleasure to meet you devils. Issei convinced me to introduce myself to you, greeted Scathach, seemingly uncaring about the hostile air now charging the area. My name is Scathach, perhaps you've heard of me. There was a brief pause before the color slowly drained from the faces of the devils present as Riaz softly muttered, Godslayer. So Scathach is infamous for something. Now it makes sense why she didn't want to inform them beforehand. Still, some warning would have been nice, thought Issei with a sigh as he tried to think of a way to lower the rising tension. Are you the Scathach, or are you just named after her? Questioned Sona. That's it, come on Scathach, please just pretend to be someone else, begged Issei, only for his hope to die as he saw a smirk appear on the witch's face. Maybe this will answer your question, she replied, before summoning a crimson spear in her hand. Is that? Questioned Kiba. Gibalg, of course it is. Where do you think Issei got his from? Answered Scathach, making Sona and Riaz's eye widen as a frown appeared on their faces. So we were right, your sacred gear can copy legendary weapons, murmured Riaz softly. Well, how did they come to that conclusion? I doubt there's anyone with that kind of overpowered ability, thought Issei in complete confusion. Elsewhere across the multiverse, a certain counter-guardian, numerous red-haired teenage magus, and a number of Issays from other worlds sneezed. For a brief moment Scathach's eyes widened before she smiled. Wow, you devils already figured that out? I'm impressed. You're better than I expected. What thought Issei in shock as he was about to speak up, only to feel Scathach jab her elbow into his ribs. Of course, we're heiress of 2 of the clans of the 72 Pillars. We shouldn't be underestimated, commented a smug Riaz. Indeed, you're certainly changing my opinion on devils, replied the Celt with a smile. And I'm not entirely sure it's for the better, realized Issei with a sigh. Thank you. May I ask who your companion was? Questioned Riaz. I don't think that is a good idea, warned Issei, only to be ignored by everyone present. It was Morrigan, announced Scathach, making Issei sigh again as a shocked expression appeared on all the devils' faces. A Celtic goddess, confirmed Sona, getting a nod in response from the witch. Issei, how did you meet and befriend a Celtic goddess of death, let alone the immortal witch? Shouted Riaz as everyone turned to the teen. I didn't. They came to me, replied Issei, only to cry out as Scathach stamped on his foot. What? Exclaimed everyone, causing Scathach to sigh. Why would you two show such interest in Issei? How to question Sona in confusion. Oh, I can explain, Theoch, cried out Issei as the witch again nearly crushed his foot beneath her own as she stood in front of him. Let me answer that with a question of my own. What does Morrigan, myself, and Gibalg all have in common? Asked Scathach. Kuchulain, replied Kiba after a brief silence filled the room. Exactly, you see Issei here as one of his descendants, lied the witch. What? Gasped Riaz. Scathach, warned Issei, softly. And I'm staying here to act as his tutor and bodyguard, so I'll be joining this club. Let's all get along, okay, concluded Scathach as she fixed them all with a smile that made even Akino flinch. What? Shouted Riaz with a horrified expression. I see, you realize that we'll have to inform our leaders of this, stated Sona as the Citri heiress was the first to regain her composure. That's fine, isn't it, Scathach, said Issei quickly, trying to end this conversation before it got too out of hand. I guess there's no choice, sighed Scathach. Still, as a representative of the devils, let me welcome you to our territory, greeted Sona, formally. Thank you. I hate to ask this, but could you do me a favor? Asked the witch, with a grin on her face. And what might that be? Frowned Riaz. We have a friend that wants to join the school and join the club, but she needs a fake background, informed Scathach. Issei just stayed out of the conversation and moved to sit next to Kaneko before giving the white-haired girl a wary look, remembering what happened with Milton. The white-haired girl looked at him with wide, unblinking eyes before Issei sighed and began patting her on the head again, once again hearing the sound of a cat purring as he returned his attention back to the current conversation. The Celt frowned. Sona. A member of my faction, replied Scathach. That should be easy to do. What's their name? Nodded Riaz. Asia Argento, replied Issei. That's not very Celt-sounding name, frowned Sona. It's the alias she chose. What can you do? Shrugged Scathach. Okay, I'll have the necessary paperwork done tonight and send it over to Issei's. She should be able to go to school by tomorrow, announced the Citri heiress. Thank you. I hope you don't mind, but Issei and myself need to be excused. We want to inform our friend about the good news, stated Scathach as Issei nodded and rose from the couch before following the Celt out of the clubroom. We need to contact the Mao, let them know what's happening here, sighed Sona as the door closed behind them. Riaz joined her in their lamenting. Neither of them liked involving their siblings with anything, but this was not something they could just sweep under the rug. Still, to think that Issei was a descendant of the Ku Chulain, perhaps it was better that she didn't get him in her peerage. Riaz doubted the Celts would have let that slide easily. What happened to letting me do all the talking, commented Issei with a glare as the pair left the school grounds and headed for home. Oh please Issei, I only said that to keep you from worrying. Besides, if you'd done the talking, the devils would have already figured everything out, dismissed the witch. And why is that, replied Issei through gritted teeth. Scathach just laughed. Because you can't lie to save a life, Issei. Not only that, but you have no idea how politics work. Believe me, it's better if I do all the talking. Speaking of politics, aren't you worried about what happens when they find out you lied about Asia, questioned Issei. A large grin spread across her face. Technically I didn't lie, Issei. I just told them she was part of my faction. It's not my fault if they assume that means she's a part of the Celts. D-Drag, remind me to never play her at poker, thought Issei. And what is your faction, Scathach asked Issei, curiously as he snapped back into the present. The witch just blinked as she looked at him in surprise. Isn't it obvious? Yours, of course, Issei, although we will need to think up a name for it. Work on that, would you? We need to start getting our name out there. Yeah, sure, whatever you say, Scathach, he answered with a shake of his head. Still, was that really a good idea to say I'm a descendant of Ku Chulain, asked Issei with a worried frown on his face. It's better than the truth, Issei. Besides, it's not like anyone can prove us wrong with Morrigan, myself and Lug backing the claim, replied Scathach. Do you think Lug will agree to that it is his son after all? Pointed out Issei. We'll cross that road if we get to it. Besides, I'm confident Morrigan can convince him, replied the witch. Why do I get the feeling that you're leading me to a horrible death? Muttered Issei with a sigh as they finally arrived back home. Don't worry so much, Issei. Honestly, you'll live longer that way, grinned Scathach as she opened the door before turning back to face him. Remember to come up with a name, Issei. We'll need something to catch people's attention, she ordered as the witch headed into the house. Don't worry, it'll be a name that people won't soon forget, he replied with a joking smile. Good, I'm looking forward to it. Soon our faction will be well known around the world, she grinned, while Issei just shook his head, clearly thinking that the witch was joking. He really should have known better by now. When you said that you wanted to talk in private, I never imagined that you'd take us here, stated Lug as he looked out of the building's window into the land of eternal twilight beyond. It's the only place where we can be sure that no one's eavesdropping on us, informed Morrigan. The Celtic sun god gave a worried frown. There is a reason for that, Morrigan. We both know that the land of shadows is a dangerous place. Even with the so-called queen absent from her throne, I doubt Scathach would appreciate us using her home like this. Relax, Lug. I got Scathach's permission to use her home as a hideout and meeting point before I left. Besides, this way we'll be able to send messages to each other without needing to sneak into Shinto territory. No doubt Amaterasu is keeping a close eye on her borders after the last incident, reassured the goddess, making Lug raise his eyebrows. Morrigan, you're acting as if Amaterasu is a danger. I know we made her angry over sneaking into her territory, but she shouldn't hold a grudge for long. She doesn't seem the type to me, he replied. Morrigan just gave a soft laugh. And that's why you are terrible with women, Lug. That aside, we had some complications with Issei and the Shinto faction. We don't want them to find out about him. I see. Are there any more complications you want to tell me about? Asked Lug as his eyes narrowed. The Greeks also can't find out about him or we're going to have a serious problem. If they find out about him, then there will be shit. Especially if Scathach has anything to say about it, informed the goddess with a sheepish expression on her face. By the gods, Morrigan, just what did you three do? Sighed Lug as he began rubbing his temples. We did nothing, it's just a misunderstanding, she replied. A misunderstanding, scoffed Lug, causing Morrigan to begin eyeing the ground. All right, a misunderstanding of astronomical proportions, admitted the goddess. Morrigan, I think it's best if you start explaining yourself, stated Lug with a frown. Before I do, I want you to swear that you won't repeat this to anyone else without our permission, demanded Morrigan as her companion raised his eyebrows again. Very well, I, Lug, the Celtic god of the sun, swear to the Trinity goddess, Morrigan, that I will not repeat what is said here to anyone else. Satisfied, asked the sun god. Thank you, Lug. Now I'll ask that you keep your questions until the very end and try to have an open mind about this, requested Morrigan before she started explaining everything Issei told her. As she finished, Lug's eyes narrowed as he glared at her. Let me see if I understand this right. He has the soul of my son, bonded to him with a card of all things, only this Satanta is from another world, in which the souls of the dead are brought back to fight over the Holy Grail. Only this one is far more powerful than the Longinus that we know. That's correct, nodded Morrigan. His eye twitched slightly as he continued, secondly, this kid. Issei, interrupted the goddess. The Celtic god took a deep breath to calm his rising temper. Issei managed to get his hands on not only one but 7 of these cards, enabling him to use their abilities and weapons as if they were his own, and because of this he has already alerted several deities of his presence, which are likely to kill him on sight. That is true, she replied, with another nod. Morrigan, if this is your idea of a joke, then it is in poor taste, sighed Lug tiredly. Believe me, Lug, I wish it was, informed the goddess. I never took you and Scathach to be fools, Morrigan, for you to believe this crap, he replied, shaking his head in disappointment. It's the truth, Lug. Issei told us himself, argued Morrigan as she tried to convince her fellow Celt. And how do you know he wasn't lying, scoffed Lug, making his companion burst out laughing. Believe Lug, I would know. Issei is the worst liar I've seen in a long while, reassured the goddess. Or maybe one of the best, if he managed to fool you too, replied the sun god. Lug, don't you trust me? You sent me there to investigate for a reason, didn't you? Asked Morrigan, as she stared at her companion in the eyes. Lug just sighed as he nodded his head. I trust you, Morrigan. It's your judgment I don't trust. Are you sure that the two of you aren't only believing what you want to believe? This human could be manipulating the both of you. I understand your concern, Lug, but trust me, this is the truth and we need your help, informed Morrigan. You want my help to protect him? How? Questioned Lug curiously. Simply support my claim that he is a descendant of Ku Chulainn. With your backing, as well as Scathach's and myself, no one would question it, requested Morrigan, only to flinch as the room suddenly grew hot. You want me to adopt him? A human, confirmed Lug in a deadly calm voice, getting a sigh and nod from Morrigan. You want me to desecrate my son's name for this boy's protection? Absolutely not, roared the sun god as the temperature skyrocketed and his body is briefly covered with flames. Wait, Lug, cried Morrigan as the sun god turned to walk towards the exit, ignoring her entirely. Please, Lug, there's something else, called the goddess, causing Lug to pause at the door before he turned around to face. What now? He growled. Morrigan took a deep breath as she realized this was her last chance. According to Issei, Ku Chulainn's soul is still alive inside the card, helping him, guiding him when he needs it. If Satanta wants to help this boy, aren't we inclined to do the same? Lug was silent until the flames surrounding his body finally dissipated. Very well, I'll do it ... but on one condition. Cao let out a sigh that rapidly turned into a growl of frustration as he looked down at the folder in front of him, once again examining everything they had collected about the descendant of Ku Chulainn. Damn volley, I knew he would be interested in this, but to send Arthur after him, thought the descendant with a frown. Still, at least that damn traitor was a good fighter. Currently only Siegfried had ever been able to pose a challenge to him when it came to swordsmanship. The leader of the hero faction shook his head as he returned his attention back to the folder in front of him before opening it up. Target profile. First name, Issei. Last name, unknown. Age, unknown, presumed to be between 15 and 18. Appearance, a seemingly normal teenage human with brown hair and eyes. He appears to go to one of the nearby high schools in Kuo due to wearing a school uniform. It is not currently known which school he now attends. Update: recently, spies within the Devils have intercepted messages to the Maus and reported that he is currently attending Kuo Academy with the Immortal Witch. The location of Morrigan is so far unknown. Affiliations: currently appears to have been claimed by the Celtic Pantheon. The human also appears to be forming close relationships with the Gremmery and Citri clans. It is not known if he is acting on the orders of the Celts or doing so independently. The current relationship between him and the Shinto Pantheon is unclear. He has made no attempts to contact them, yet clearly lives in their territory. It appears unlikely that he is dealing with the Shinto Pantheon. However, it must be noted that Kyoto has been displaying some unusual activity recently, and while the cause is unknown, the timing is too convenient to be thrown away as mere chance. Abilities: known sacred gear Longinus, the boosted gear. Unconfirmed rune magic, incredible speed and endurance, both sword and spear fighting styles. Worst case scenario is that he has both Gibalg, Fragarat, as well as possible copies of any of the other powerful Celtic weapons including Giasail, Ariabear, or even the Spear of Lug himself, if the information about his second sacred gear is correct. Possible unknown type of magic or a second sacred gear. Intercepted reports state that it can copy legendary weapons. Caution is advised to members of the hero faction wielding specific weapons such as Caliburn and Graham. To others it is unclear if he can copy other sacred gears as well, but no chances are to be taken. Hashtag he apparently has some special attack that involves high-speed strikes known as 9 lives, the shooting 100 heads. The similarity of this attack and that of the Heracles of legend is uncanny and has created many questions. Whether or not this attack is in fact inspired by the labor of Heracles, it is still incredibly dangerous and should not be taken lightly. Background: as of this report's last update, we still know next to nothing on this human's background, mainly due to a lack of a known last name. However, despite this, many theories have been proposed to explain his existence, ranging from plausible to downright absurd. He is not a descendant of Ku Chulainn but rather the reincarnation of the Shield of Ulster himself. This would explain the Celtic Pantheon's unusual behavior towards him, some appearing to want to kill him while others trying to keep him safe. While this does explain the enormous amount of divinity coming from the boy for a descendant, there has been no evidence to suggest that demigods can be reincarnated. Until evidence is shown to support this theory, such as more dead demigods appearing, this theory will remain low on the possible theories. Conclusion: possible, but highly unlikely. Issei is not a descendant of Ku Chulainn and is instead a demigod, god born from the Celtic sun god, Lug, with either a human woman or the phantom queen of the Celts, Morrigan. This could explain why they hid him away in the Shinto territory, as such a union would bring the rest of the Celts down on their heads. The pair could have fabricated the lie to protect their son and also to enlist the aid of the immortal witch. It seems unlikely that this is the case, however. If Issei was born from two gods, he would have more divinity flowing from him. There has also been no sign of either Lug or Morrigan leaving the other world before the past week. Conclusion: possible, but unlikely. One of the less probable theories. Some say that Issei is actually an extra-dimensional being that came here from another world. They believe that he is actually a Kuchulain from another reality. In fact, some even believe that he brought friends with him. Conclusion: far-fetched and impossible. Another of the more exotic theories. This one believes that Issei studies some form of magic that is similar to divine possession or shamanism, allowing the human to commune with the souls of the dead and let them guide his action, granting him their skills and weapons for a brief time. This is an intriguing possibility, but unfortunately, it doesn't explain the Celts' interest in him. Conclusion: possible, but again unlikely. Leading theory: Kuchulain is alive. The human has too much divinity to be a descendant that has had their line diluted over multiple generations. However, he does not have enough to be a god. This has led to the conclusion that his line must have only recently split off from the Celtic demigod Kuchulain, likely within the past 2 generations. If this is true, then it means that Kuchulain is not dead and rather is merely in hiding. We can safely say that Issei has a good relationship with his ancestor, which would explain why Lug, Morrigan, and Scathach would want to help the human. Conclusion: possible and extremely likely. Course of action: until our leading theory is proved either true or false, this boy is not to be approached or harmed in any way unless no other option is available. Doing so may cause Kuchulain or even Lug himself to interfere with us. However, it should be noted that he would make a powerful ally. If Issei is acting independently and not with the support of the Celts, then we should try to make contact with him. If he proves uncooperative, use extreme caution. Gibalg is not a weapon that should be underestimated under any circumstances. Cao Cao just sighed again as he prepared for the consequences of Volley's actions. Sure, he said that Arthur was acting independently, but the human knew better. While the others might believe the lie about reforging Excalibur, Cao Cao knew Arthur well. That man would never disobey orders over something like that. No, he was definitely working under Volley's orders. If Issei survives Arthur's test, or better yet even beats him, then I'm recruiting him, forcefully if I have to, decided Cao Cao. After all, he needed a counter for that traitor. When Cao's brigade finally achieved their goals, his group would be the one standing on top once the dust cleared. The odds might be stacked against him, but his faction wouldn't lose. They were heroes after all. Alright Asia, next you add the flour, informed Issei with a smile as the nun clumsily poured the ingredient into the bowl. Like this, Issei, she asked, eagerly. The teen nodded. Good job for your first try, Asia. Keep improving your cooking skills and I'm sure you'll make a wonderful wife. Remember, the key to a guy's heart is through his stomach. Thank you, Issei, said the blushing nun before she muttered something under her breath. What was that, Asia, said Issei curiously. Tu was just wondering what your favorite food was, Issei, stammered out the nun, making a confused expression appear on his face. Well, I have to say that anything sweet really, I have quite the sweet tooth, informed the teen, whom frowned as he saw the nun appear to be taking notes in a notebook. What's that about, he thought in confusion, only to hear Diedrag's disappointed sigh. Before Issei could reply, he felt something grab him by the collar of his shirt and immediately was yanked backwards by a strong grip as Scathach walked into the kitchen. The witch looked around at the setup between Asia and Issei, and the teen felt the grip on his shirt grow tighter as she gave him a scary smile. I'm borrowing Issei for a couple hours. Asia, can you let his father know, informed Scathach, whom got a nod from the nun. The witch then dragged Issei upstairs and towards the attic, only turning to glance at him as she commented, You and that nun have been spending a lot of time together, haven't you? Issei nodded with a smile on his face. Yes, she's really nice, kind and fun to be around. Why do you ask? No reason, growled the witch, and Issei nearly choked as her grip on his collar grew even tighter before they arrived at the attic, and instead of simply letting him take the stairs, Scathach threw him up into the room. Ouch, what was that for? Cried Issei as he landed and rounded on the witch. What for? Frowned the witch as she climbed up the stairs and gave him a hostile glare. Scathach, are you mad? Guessed the teen. Why would I be mad, Issei, replied the witch, and causing Issei to give a sigh of relief. That's a relief. I thought you were angry at me, laughed the human, only to double over in pain as she punched him in the gut and walked to the far end of the room. Why? Croaked out Issei in pain. Eventually the teen stopped rolling around in pain and got to his feet, only to gasp as he saw the numerous runes carved into the walls and roof of the attic. What the hell did you do to my home? He screamed, causing the witch to give a proud smile. I made it unassailable. These runes here create a boundary field that will stop people from teleporting to inside the house, mask our presence, reinforce the structure, and best of all links us to my home, explained the Godslayer as Issei's face grew pale. The teen swallowed fearfully. Scathach, when you say your home, do you mean the land of shadows? Yes, nodded the witch as she touched one of the runes and suddenly a purple portal appeared in the middle of the room. You created a portal to the land of shadows in my home. What the hell is wrong with you? Why would you do that? Cried Issei. Even I can get homesick, Issei. Besides, if I get bored I can just go hunting in my home. It is always full of fun things to fight, replied the witch with a wistful smile. Anyway, let's get going, stated Scathach, causing Issei to immediately spin and face her. What, he exclaimed. Scathach just shrugged. I got a message from Morrigan. Apparently she needs to see us. No way. I'm not going, knowing my luck that portal will go wrong and send me who knows where, cried Issei. Issei-kun, said Scathach in a voice that gave the teen shudders as he turned to face her and saw Gibald glowing red, inches from his face. Start marching. Lug fingered the hilt of his sword as the two Celtic gods watched the portal form in front of them and sighed. Time for the moment of truth. There was a brief flash of light and Lug watched as a young boy stumbled out of the portal and fell to the ground. Following this was another flash and Lug's eyes narrowed as he saw Scathach appear before she dismissed Gibald. There was that so hard, you little drama queen, scoffed Scathach. You shoved Gibald in my face. I'd say that was an adequate amount of drama, argued the boy. Oh please, it's not like it's the first time I've done that, replied the witch with a dismissive wave of her hand. That doesn't make it better, shouted Issei. Lug just watched the two banter in amazement. Is that really Scathach? She almost seems like a different person. Morrigan noticed this and just smiled. I told you he has that effect on people. I see, muttered Lug before the two approached them. So the queen of the land of shadows has returned to her kingdom, has she? Scathach turned to face him and shrugged. Just for today, Lug, I would ask you to behave yourself in my home. I would hate to have my home reduced to rubble again. I'll be good, provided you do likewise, replied Lug. You're a queen, Scathach, spoke up Issei, causing everyone to turn and face him. Self-proclaimed, muttered Morrigan softly, drawing an angry glare from the Godslayer before she turned back to face him. That's right, welcome to my home, Issei, she announced as Issei looked around and saw they were in a large stone training area with a castle rising behind them. And what a home it is, a land of eternal twilight, where nothing is truly dead or alive, truly a paradise, scoffed Lug as he stared at the unmoving sun with a frown, ignoring the growl coming from Scathach as he approached Issei. Quicker than anyone could react, the sun god unsheathed his sword and held it against the teen's throat. Boy, you will answer my questions truthfully, do you understand? Yes, replied Issei as he stared at the sword against his throat warily. Is everything that you told Morrigan and Scathach the truth, interrogated Lug. Most of it, came the reply from Issei as the teen's eyes widened. I didn't want to say that. What's going on, he thought in confusion as the sword against his throat began giving off a very unusual pressure. A deep sadness grew in the god's heart as he thought back to what Morrigan had told him about his son's fate, to be enslaved by that human and then to die like that, without even being able to fight. A small tear formed in the Lug's eyes as he silently lamented the cruel fate his son had suffered before he pushed the sadness back and focused on Issei. What did you lie about, demanded Lug as his eyes narrowed. Issei's mouth began moving of its own accord as he replied, the one who gave me the cards isn't dead. Both Scathach and Morrigan looked at the teen in surprise while Lug frowned. Why did you lie? Giving up on trying to lie, Issei just sighed, because he asked me to keep his presence a secret and I owe that damn troll. Besides, what would you have done to him if you found out about the cards before I explained it? Kill him, stated Morrigan. Tear him to shreds, replied Scathach. Destroy him, his friends and his family. I think I see your point now, admitted Lug as he removed the sword from Issei's neck. That sword, what is that, questioned Issei. Lug gave a small grin. This blade is the answerer, Fragarach. None may tell a lie while this blade is at their throats. The sun god then sheathed his blade. Well, let's see this class card, Morrigan keeps going on about. Issei nodded as he pulled out the Lancer card, include Lancer. As the light died down, Issei wasn't expecting to hear three collective gasps of shock from the gathered Celts. Scathach slowly approached the confused teen. Issei ... How long has that been happening, she asked. How long has what been happening, replied Issei in confusion. Issei, don't joke around here, scolded Morrigan. I seriously don't know what you guys are talking about, cried the teen, and Scathach's eyes widened. Issei, have you ever seen yourself while using the cards, questioned the witch. Well ... No, not in a while at least. When I use them, I usually have more important things on my mind than checking my reflection. Why, asked Issei, whom just had Scathach lead him over to a nearby pond of water. What the hell, exclaimed Issei as he stared at his reflection. His brown hair had turned a shade of blue and his pupils were now narrowed slits. Even his distinctive Asian features seemed less prominent. So the cards never used to do that, questioned Lug, seeing the human's reaction. No, they usually just give me the weapons and that's it, explained the teen. Well, at least this solves the problem of not looking like a Celt. You could easily pass as half-Celtic with those features, grinned Scathach, while Lug just looked away. Issei, how long can you stay in that state, questioned Morrigan. I never really timed it before, but I guess if I didn't have to fight anyone, then maybe a couple of hours. The noble phantasm is what exhausts me more than using the actual card, informed Issei. Noble phantasm, repeated Lug in confusion. Gibald, explained the teen, getting a nod of understanding for the sun god. This is good. If anyone asks about it, then we'll just say you usually disguise your Celtic features with magic. What do you think, Morrigan asked the witch as she turned to the goddess. Indeed, that's a good idea, agreed Morrigan. Meanwhile, Issei noticed a sad and pained look on Lug's face. Lug, are you okay, he asked, in concern. The Celtic god shook his head. I'm fine, boy. That form is just bringing back memories that I would rather stay buried. Lug, I'm sorry, realizing how hard it must be for the father. Wipe that sad look off your face, boy. There's no need of it, growled the sun god. Hey Issei, what about the other cards? Do they do something similar? Wondered the witch. Dunno, let's find out, agreed the teen. So he tried using the other cards, however the archer card didn't seem to do anything, as the only thing that manifested was Tauropolos. They were beginning to think the lancer card was an exception when he tried using the caster card, and immediately that theory was blown out of the water. I feel really weird, informed the teen as he felt his tail and ears moving with the wind. Wait a minute, ears and tail, realized Issei as he turned back to the pond and saw his reflection back to normal except for the 2 fox ears on his head as well as a tail wagging behind him. So, Issei, how does it feel to no longer be human? Asked Scathach in shock as they all stared at him, Lug's eyes narrowing as he recognized the faint power coming off the teen. So that's what you meant by complications, he muttered. What about the card you used at the church? Aren't you going to try that? Asked Morrigan, ignoring her companion as Issei quickly unincluded the caster card. Issei quickly shook his head. I'd rather not. The Berserker class isn't exactly known for their self-control. Besides, it doesn't seem to be working right now anyway. Maybe there's a requirement to use it, mused the witch. So Lug, now that you've met Issei, what will you do? Asked Morrigan as they all turned to the sun god. All right, Morrigan, I'll play along for now. Boy, you better not disgrace my son's name, growled Lug as he glared at Issei. I'd sooner impale myself on Gibal than insult Cuchulain, promised Issei as he met the sun god's gaze, getting a surprised look from the Celt. Well, it appears you might not be so bad after all, boy, grinned Lug. My name's not Boy, it's Issei, replied the teen. Though you've got some spine for a human, Issei. I'm interested in seeing how you'll deal with the others, laughed Issei. Others, repeated Issei. Don't worry, Issei, it's not important. Come on, let's head back, answered Scathach as she dragged him back through the portal. So what do you think? Asked Morrigan as the portal disappeared. Lug was silent as he stared at the unmoving sun before sighing. I think we're in over our heads here, Morrigan, but he's a good kid, I'll give him that. Issei sighed in relief as he rested his head on his bed, the stress of the last couple of days flooding out of his body as he let sleep claim him. However, the pleasant feeling of his head resting against a pillow was quickly replaced by the feeling of hard stone beneath him. Groaning, Issei opened his eyes and immediately found himself staring at the familiar surroundings of the arena from his dreams. However, he noted that some of the previously sealed doorways were now wide open. That's new, thought Issei as he peered into the caster doorway and saw what looked like a long doorway with very ornate pictures and walls, giving him the impression of immense wealth, almost like palace. So you finally returned here, did you? It's good to be able to meet you face to face, greeted a familiar male voice, making Issei spin around, and his jaw dropped as he saw a familiar blue-clad man emerging from the lancer doorway. What's the matter, boy? You look like you've seen a ghost, joked Cuchulain with a smile. Am I dreaming? Muttered Issei in shock. D-Drag, wow, you're huge, exclaimed Issei as he turned around and saw what he had thought was a dragon statue move to face him. Well, at least this proves that I'm not going crazy and hearing imaginary voices in my head, laughed Issei in relief. Have I ever told you how much I hate you, D-Drag? Growled the teen and causing the dragon to give off a bellowing laughter. Issei, said Cuchulain, causing the two partners to turn and face him. What's the matter, Lancer? He asked, in concern. About what you said to Scathach. Thank you. You've done a great thing for her and I really appreciate it, replied the blue-clad demigod with a grateful smile. Lancer, you know that she's not the same Scathach, right? Pointed out Issei. Even so, I still feel indebted to her, informed Cuchulain. I see. Well, you don't need to thank me for that. After all, I'm sure anyone would have done the same, shrugged Issei, getting an amused smirk from Lancer. Oh, I'm not so sure about that. You definitely left an impression on her, that's for sure, much to Castor's anger, he laughed, making Issei adopt a confused expression. The demigod finally stopped his laughing fit as he held out a hand to Issei. Cuchulain's just a name they gave me, boy. My friends call me Satanta. A happy smile spread across Issei's face as he shocked the outstretched hand. Then I'm glad to be given this honor, thanks Satanta. The demigod then ruffled Issei's hair as he continued. Still, I'm proud of you, boy. You're certainly becoming quite the ladies' man. He then leaned in towards Issei's ear before whispering, but just so you know, I'll be rooting for the two of you. Satanta, what are you talking about? Asked the confused teen. You'll see. Anyway, the others should be arriving any second now, replied Satanta as he stepped back. Others, repeated Issei, only to turn as he heard the sound of footsteps rapidly getting louder. GoshuujinSama, cried a happy female voice as Issei saw a purple blur rapidly approaching him. With the oomph, he coughed out as the teen was knocked to the ground by the purple shape slamming into his stomach. Did anyone get the number of that truck that hit me? Muttered Issei, as small chibi Scathachs began dancing around his head. Lancer just had his amused smirk stay on his face as Issei looked down at what had hit him and blinked in confusion. Tamamo. Goshuujin-sama, I knew you'd come visit me. I knew it. I knew you cared for me more than those thieving husses, cheered the fox girl as she affectionately rubbed her face against body. Muttered an extremely confused Issei. Haste thou no pride, Castor? Were thou not a god, then act like it, scolded a dignified female voice. Atalanta, exclaimed Issei as the girl-clad cat girl emerged from her own doorway. Archer, greeted Lancer, stiffly. Thieving Nico, growled Tamamo. Must I be forced myself? I have no interest in that boy, sighed the huntress. So you say, replied Tamamo. Anyway, it's nice to see an archer that actually uses bows for a change, commented Lancer. What do you mean, Satanta? Questioned Issei. Let's just say I have bad experiences with the archer class and leave it at that, sighed the demigod. Oh please, the archer class is the most useless of all the classes, scoffed Tamamo as she continued rubbing against Issei. Thou shalt take back those lies this instant, snarled Atalanta. What have you done since he first used you? How you scared off a child, whereas I have been helpful in more than just combat, smirked Tamamo as she finally got up from Issei and turned to face Atalanta. I don't want to hear that from a useless caster that can't even use territory creation, growled the huntress. Hey Satana, why are they fighting? Questioned Issei as the two males and dragon just stared at the arguing heroic spirits. Boy, I doubt if even the Grail could teach you another way a woman's mind works, answered Lancer with a sigh. I see, trailed off Issei. How dare thou insult me? The archer class are the best range fighters in the Holy Grail War, much more useful than pathetic casters, shouted Atalanta. Archers are the only range fighters in the Holy Grail War, shot back Tamamo. Exactly, and therefore the best, replied the huntress with a smug smile. The two glared at each other before Tamamo gained a smug grin. Fine, then let's ask Goshujin-sama who's better, archer or caster. Very well. So boy, which do you prefer, archer or caster? Agreed Atalanta as the two turned to face the teen. Wow, you're right, Satanta. Fishing is actually really relaxing and fun, commented Issei as he and Lancer sat by one of the rivers that was forming from the Lancer doorway, ignoring the two arguing females as they focused on their fishing. Glad you like it, boy. It was one of my favorite pastimes aside from fighting. In fact, it was one of the few things that my bastard of a master allowed me to do in my free time, laughed Satanta as he reeled in his line and held up a fish. For some reason, I'm feeling as if my biggest rival has just revealed themselves, muttered Tamamo quietly as she watched the two males bonding. How dare thou ignore me? This disrespectful behavior shall not be tolerated, yelled Atalanta, causing the two males to turn and face her. Come on, Atalanta, look, I've got a fish for you, offered Issei as he held the fish out to her. If thou thinks that the chaste huntress will be so easily swayed, then thou art horribly mistaken, growled the huntress, even as she eyed the fish hungrily. Say that when you actually take your eyes off the fish, smirked Satanta. Another word, dog, and it will be you last, snarled the green-clad girl. Oh, I'm a dog, am I? Well, you'd best be careful, Atalanta. Dogs have an unfortunate habit of preying on cats, warned Lancer as he stood up. Come on, guys, no fighting. Here, Atalanta, take it as an apology for Kuchulain, said Issei, trying to break up the fight. My goodwill will not be bought so Chinai, cried out Atalanta as she leapt into the air before turning around with a low snarl. Oh, I'm sorry, my hand slipped, said Tamamo with a deadpan expression as she let go of the huntress' tail. Thou art dead, damn fox, stated the trembling Atalanta. Wait, those cat features are real? I thought it was just your taste in cosplay. Hey Atalanta, can I touch them? Asked Issei, eagerly. What, no, I was just curious, cried Issei, only to shudder as he felt a cold gaze piercing into his head and turned to see the huntress glaring at him. The minute thou attempts it, is the minute that thou's life is forfeit, she promised without a hint of uncertainty in her voice. Nini, Goshujin-sama. Forget about that thieving Nico, pet me instead, offered Tamamo as she pushed her fluffy tail towards him. So where's Berserker? Asked Issei, ignoring the antics of the fox girl in front of him. That big guy rarely comes out of there. Probably a good thing if you ask me, answered Lancer as he gestured towards the Berserker doorway. Watch thou's tongue, Lancer. That man is one of the greatest heroes among my people ... and a dear friend. To see him reduced to such a state is saddening, warned Atalanta with a growl. Issei was silent for a few minutes before he began walking towards the doorway. I'm going to go see him. I agree, he is of the Berserker class for a reason. Who knows how he will react to you, and we can't go in there after you, included Lancer as the demigod grabbed onto his shoulder. Don't worry, I'll be careful, assured Issei, shaking off Satanta's hand as he entered the darkened doorway and was immediately greeted with loud roars of rage, pain and grief. The teen cautiously made his way through the pitch-black doorway and saw what looked like ruins of buildings strewed around the area. Frowning, Issei took a corner and immediately gasped. Directly in front of him was the skeleton of a massive 9-headed serpent, a hazy smog surrounding it that Issei could immediately tell was dangerous. The teen turned to leave back the way he came, only to stop as he saw the familiar hulking giant staring at him before giving a bellowing roar. Hi Berserker, how are you going? Greeted Issei, fearfully as the giant began to take a step towards him. Haha, that's good, I think, replied the teen before taking a deep breath and staring at the giant straight in the eye. I don't know if you can understand me or not, but I know about what happened to her and I just want you to know that it wasn't your fault, stated Issei, bringing the giant in front of him to a sudden stop. Seeing this, the teen continued, I know how you feel, that you think that you failed her. The feeling of helplessness as you watched her die in front of you, and then the questions come, if only I had done something differently. Well, you did all you could, you protected Ilya right up until the very end, because that's who you are. You're a protector, something that not even the deepest, darkest madness could strip from you, and that remains true even to this day, comforted Issei to the unmoving giant. You might not believe me, you might think you are a failure as a protector and a hero, but if it wasn't for you then Asia would still be dead and me along with her. You saved us. You are a true hero. Even if you don't believe it yourself, he said with certainty, keeping his gaze locked onto Berserkers. So please, I know I'm asking a lot, but please help me protect others like you did. I don't want to feel that kind of pain again, and nor do I want to wish it upon others, begged Issei as he lowered his hand, awaiting a response from the silent giant. Eventually the teen sighed as he realized that he wouldn't be getting a response from the giant and began to walk to the exit, giving the hero another grateful smile as he did so. I doubt Ilya would want you to feel this way. She cared for you just as much as you did for her. You were one of the few good things the Einsburns gave her. Be proud of that fact. You made a suffering girl happy, and that's something more heroic than any labors of the legends. I'll leave you alone now. Goodbye, Heracles, and thank you for saving us, finished Issei. The hulking giant didn't move a muscle as he watched Issei leave, not a single cry of rage or display of aggression, just a deep silence from the unmoving hero. Issei gave the giant one last encouraging smile before he headed back down the doorway to the main arena, leaving the silent hero alone in the silence. As the hero stared at the doorway, it seemed that the mad light in his eyes had, for a brief moment, disappeared as a single tear rolled down his face. SF Christo Phile Mu, whispered Heracles in the first bout of sanity he'd had in a long time before the mad light returned, and once again the roars of rage echoed across the area, only this time there was no grief or pain to them. Issei sighed as he walked home alone from another tiring day at school, Scathach having left early. Apparently the Celt had wanted to start training the nun so that she could defend herself, quoting, "If the devils try anything, she'll a liability, and that our faction needs to be strong." The teen simply shook his head in exasperation. While Scathach was a good teacher, if Ku Chulainn was anything to go by, he doubted they'd be seeing results from the training. While the Celt might be able to teach Asia the skills to defend herself, she could never teach her the intent to go with it. Asia was just not suited for fighting. Her mindset was simply too at odds with hurting others, let alone killing them. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. She truly does embody her sacred gear, laughed Issei, only to stop as he heard a female voice coming from the nearby park. Come on, Diedrag. It's probably just a girl busking for money. She's quite skilled too, from the sounds of it. I seriously doubt anything bad can come from that, even with my luck, replied Issei, causing the dragon to sigh. Ignoring the dragon, Issei walked over to the park and found it empty except for a single blonde girl wearing what looked like a witch's costume. As he got closer, the teen could finally make out the words of her song. Hush, child, the darkness will rise from the deep, and carry you down into sleep. Child, the darkness will rise from the deep, and carry you down into sleep. The teen didn't notice the faint glow beginning to be emitted from the saber card as he continued approaching the singing girl, whom was clearly too focused on her song to notice him. As she continued, Issei frowned as a strange feeling of familiarity filled him, the song's lyrics beginning to form in his mind long before the girl spoke them. I must have heard this song before, thought the teen with a shrug as he sat down by a tree and continued listening. Guileless son, I'll shape your belief, and you'll always know that your father's a thief, and you won't understand the cause of your grief, but you'll always follow the voices beneath. Suddenly images appeared in Issei's mind, a baby listening to her mother singing, a young child listening to a woman singing to her, a young masked knight humming this as she walked into a castle with both pride and excitement filling each step. Guileless son, your spirit will hate her, the flower who married my brother the traitor, and you will expose his puppeteer behavior, for you are the proof of how he betrayed her loyalty. The same masked knight was watching with a smile hidden behind her helm as a fellow knight was killing his former comrades as he rushed towards the woman about to be executed, desperation clear on his face. The masked knight then looked towards her king and her smile turned to an annoyed frown at the lack of emotion on his beautiful face. Issei shook the images from his head and smiled as he began singing the next verse, causing the blonde girl immediately stop and spin to face him in surprise. Guileless son, each day you grow older, each moment I'm watching my vengeance unfold, for the child of my body, the flesh of my soul, will die in returning the birthright he stole. As Issei finished the song, one last image appeared in his head. Two fighters stood on a soaked battlefield, each wounded beyond measure. The king had pierced the masked knight's body with a spear, and as the knight died her mask faded away to reveal an identical face beneath it. Suddenly the knight's body started moving on its own accord, the magic spells implanted in her body long ago finally activating. The knight's dead corpse quickly brought its sword into the king's surprised body, and so both father and son died together in the soaked burning field. Who are you and how do you know that song? Cried a female voice, snapping Issei out of his vision. The teen just shrugged his shoulders. Beats me, it just popped into my head. What was that song anyway? It was ... just an old lullaby from my family, replied the blonde girl, a sad expression on her face as she looked away from him. You don't sound too happy about it, observed Issei, a frown growing on his face. It's not something to be proud of, replied the girl, neither of them noticing the saber card's glow seeming to grow darker at this reply. But she did everything you wanted. She succeeded like you wanted. She fulfilled your desire. She brought down her father. Why aren't you proud of her? Shouted Issei. As an inexplicable feeling of anger surged and a few streaks of blonde hair began to appear on his head, before the teen's eyes widened at what he just said. Where did that come from, he thought in confusion as the girl just stared at him with wide eyes before her sad expression grew larger. It wasn't right to use a child like that for simple vengeance. How can I be proud of something like that regardless of if it worked or not? I cannot, will not, and never will never be proud of her, frowned the girl sadly. Then why do you sing it? Asked Issei, his frown deepening as a feeling of sadness and anger briefly spiked through his body. As a reminder, answered the girl with a sigh. A reminder of what? Replied Issei, his curiosity piqued by this witch girl. The blonde girl just had an uncharacteristic snarl appear on her face as she replied, to not end up like she did. That just because we share the name doesn't mean that we are the same. I don't want to end up as cruel and corrupt as she did, torturing children, brainwashing them into slaves for my purpose. Unnoticed by anyone, the saber card began glowing again as Issei felt a brief sense of confusion fill his mind as the girl continued. I want people to look at me and see me for who I am, not who she was or what I might become. My brother was the only one who ever treated me as my own person, despite being the one person who should hate me more than anyone else, said the girl with a smile appearing on her face for the first time. A child doesn't pick their parents, and the sins of the parents should never be passed down to their children, comforted Issei, as his own smile appeared on his face. Now you're beginning to sound like my brother, laughed the girl, causing another spike of anger to briefly course through Issei's body. Then he is a wise person, isn't he? Asked Issei, a bit of steel creeping into his tone. Oblivious to this, the blonde girl nodded. That's right, and strong too. He protects me even when he should be worrying about himself first, but I guess that's just how siblings are. I wouldn't know, I'm afraid. I never had any siblings, answered Issei with another shrug. Well, maybe you will in a couple of years. I'm sure you'd make a great brother, assured the girl. Issei just shook his head. That's not possible. My mother died when I was still young and my father refused to remarry. I guess not even death could do them apart. A sad and guilty expression appeared on the girl's face. I'm so sorry. Don't be, you couldn't have known. Besides, it's in the past now. Nothing can be done about it, replied the teen with a wave of his hand. The two were silent for a couple of minutes before the girl turned to face him again with a slight blush on her cheeks. You're a kind person, aren't you? Issei just laughed. I could say the same about you, miss. The girl's expression brightened. Right, I never introduced myself, did I? My name is Lefei Pendragon. It's nice to meet you. Pendragon mused Issei, only to cry in pain and collapse to the ground as a pounding headache appeared, the blonde streaks in his hair multiplying and the saber card's glow growing stronger. Hey, are you okay? Questioned a worried Lefei as she rushed over to him, only to stop short as she grabbed him on the shoulder and immediately felt the magical energy emanating from the cardholder. The descendant could only watch as more and more blonde streaks grew in Issei's hair before the teen's image was briefly replaced with a familiar masked knight glaring at her with hatred. The image passed quickly, however, and Lefei felt the magical energy from the cardholder dissipate as the blonde streaks disappeared from the teen's head. What the? Thought the girl in shock, only to be snapped out of it as Issei replied to her previous question. Yeah, I'm fine, it's just a headache, assured the teen as he slowly struggled to his feet and held out his hand. Lefei, well, that's a nice name. Mine is Issei Hayaru, he introduced with a smile, causing Lefei to freeze. Did you just say Issei Hayaru? She asked, fearfully. Yeah, why? Questioned Issei with a confused expression. No reason, I have to go now. My brother will be waiting for me, replied the girl, quickly. Do you need me to walk you home? It's dangerous for a girl like you to be walking home alone, offered Issei. No, I mean, it's kind of you to ask, but I'll be all right, cried Lefei as she waved her arms for emphasis. Well, if you're sure, maybe we'll meet again in the future, said Issei as he lowered his hand. For your sake. I hope we don't, whispered the descendant, softly as she walked away. And I hope I'm wrong about you, she added, silently thinking back to that familiar night and most importantly its helm. So how's your training going, Asia? Asked Issei with a smile as the trio walked to school, causing the nun to blush as turned away from him. Good, Scathach says that I'm a natural with rune magic, replied the nun. Really, said Issei with raised eyebrows as he turned to the Celt, whom shook her head with a defeated expression in response. Understanding the gesture, Issei smiled as he turned back to Asia. Wow, that's really impressive, but just don't do anything reckless. Rune magic isn't the strongest thing after all. Issei, shut up, smiled Scathach coldly before she froze and her eyebrows furrowed in concentration. Scathach, what's wrong? Are you injured? Asked Asia, twilight healing beginning to glow. It's nothing, I just remembered something. You two head on without me, I'll catch up later, ordered the Godslayer. You sure we can wait? Replied Issei. The immortal witch waved off this with a smile. I'll be fine, just some annoying pests I need to deal with. All right then, we'll see you at the Orc Clubroom, informed Issei as he and Asia hurried towards school. Scathach just watched them go with a smile before the Kyo Academy uniform around her disappeared and was replaced by the magical purple leather armor. You can come out now, she said, out loud. Hello, Godslayer, greeted a red-haired man as he emerged from behind a nearby building. Scathach looked at the devil with a smile. So you know who I am, but I'm afraid I'm at a loss. Judging from your demonic power, you're obviously a devil, and a powerful one at that. Your features are similar to that of the Gremory heiress, so I can safely assume you are a member of the Gremory clan, am I correct? The devil nodded. Indeed, I am Serzech Lucifer, one of the current Mao and holder of the current title of a superclass devil, I know. So what does one of the leaders of the Mao want with me? Interrupted Scathach. Please follow me, requested the Mao, and Scathach shrugged before following the devil. Together the two of them headed into the nearby woods at the edge of town, and Scathach frowned as she felt a boundary field spring into existence around them. So he's ready for a fight if one breaks out, fine by me. I was getting a little bored here anyway, thought the Godslayer, eagerly. We have some things that need to be discussed, announced the Mao, snapping her out of her thoughts. Then it can wait until after school. Unless your sister and her little slaves don't know you're here, replied the witch, whom smirked at the devil's silence. So I was right, how interesting, she mused. Yes, Seraphal and I decided that I should make an unofficial visit, explained Serzech. Which again begs the question, why did you want to meet me? Questioned Scathach. To find out what you plan to do now that you're here, informed the Mao as his eyes narrowed. Oh, are the little Mao worried about their sibling? Laughed the witch. Of course, I don't want anything bad to happen to my little Ryastan, and I'm sure Seraphal feels the same about her sister, replied Serzech with a happy, goofy smile. I see. However, what would you do if I felt like entertaining myself with them? Baited Scathach. Instantly the goofy expression on the Mao's face morphed into one of deadly seriousness, startling the witch. Let me make this perfectly clear, Celt. You touch one hair on either of them and you will regret it, growled Serzech. Is that a threat? Mao asked the Godslayer as her body tensed. Of course not, laughed Serzech in amusement. Suddenly a pure black sphere materialized above his hand as he locked eyes with her. A threat implies that I have no intention of carrying it out. This is not a threat, Godslayer ... This is a promise, informed Serzech as the sphere disappeared. An eager smile spread across her face as Scathach looked on at the Mao with approval. Oh, and what if I want to fight? I've heard quite a lot of promising things about you, Mao. You're not doing a good job of getting me to agree to this. In fact, now I'm all the more eager to fight you. A cold smile crept along the Mao's face at this response. Who said I would fight you, Celt? After all, I don't need to kill you to get vengeance. What do you mean? Frowned Scathach. That boy, what was his name? Isay. He's such a nice boy, isn't he? In fact, you seem to care about him a great deal, don't you, Scathach? It would be such a shame if something happened to him, wouldn't it? Mused the Mao. Faster than any of them could blink, the witch disappeared in a blur of movement before she reappeared in front of Serzech with Gibalg resting over his heart. Serzech had a shocked expression on his face, and even Scathach herself seemed surprised by her own sudden hostility before she shook it off and glared at him. Keep talking, I beg you, growled the Godslayer. Damn it, I pushed her too far. Plan B it is then, thought the Mao as he sent a discreet hand signal to his hidden companion. Scathach's eyes widened and she immediately dived away from the Crimson Satan as the wet ground beneath her instantly erupted into a pillar of ice spikes. The immortal witch quickly rolled along the ground as more and more ice spikes erupted from the ground behind her, each spike desperate to impale her body. Growling in frustration, Scathach then smiled as she remembered the trick Isay used on her and quickly drew a rune of light into the mud as she continued rolling across the ground. The rune exploded into light and blinded her attackers, stopping the ice spikes in their tracks as their wielder failed to track the witch's fast-moving form among the bright light. Finally getting to her feet, Scathach glared at Serzech before turning to look at the nearby tree line as a girl in some sort of pink costume emerged from hiding. The witch watched as the two devils moved to stand by each other before they both had red and blue magic circles form around their hands respectively. Did you really think I'd take my chances against you alone? Scoffed Serzech as the two devils watched Scathach warily grip her spear tighter. And do you really wish to make an enemy of the Celts? Growled Scathach, only to frown as she heard soft snickering coming from the pink-clothed female. You may fool others with that lie, but we know you aren't acting under the Celtic Pantheon's orders, plus Lug and Morrigan are far too busy now to help you. Besides, the dead don't tell tales, they'll never know what happens here, snarled the female devil as she created hundreds of ice spears and sent them at the witch. Scathach laughed as she dodged and weaved through the incoming projectiles. The dead, oh please, enemies stronger than you have tried before, devil. You couldn't grant me death even if I wanted you to. Suddenly the witch disappeared in a blur of movement as she rushed towards Seraphal, Gibalg glowing a red, only to leap high in the air as her instinct screamed at her of an incoming danger. Scathach looked down at the ground and her eyes widened as she saw a pure black small sphere strike where she had been moments before, completely disintegrating everything within a few meters and creating a perfectly spherical crater in the ground. As the witch landed, she quickly turned to see Serzech glowing with a crimson aura around his body as numerous other small black spheres began forming around his hands, his aura radiating nothing but pure destruction. Scathach instantly frowned as she used her speed to dodge every sphere, her instincts indicating that blocking them would be disastrous for her. So this is the power of a superclass devil. I must say I am impressed, she commented with an eager smile now forming on her face. Neither of the devils said anything in response, however. Instead they continued assaulting her, Serzech using his power of destruction to rain spheres down on her while Seraphal turned the ground beneath them to ice, attempting to remove Scathach's advantage of speed from the equation. Realizing how dangerous this was, Scathach immediately rounded on Seraphal and charged towards the devil. Surzech tried to stop her, but the witch was simply moving too fast and all his spheres hit were after images of the Godslayer. Seraphal could only dive to the side, and she felt Gibalg cut the side of her stomach, directly where her heart had been moments before. Sliding along the ice-covered ground, Seraphal smiled as she encased the witch's legs as well as Gibalg in ice and trapped her in place, causing Scathach's eyes to widen as she saw multiple black spheres speeding towards her trapped form. "You lose, Godslayer," smirked the Crimson Satan. "Issei, what's wrong?" asked Asia in concern. "Scathach sure is taking a while," replied the teen with a worried frown. "Don't worry, Issei, I'm sure she's fine. After all, she's strong," assured the nun as she smiled comfortingly at Issei. "Yeah, you're right, I'm worrying about nothing. After all, nothing's ever going to take her down," replied Issei with a fake laugh as he tried to bury a growing feeling of worry. As the two finally arrived at the school grounds, they both heard the crashing of thunder before rushing into the old school building and heading to the Orc. "Look, Issei, it's raining," observed Asia as they passed a window, and he turned to see the sky pouring down a deluge. To him it almost seemed as if the sky was weeping. Scathach blinked as she stared at the oncoming projectiles before closing her eyes and taking a deep breath as she reached out with her free hand as if to grasp something. The two devils could only watch in shock as they saw a second red spear, bearing an eerie resemblance to Gibalg, appear in her free hand before slicing through the ice, encasing her legs and releasing the witch from her frozen prison. Now freed, Scathach once again dodged the spheres before charging Seraphal, the ice devil panicking from the sudden movement as she froze the rain pelting down on them and turned them into ice spikes, only to see them only hit after images as the witch closed the distance between them. This caused Surzech to frown as he couldn't fire any more spheres without the risk of hitting his fellow Mao with their blast radius. Seraphal continuously tried to regain the distance between them as she sent wave after wave of ice projectiles at the witch, only to see Scathach slice through them all by twirling her two red spears in front of her and continue her assault. Becoming desperate, Seraphal sighed as she let the twin spears pierce her stomach before latching onto the witch's arms and trapping her in place once more. The ice devil then created an ice spike behind her that ran through her own body before piercing the Celt in her heart. Scathach's eyes just widened as she coughed up before becoming limp in Seraphal's arms as the devil dropped the body to the ground and collapsed before she froze her wounds shut. "We got her," she panted before turning to Surzech with a smile on her face. The Crimson Satan returned the smile only for it to drop in shock as he stared at something behind her. Seeing this and hearing soft laughter coming from behind, Seraphal spun around to see Scathach getting up from the ground. Eyes widening, the ice devil sent another ice spike at the witch, only to see Scathach grin at her as the ground beneath the Godslayer erupted with numerous ice spikes that pierced her body. "Not bad, devil, but it will take more than that to kill the immortal witch," laughed Scathach as she pulled out the spikes that were impaling her body before once again disappearing in a blur of movement. The Mao then felt the witch kick her in the stomach, sending Seraphal flying across the battlefield and slamming into Surzech, whom was waiting for an opening to pelt Scathach with more black spheres. Seeing the two Mao collapsed on the ground together, Scathach's smile widened as she suddenly leapt high into the air above them. Surzech and Seraphal watched with wide eyes as the eager smile on Scathach's face intensified even further, and they saw 6 more red spears materialize around the witch as they hovered around her, waiting for a signal. The shadow of the witch's body and spears briefly blotted out what little of the sun remained as the rain continued pelting down on the 3 combatants. Suddenly the hovering red weapons all rotated to face the 2 devils before rushing towards them in a deadly rain of projectiles. Unable to dodge out of the way with their entangled forms, Surzech instead created 6 more spheres with as much power of destruction as he could and sent them on a collision course with the incoming spears. The red spears met the black spheres with a loud booming as they were both briefly locked together in a deadly combination of black and red lights. However, the stalemate wasn't going to last forever, and Scathach's eyes widened as she saw her red spears get pushed back by the Mao's power before being engulfed by the black spheres and disintegrating. The witch landed back on the ground with a shocked and wary expression on her face as she watched the 2 devils entangle themselves and get up from the ground. "I can count on one hand the number of people who have ever pushed back my spears, and never have any of them done so like that before. It would seem I underestimated you, Surzech Lucifer. Unlike your companion, you are a credible threat, and in any other circumstances I would have loved fighting you," observed Scathach. The witch then fixed him with a chilling glare, and her eager smile finally dropped altogether as she stabbed Gibalg in the ground and materialized another red spear instead. "But you threatened Issei, and that means that you must die regardless." The 2 remaining spears in her hands both erupted into swirling masses of crimson energy as the Godslayer's body became outlined in a deep purple color. Scathach then looked up as her deep crimson eyes met the devil's in an unblinking stare. "It's time to remind you too of just why I am known as the Godslayer." Surzech instantly pushed his fellow Mao away from him as Scathach leapt towards the devil with her spears eagerly releasing their combined lust. The Mao frowning as his body was slowly covered in a similar red glow with hints of a pure black beginning to leak out of it. Instead of trying to dodge the glowing spears, Surzech just rushed towards Scathach and met her charge with one of his own, briefly shocking the witch long enough for the Mao to grab the of the two spears and knee the Godslayer in the gut. To her credit, Scathach only let out a mild grunt of pain as she kept her grip on her spears, and the two of them were locked in a contest of strength as each tried to overpower the other. "She's too powerful, I'm going to have to use it. Damn it," thought the Mao as he saw the spears beginning to inch ever closer to his. "Serafal, get out of here now," he ordered his fellow Mao, seeing her readying a spell from the corner of his eyes. "What, Surzech, I'm not abandoning you," she shouted in protest. "Serafall now," shouted the Mao, frantically as the black energy that was leaking from his body began to increase in size and bits of the ground beneath the two combatants began to dissolve into nothingness. The Ice Devil just looked at him with a conflicted expression on her face before she turned to run, only for Scathach to growl in frustration as she broke off the deadlock from her end by dismissing her spears and rushing after the fleeing devil. Serafall heard her friend shout in warning, but it was too late as she spun around to see a fist slam into her face, runes of reinforcement glowing along the witch's arm. The devil was sent flying through several trees before skidding along the ice ground and lying motionlessly on the ground as her bleeding body came to a stop. The only signs of life was the shallow and irregular rising and falling of her. Hearing Surzech's cry of rage, Scathach spun around and rematerialized her two glowing spears, only to see Surzech's body nearly completely covered in the same black energy from the spheres. The witch watched with wide eyes as she saw the area around the Mao begin to disintegrate, the power coming off the devil having skyrocketed as he glared at the Celt. "This is a superclass devil," thought the witch in shock. Not even the gods she had killed had this level of power. In fact, this devil might have even given Lug a challenge. "I can't take him lightly anymore," she realized as a blank expression appeared on her face. The twin red spears in her hands glowed as she leapt towards him, before the two spears turned into red beams that rushed towards the Mao, only to be consumed by the black aura before they even reached their target and dissolved. Frowning, Scathach summoned the two spears again and immediately leapt backwards as Surzech's aura of destruction rushed towards her in a black tide, disintegrating everything in its path. The witch then summoned another 6 spears and sent them at the Mao, only to see them once again get completely dissolved. The Mao didn't give her any time to recover from her shock, however, as he rushed towards the witch, a wave of pure black following close behind. Scathach quickly retreated with Surzech following close behind, the two fighters becoming nothing more than black and purple blurs darting across the icy battlefield. Scathach's armor was aglow with runes of reinforcement, further increasing its durability as well as her speed and strength as she decided to go back on the offensive. Surzech frowned as he saw his punch pass through nothing but an afterimage before ducking as a purple blur passed over his head and slammed into the tree behind him. The unfortunate plant didn't just break but was completely uprooted and sent flying through the air at a phenomenal speed from the force of the punch as Scathach clicked her tongue in annoyance before leaping to the side as Surzech retaliated by flooding the area around him with his power of destruction. The Mao then sent wave after wave of power of destruction towards the retreating witch, only to growl in frustration as all he hit was the afterimage of Scathach's glowing form. However, this good speed could not last forever as Scathach had to be careful with her footing at these speeds thanks to the icy terrain created from Serafall, which severely hindered her speed. Eventually she was forced to slow down or risk breaking her footwork altogether, allowing Surzech to immediately close the distance between them. The Godslayer was unable to summon any more spears as she had to focus on dodging the Mao's black-coated fists and kicks, even as the two fighters were beginning to be surrounded by the black energy of the power of destruction. Suddenly the Mao sent a sweep kick at the witch's legs, which Scathach dodged by jumping over it, only for her eyes to widen as she brought her arms up to block the Mao's black-coated fist sailing towards her head. For the first time Scathach cried out in pain as the power of destruction-coated fist slammed into her block and the witch was sent flying as the purple magically resistant and reinforced armor on her arms and hands dissolved into nothingness along with the top layer of her skin. The runes on the armor and her natural magical resistance the only thing saving the use of her hands and arms as they absorbed the brunt of the attack before failing. Scathach felt her body skid along the ice and tried to stop herself by materializing a spear and stabbing it into the ground, swinging her body around it like a pole as she struggled to regain her footing. As she landed, however, Scathach's eyes widened as she misjudged her footwork and finally slipped on the icy terrain, collapsing to the ground as she saw the black tide surge forwards. "So this is how I die at long last, my search is finally over," she thought with resignation as Surzech's power of destruction began to surround her. However, as she looked into pure black energy, Scathach felt something she didn't expect: despair. In that moment she wasn't the immortal witch or the feared Godslayer, she was Scathach, a human child who decided to learn the wonders of rune magic. Why was she sad? This was what she wanted. Wasn't it the death she had long seeking was finally here? She should be happy, shouldn't she? "Then you're an idiot." As the familiar words echoed across the witch's mind, the picture of the scolding teen appeared in her head and an amused smile crossed her face. "One insignificant change, huh? Maybe you were onto something, Isay," she thought with a smirk as Scathach felt more of her magical armor beginning to dissolve from the Mao's aura surrounding her. Surzech watched as his black power of destruction consumed the witch's body, completely engulfing her, a cold satisfied smile spreading across his face as he was about to rein in his power and check on his fellow Mao, only to freeze as he saw the black power surrounding the witch's body suddenly get pushed back with an explosive force of bright light. Standing alive in a circle of glowing purple runes was the battered and beaten form of Scathach. Yet despite her condition, the witch was laughing as she struggled to her feet, the purple runes' glow slowly getting weaker as more and more of Surzech's power of destruction continued to crash against the barrier. "Why are you laughing?" frowned Surzech, wondering if the immortal witch had finally lost her mind. "It's just so funny. After all these years I've finally found what I've been searching for. I've finally found someone who can grant me my wish, and yet I don't want it. My wish is finally within my grasp and I'm not happy about it. How can I not laugh at that absurdity?" cried Scathach through coughing laughter. Suddenly the two spears in her hands transformed into red beams again as they rushed towards Surzech. Unlike last time, the Mao's eyes widened as the spears pierced his power of destruction and both stabbed him in the gut. "I can't move," realized the devil as he felt the magic from the spears enter the inside of his body, immobilizing it. It wouldn't last long though. Already they could both see the twin spears beginning to crack from the Mao's power of destruction assaulting them. However, it didn't matter. They only needed to last a couple of seconds as Scathach ran out of her rune barrier and braved the torrent of the black tide surrounding her island of stability and rushed for where Gibalg had been stabbed into the ground. Feeling her hand closing around the cursed spear, Scathach spun around to face the devil and lifted the spear in the air. Suddenly the entire spear was coated in a crimson energy as the rain stopped and the sun finally peeked out over the clouds, bathing the witch and her weapon in its warm light even as Scathach felt more of her armor dissolving from the Mao's power. "I've decided, Mao, I'm not going to die as a human. I'm going to live as one," she announced as the energy from Gibalg began pushing back the Black Sea and the witch prepared to throw the spear. "Gibalg alternate, soaring spear of piercing death," she shouted, and the spear shot through the sea of black energy. All Surzech saw was a bright crimson blur splitting his pure black tide as it rushed towards the Mao, the amused expression on Scathach's face morphing into that of complete determination, an expression that was unique to only one race. The one race that against all odds had not only survived but thrived in this world through nothing but their own power. It was an expression solely unique to humans. Surzech tried to move out of the way, but he was still immobilized by the twin spears piercing his gut. All the Mao could do was increase the amount of power of destruction he was releasing, creating a wall of the dark energy between him and the approaching spear. The red glowing Gibalg met the wall of black power with a flash of pulsing light as the black and crimson colors clashed, each determined to gain dominance over the other. The ground beneath the two fighters shook from the forces now gathering around the area as trees were uprooted and blasted across the battlefield. Suddenly the black power of destruction and the red Gibalg both disappeared as the two combatants immediately looked on in shock. It wasn't that each force had cancelled out the other, both attacks had literally vanished, as if they were teleported away. They both heard a soft clang and saw the now deactivated Gibalg resting at the witch's feet. "How did it get there?" "All right, kids, I think this has gone on long enough, don't you?" announced an amused male voice as they both turned to see an old man holding Serafal in one hand and a jeweled sword in the other. Both the combatants turned to face this old man warily. "Who are you?" questioned Scathach. "Just an annoying old troll who doesn't want to see his entertainment end too early. Surely Isay told you about me," replied the man with a smile. "Annoying old troll," repeated the witch before her eyes widened and she shook her head in amusement. "Isay, you always meet the strangest people." Surzech just looked between her and this apparently new opponent with a frown as he began forming more power of destruction, ready to blast them both into oblivion. The Mao's eyes widened, however, as the black energy around him instantly disappeared as if it was never even there. "What kind of power is that?" he thought in shock. Now, Maoyusen, I said that was enough, didn't I?" teased the old man as the power of destruction he had just teleported away instantly appeared again inches from the devil's face, whom had to dive to the side or be hit with his own attack. The two combatants just watched as the old man looked around at the destroyed area before he snapped his fingers, and instantly the battlefield was exactly like it was at the start of the fight. No sign of the damage they had inflicted anywhere to be found. "Now that's done, I think the two of you just got off on the wrong foot. Why don't apologize to each other?" suggested the old man, only to sigh as he got a red spear and black sphere sailing towards his head for his troubles. "Kids these days, no respect for their elders," he muttered before the two attacks vanished and reappeared, flying at their previous wielders at high speeds. Scathach and Surzech quickly dodged the attacks and turned to face the man as he continued talking. "If you keep attacking, I might have to bring down the boundary field. I'm sure both of you know the two who would come running if I did that." Scathach and Surzech quickly glanced at each other, each waiting to see what the other would do before Surzech finally reigned in his power, and the witch sighed as she dematerialized Gibalg and her other red spears hovering around her. "Good, now why don't we start over?" Surzech, you clearly wanted to talk to Scathach before all this happened. "Shall I assume it has something to do with your little sister's wedding?" asked the man in amusement. How do you know about that? Questioned the Mao with a suspicious expression on his face. It's a secret, smirked the old man, drawing a growl from Surzech and a smirk from the witch. The Mao took a deep breath as he turned back to face her. Scathach, I swear as a leader of the Mao, that as long as our siblings are not harmed we will not go after that descendant. Forgive me if I don't believe you, Lucifer, father of lies, snarled the witch. I hate this title sometimes, muttered Surzech. Meanwhile Scathach just glared at him with a suspicious look on her face. The only reason you'd let myself and Issei stay here is because you gained something from it. The Mao sighed. It would seem your mind is as sharp as the legends say. You're right, I'd like your help with an annoyance of mine. Tell me, what do you know about the immortal Phoenix clan? The FFT, they are no true immortals. I could kill every member solely by myself, scoffed the witch, getting a smile from Surzech that rapidly turned to a frown at her next reply. But I see no reason why I should help you deal with them, devil. Now, Scathach, don't be so hasty, scolded their amused observer. Just think about how this could be used. It would be perfect time for our new factions to show their strength to the world. The witch just blinked before an eager smile spread across her face as she turned back to the old man. What was your name? Zelrich, he replied with an equally eager smile on his face. Well, Zelrich, I think this is the start of a wonderful partnership, smirked the witch. Issei suddenly shuddered as a feeling of impending doom crashed down on him, drawing the attention of Asia. Issei, what's wrong? Asked the nun. I suddenly felt as if the worst possible thing in the world has happened, like my luck has reached a new level of bad. Nah, it's probably nothing, shrugged the teen as they arrived at the Orc clubroom door. All right, Asia, do you remember your cover story? Asked Issei. The nun nodded. I was going to be killed by some fanatics for being a witch when you came to save me. I've been working for the Celts ever since, recited Asia, sounding so scripted that Issei thought it would have sounded more believable if they'd given her pawn cards to read off. We're not going to be fooling anyone, sighed Issei even as he kept a smile on his face and congratulated Asia. How can someone be that bad at lying? Drag, shut up, scowled Issei as he pushed the door to the clubroom open. Hey Riaz, we're here, he announced, as the two of them entered the clubroom. Instantly they both stopped in their tracks as they saw Riaz and her peerage standing on one side while a blonde man and 14 other girls of various shapes and sizes stood on the other. In between these two groups was a gray-haired woman in a maid uniform. Issei and Asia just glanced at each other, both easily picking up the hostile atmosphere between the two groups. Are we interrupting something? Asked Issei in confusion. No, Issei, come on in please, greeted Riaz, apparently happy for the distraction. Who are they? Riaz, more members of your peerage? Questioned the blonde man. No, we're just friends, and before you ask, yes, we're human, answered Issei, only to frown as the man suddenly burst into condescending laughter. Humans, ha, that's rich. You can't even get people into your peerages anymore. Riaz, truly it is a good thing I am your fiancé, insulted the male devil, getting a low growl from all of Riaz's peerage. For the last time, Rizer, I will not marry you, snarled Riaz as Issei's eyes widened in recognition. Rizer, so this is the one they were talking about earlier. I can see why they hate him, he thought with a scowl. You don't have a choice, my dear Riaz. Our families have already decided upon it, reminded Rizer, and unknown to anyone the archer card began glowing softly. Devils use marriage contracts. That's a bit harsh. Don't you think she should be allowed to choose who she marries? Remarked Issei in disapproval, getting a sympathetic look from the maid and a grateful smile from Riaz. Are you blind, human? Can't you see your betters are talking? Growled Rizer as he began to approach Riaz, a lecherous look in his eyes. Instantly the archer card's glow began to grow brighter. No, but with a face like yours, I wish I was blind, smirked the teen as Rizer spun around to face him. What did you say, human? Do you even know who you are talking to? I am Rizer Phoenix, member of one of the most powerful clans of the 72 Pillars, informed the Phoenix member, puffing his out in pride. I see. Well, your family tree must be a cactus then, because everybody on it is a prick, replied Issei, as everyone's eyes widened and both Asia and Riaz giggled softly into their hands. You. Damn human, sputtered Rizer angrily. Oh, not a fan of that one. I have others, informed the teen with a deadpan expression before taking a deep breath. The human then gave Rizer a mocking bow and continued, how about? You look as if a pig and an elephant got married, and you're their offspring. No, then what about? You're so ugly that Hello Kitty said goodbye to you. Don't like that one either. All right, let's try again. Enough, how dare you mock me in such a manner, interrupted the blonde devil as even members of his own peerage struggled to contain their laughter. Well, how would you like me to mock you then? I take requests, smirked the teen as Riaz didn't bother hiding it anymore and burst out into laughter. Rizer's face went red as he turned to one of his peerage members. That's it, Mira. Show this human why he should not anger his betters. Yes, Rizer-sama, shouted the girl before charging towards Issei. Rizer, stop, cried the maid in horror as Issei heard the door open behind him. Why should I? What does it matter if a lowly human dies? Scoffed the devil, only to freeze as the room was filled with an oppressive power and Mira was suddenly thrown against a wall. Because this lowly human is under my protection, as well as that of the Celts. Tell me, devil, does the name Scathach sound familiar? Asked a female voice, causing everyone to turn and see the Godslayer walk in, clothed back in her QO uniform. Oh, Scathach, where were you? Are you okay? You look exhausted? Asked a concerned Issei. Just doing some aggressive negotiations, Issei, nothing to worry about. So this is the one. How well, immortal phoenix. Feel like testing your powers against that of the immortal witch, commented the witch as she looked over to the maid, whose eyes widened at the code words and a quick smirk spread across her face before being replaced by her usual stoic expression. You ... but ... stuttered the devil fearfully as he glanced at the maid. She is correct. Riser, you just attacked a member of the Celts after we promised them safety in our territory. They are well within their rights to kill you where you stand, informed the maid, not a hint of emotion on her face. What, shouted Riser in fear, only to hear Scathach chuckle. As fun as that would be, I have a better idea, informed the witch. Oh, and what's that, questioned the maid. While a death would send a message, I think disgracing him in front of the entire underworld would leave a bigger one, smirked the witch. The maid raised her eyebrows. What did you have in mind? You devils like rating games, correct? Let's have one. A member of my faction will fight Riser and all of his peerage, proposed Scathach with a smile. And the winner gets to demand one thing from the loser, added Issei, which made Scathach look at him in surprise before nodding. Indeed, Issei, I was going to add that anyway, replied the witch with a nod. I have to fight the Godslayer, no way, I forfeit, shouted Riser as his peerage looked at him in shock. Spare us the sight of you soiling yourself, devil. I will not belittle myself with fighting you. No, another member of my faction will be fighting you, informed Scathach, making Issei glance in her direction. Who, asked the maid. It's a secret, replied the Godslayer with a smirk. Very well, Riser, do you agree, asked the maid devil. What happens if I don't side Riser in resignation? I'll kill you, answered the witch as she materialized Gibalg in her hand. Fine, I agree, shouted the devil as Scathach dismissed Gibalg. Glad you see things my way, devil, she smirked before turning to the maid. How long until things are ready? Simply give us the type of environment you want for your match and we'll have it ready in a couple of days, informed the maid, while Riaz and her peerage just looked on in shock. A forest. Make it a forest, answered Issei, his mouth seeming to move on its own accord as the archer card's glow slowly died. I see. Are you fine with this, Riser? Asked the maid. I'm fighting this human. Ha, forget what I said earlier. This will be an easy win, laughed Riser, his earlier fear having dissolved in the light of this new information. So why do you want me to fight with this guy, whispered Isay to Scathach. What are you saying? You don't want to humiliate him with nearly the entire underworld watching, whispered back the witch. Hey, don't put words in my mouth, replied the teen as he smirked at the devil. You've just made a grave mistake, Celts. In fact, I think I know what I'll demand after this is over, grinned Riser as he stared lustfully at Scathach's body, apparently oblivious to the rage building in the Godslayer's body. Not really. If you want to know about mistakes, you should ask your parents, replied Issei with a wave of his hand, making Riser snarl as a fire appeared in his hand. Riser, I would like to remind you to wait for the match before you start fighting, stated the maid as she walked in between them. Very well, I'll be looking forward to it. Human, growled Riser as he and his peerage walked into a newly made magical circle. You have to leave so soon? I was just about to poison the tea, said Issei with a grin as he waved at the devil, whom said nothing and teleported out of room followed by the maid doing the same. I think he likes me, smirked the teen as all the devils in the room turned to look at him with amused expressions before they all burst out into laughter. Eventually, though, once the laughter died down, Riaz walked over to the human. Issei, I'm sorry for involving you in all this, apologized Riaz with a bow. Don't worry, Riaz, I'll be fine. Make sure you guys come watch the match. I think you'll enjoy it, replied Issei before he introduced the rest of the devils to Asia, while Scathach tried to keep the two of them from giving away their bluff, usually by threatening everyone in the room. Issei was honestly terrified of what would happen if the Godslayer befriended Aquino, which seemed thankfully unlikely at this point. By the time the club finished, Issei was bruised, as well as physically and mentally drained, so all in all a pretty regular day in the orc by this point. Low bed, I'm going to sleep on you now, sighed Issei in relief as he collapsed onto his sanctuary, ready to fall into the bliss of unconsciousness, only to growl as he felt the familiar feeling a stone beneath him. I just want a restful night's sleep. Is that too much to ask? Groaned the teen as he got up from and spotted Dedrag staring down at him. Hey Dedrag, what's going on? Asked Issei, tiredly. Who did? Replied the grouchy human. That thieving Nico. Who else? Informed Tamamo as Issei spun around and saw both Lancer and Caster approaching him. Archer, what's Atalanta want with me? She didn't seem to like me much when we last met, yawned Issei. That's for her to tell you, boy, said Satanta as he gestured with his head to behind the teen. Oh, hey Atalanta, greeted the teen as he rubbed his eyes and turned to face the cat girl. Why, frowned the huntress. Why, what? Repeated Issei in confusion. Why did thou interfere with that devil's marriage contract? Elaborated Atalanta with narrowed eyes. Technically Scathach did, I was just dragged along for the ride. Nothing new there, pointed out the human with a sigh. She's a wild one, shrugged Lancer. Atalanta glared at Satanta before she turned back to Issei. She didn't add the bit about the demands at the end, and I know what thou art, haste planned boy. So why did thou do it? Because he was a selfish prick, which obviously didn't care about her. Riaz deserves someone better than that. There was no way I was going to let this horrible marriage go through, informed Issei, only to jump as Atalanta grabbed him by the collar of his shirt and hoisted him off the ground. Then thou should have convinced the Godslayer to kill him. Then and there was no need for thou to fight the devil. Thou haste risked thou's friend's chance to end her forced marriage by agreeing to this fight. Instead she growled before dropping him to the ground. I know but, trailed off the teen. But, prompted the huntress. Issei just got up from ground as he stared at Atalanta with a fierce expression on his face. People like that just treat others as nothing more than toys piss me off. I guess I just wanted to deal with him myself, to punish him for his attitude. The huntress was silent as she locked her gaze with his, silently judging him before she finally nodded. I see ... Very well, I shall give thee assistance in this endeavor. And no offense, Atalanta, but I think it would be best if I used Lancer's or Caster's help, since I'm meant to be his descendant and they're the cards that I have the most experience at using, stated Issei. Ha, take that thieving Nico, cheered Tamamo. Boy, cease speaking, else I shall cut out thou's tongue, snarled the huntress, instantly shutting the human up. Seeing this, Atalanta then nodded before she grabbed him again by his shirt and started dragging him away towards the archer doorway. Good, now come, we have much work to do, informed the huntress. Tamamo started to follow in concern. Hey wait, he's not ready yet. However, she was stopped by Lancer, whom grabbed her by the shoulder and shook his head. This isn't our fight, Caster, let them go. She needs this just as much as him, besides we still have her to worry about. Tamamo sighed as they both turned to the sealed saber doorway, numerous Celtic runes and Shinto talismans decorating the passage. True, I thought Berserker would be the one we have to worry about. Who could have guessed Saber would be the one that we'd have to seal back up, she said with a shake of her head. Honestly, how can she have that much hatred over a single name? At least we managed to lock her back up before she did any lasting damage, commented the fox girl. Let's hope she doesn't get another wake-up call like that. I doubt she'll fall for the same trick as last time. I don't think we'll be able to put her back sleep next time she awakens, frowned Lancer, getting a nod from both Drag and Tamamo. If what Atalanta said was true and if she's anything like her father ... then we got lucky stopping her when we did, muttered Satanta as they all stared at the saber doorway with concern. Atalanta, where are we going? Questioned Issei as he struggled to break the huntress' grip on his shirt. Those two may be happy to let thou use their powers, and accepted thou as their master, but I have not. If thou wants to use my full power, then first thou must pass my test, growled Atalanta as she finally dropped the teen to the ground. Issei just rubbed his sore neck as he got to his feet and gasped as he found them both in a deep forest, the sun shining down on the pair through the tree canopy as numerous animals began calling in the distance. Glancing behind him, Issei saw the other end of the doorway he came through carved into the mountainside like a cave entrance, and frowned as he spotted a dragon instead of the archer symbol above it. Hearing the huntress moving, Issei then leapt to his feet and he followed after her as the two went deeper into the forest. Test full power, why not just let me use it now and save us some time? Atalanta just glanced at him in annoyance. Hast thou not heard anything? Never mind, we've arrived. Upon hearing this, the duo emerged from the forest and into a nearby coastline, causing Issei's eyes to widen as he spotted the ancient remains of a racecourse. A foot race, that's the test, blinked Issei. Of course, was it not obvious? Questioned the huntress. Well, I can't exactly argue with that, admitted Issei with a sigh. Good, now get ready, ordered Atalanta as she moved to the starting line. What, you can't be serious here, there's no way I can win, exclaimed the teen. If thou truly believes as such, then thou has already lost, replied the cat girl with a frown. All right, I suppose you have a point there. Might as well give it a try, sighed Issei, shaking his head as he moved to the adjacent lane. No, do or do not. There is no try, lectured Atalanta. What does that even mean? Questioned the teen in confusion. It means cease this incessant whining, get thyself ready, commanded the huntress, and Issei sighed again before getting into a ready position. There was a brief pause before the two runners sprinted off the starting line, and as he looked back, Issei was amazed to see Atalanta far behind him. I'm winning, thought the teen eagerly, only for a memory to reappear in his head. Atalanta was often fond of letting her opposing racers get a head start in her foot races before overtaking them and winning. In fact, some even believed that as long as she let her opponents move first, she could predict the outcome and change it in her favor. Crap, shouted the teen as he once again looked behind him and spotted the chased huntress rapidly closing the distance between them. As panic began to fill his mind, the teen saw Atalanta running alongside him and glanced at the teen before a sudden image filled his mind. So you have come back, my wayward daughter, said an old man, sitting upon his throne. Thou hast no right to call me that after what thou hast done, growled the familiar green-clad girl, the cat ears and tail noticeably absent. I am your father, I will call you what I wish, replied the man with a frown. Thou art a monster, no parent would abandon their child like that, retorted the huntress, angrily. Mind your tongue, Atalanta, do not forget the debt you owe me. Now that you are of age, I have found you a suitor, informed the man. I refuse to fight, Atalanta. You cannot defy me, daughter of mine, replied the king. I am a champion of Artemis, and as such I have sworn off men. You might not respect me, but you will respect the goddess wishes, she snarled. I am your father, bellowed the king. Thou art no father of mine, roared the huntress. The two were silent before the king glared at his estranged daughter. Very well then, Atalanta, let us make a deal. Issei blinked as the vision ended, and the teen quickly stumbled before he fell to the ground, the sudden shift back to the present completely throwing off his balance. See him collapse. Atalanta stopped before walking over to him. Thou failed, boy, now try again, demanded the huntress as Issei struggled to his feet. I don't know what you're expecting of me, Atalanta, but there's no way I can beat you. So can we please just stop, requested Issei in a tired voice. The huntress just froze before she gave him a cold look. So thou wishes to give up. Yeah, sure, I'll just use Lancer's card, replied the teen as he turned to walk away, only for an arrow to pierce the tree next to his head. Tell me, boy, what dost thou know of my legend? Asked Atalanta in a cold voice as Issei spun to face her. Frowning, Issei eyed the bow in her hands cautiously as he replied, You were a champion of Artemis and Apollo, accompanied the Argonauts and even befriended Heracles. You became known as the chaste huntress after forcing any potential suitors to beat you in foot races before you would accept their proposal. The huntress nodded as she knocked another arrow. Indeed, tell me, boy, what happened to the ones who lost? Lost they? Issei trailed off as his eyes widened and his face grew pale. Were killed. Does thou understand now that is the cost of failure? Thou will either pass my test ... or die, stated Atalanta. Atalanta ... You're joking, right? Stammered the teen. The strong thrive while the weak perish. That is the way of the wild. That is the way of the hunt. Now art thou a weak rabbit or a fearsome lion? Choose, boy, demanded the green girl with a frown. But I'm not asking for your hand in marriage. I'm not forcing you to break your vows, so why do I have to die? Shouted Issei. Indeed, thou art not requesting my matrimony, instead thou art wanting something far greater. My power, my flesh, my very soul. That is what thou wants, to bind my very existence to thee, to truly become one. Something far more invasive than any marriage, replied Atalanta, her bow not lowering from his. Then why aren't I dead already? I've already lost, frowned the teen, and the huntress finally lowered her bow with a sigh. In honor of a friend, I'm giving thou 12 chances, boy, she informed him. 12, repeated Issei, the number's significance not lost on the teen. That's right, I know not what thou hast said to him in there, but I can tell that thou ease some of his pain, and for that thou hast my gratitude, sighed the huntress. Really, it just sounded like a bunch of roaring to me, murmured Issei. Once one has been under the same influence, it becomes easy to distinguish what is true emotion and what is fake, muttered Atalanta sadly. The teen's eyes widened. Same influence. Atalanta, were you ever summoned as? Enough, thou hast clearly recovered, so let us begin. It's time to see if thou can also do the impossible and outrun the chaste huntress, interrupted the huntress as she grabbed Issei and dragged him back to the starting lines. And thus the process repeated itself for what seemed like hours to Issei as he tried and failed to beat the chaste huntress. With each failure, the desperation in the teen grew as the threat of death loomed ever closer. Thou failed once again, boy, only 2 more chances left. Now get up and try again, ordered Atalanta as Issei was panting on the ground. 2 can't, replied Issei, only to leap to his feet as an arrow pierced where he had been moments before. Thou can still move, therefore thou can still run. Now move or my next arrow won't be aimed at the ground, warned Atalanta as she marched him back to the starting point. Once again Issei was forced back to the starting point as they prepared for his 11th attempt at beating the huntress. Trying to ignore the pain burning in his legs, Issei focused on the race in front of him, his face the textbook definition of desperation as he struggled to move his uncooperating body. This time was different than all the other attempts, however, as Issei saw Atalanta seem to be distracted by something, gripping her head as if from a headache before glancing at the lagging teen with a pitying expression on her face. Seeing an opportunity, Issei pushed his body as far as he could, praying that he could use this chance to finally overtake the huntress. In his focused and exhausted state, Issei didn't notice his body starting to move in sync with Atalanta's, the two appearing to be running in perfect synchronization as the sun began setting behind them. He had to run, he had to win. Damn her, damn the huntress, he had to win, not just for him, but for his dad. What would happen if he lost his son too? He had to run. She had to run, she had to win. Damn them, damn those cheats, she had to win. She would not break her vows to her goddess. She wouldn't let that bastard of a father take away the last piece of her identity she had left. The lone huntress sprinted at unimaginable speeds as she tried to close the distance between her and the cheater, only to watch in dismay as he crossed the finish line. The huntress just slowed to a stop as a feeling of deep despair welled up inside her. She had betrayed her goddess, the one who saved her life. Tears blurred her vision as she looked down to her hand and saw the core of the golden apple still clutched tightly in her fist. The once indomitable huntress fell to the ground as her legs turned to jelly. There was silence as a loud piercing wail of defeat and despair echoed across the grounds before trailing off into soft sobs. As her cries crept their way through the nearby woods, numerous animals in the forest grew silent as they listened before they too joined in the huntress lamenting, signaling that the legend of the indomitable chaste huntress Atalanta had well and truly met its end. What the ouch, cried Isay as his body finally gave in and he collapsed. Thou lost again, boy. Thou will have to do better. This is thou's final chance, informed the huntress as she approached him. Just shut up. If you hate me so much, then why are we even talking? Why are you even bothering to help me? Snarled Isay as a combination of fear, desperation, exhaustion, and anger finally took their toll on his psyche. Atalanta just stared at him before she sighed, because of this. We all have choices, Midult, whether we know it or not, and I've just made mine. I'm giving you a second chance, don't waste it. Isay's eyes widened as he saw himself standing in front of Midult before the image began dissolving into nothing. Lancer wanted her dead, even I was enraged at her trickery. I nearly killed a child, something a hero should never do. Yet thou held us back. Not only did thou spare the child, but thou set her down a better path, informed the huntress as she turned away from the image and back to Issei. And so thou gained my curiosity, as well as my respect. However, if this is what thou calls their best, then perhaps I was mistaken, muttered the Atalanta before she began walking away. I will give thee some time alone. It's good to have some time alone to make peace with thyself before death, she advised, leaving the teen alone with his thoughts. What was he going to do? There was no way he could beat her. He needed a miracle. The teen growled in frustration before he felt something poking into his back and turned to see a golden apple laying on the ground next to him. That wasn't there before, was it? Pondered the teen with a frown as he picked up the apple. Boy, art thou ready yet? Called Atalanta from the nearby starting line. Yeah, give me a second, shouted Issei as he hid the apple behind his back and made his way to the starting point. For the final time the two of them got into their staring positions and Issei felt the weight of the apple now hidden under his shirt. I hope this works, sighed the teen as he clutched his last lifeline close to his. As usual, Issei quickly found himself overtaken by the huntress and sighed as he removed the apple from beneath his shirt and prepared to throw the distraction. However, as he drew his arm back to throw it, he heard the huntress' wails of despair and soft sobs echo throughout his mind, and the teen hesitated. Did he really want to use it? Would he really be satisfied with that outcome? No, he had to use it, or he'd be killed. He didn't have a choice. Issei glanced at the golden apple in his hand as he ran, his mind still trying to come to a decision before he suddenly remembered the race and tried to find Atalanta. Damn it, cried Issei as he lowered his arm with the apple still clenched in his fist and collapsed to the ground, watching as Atalanta crossed the finish line and turned to face him before walking over to the teen. Congratulations, boy, you passed, announced Atalanta as she helped the shocked teen back to his feet. But I didn't win, he replied, drawing a small smirk from the huntress. Thou were never meant to, boy. Rather, if I had been beaten, then thou would have failed the most important test, answered Atalanta as she grabbed the golden apple that was hidden behind his back in the teen's clutched hand. Did thou really think that this accused apple appearing was pure chance, she asked, before throwing it away. Any person who could still resort to such trickery after thou had experienced my memories has no right to use the power of the chaste huntress, explained Atalanta. And what about killing me, frowned Issei. Merely the motivation required to push thou to thy limits. I doubt caster or lancer would have given me a quick death if I had killed thee, mused the huntress. Was it really necessary to go so far, asked the teen as she placed him gently on the ground nearby a tree. The huntress nodded. People always reveal their true nature when exposed to hardships like this, thou art no exception. A small smile grew on Atalanta's face as she stared at him. Still, I must admit that thou art a good person. Perhaps caster and lancer weren't naive fools after all. Thanks, replied Issei hesitantly before resting his tired body against the tree. The huntress was silent for a couple of minutes before she sighed. I'm sorry about thou's mother ... For a child to lose their parent like that at a young age is tragic. What, but how do you? Stammered Issei in shock while Atalanta had a smug smirk appear on her face. Thou didn't think they'd be the only one seeing memories during this, did thee? When souls are being bound, it isn't a one-way process. Each influences the other. Even include states are no exception to this, informed the chaste huntress. Right, I guess that's another thing that damn troll forgot to tell me, sighed the teen. Boy, one last thing, said the green-clad girl, drawing Issei's attention. The teen shuddered from the glare she was giving him. Try anything perverted and thou's life is forfeit. What do you mean by that? Questioned Issei. Thou shalt see ... Now prepare thyself, Issei Hayaudu. Thou art going to learn how mad a beast the chaste huntress can be. The four gods sat at the table in silence as they waited for someone to break the ice. Amaterasu took the time to examine her companions. Zeus had chosen the appearance of a well-built elderly man with a long white build and clad in white robes. His two children, the twins Apollo and Artemis, looked as different as the domains they represented. Apollo was a muscular young man that had tanned skin with short wavy blonde hair and was clad in what appeared to be some form of brown and red ancient Greek armor, only missing the helm. Seeing her studying him, Apollo turned his gaze to Amaterasu and did the same before nodding, apparently satisfied with what he had found. The Shinto goddess then turned to Artemis, whom had long white hair and was wearing a long white dress that eventually turned to a shade of orange at the bottom, along with red shoes. However, as she studied the Greek goddess' face, she realized that the frown that the two twins were sharing seemed unnatural on her face, as if it would rather turn back into a joyful smile. Amaterasu, I must say we were surprised when you said you wanted this meeting. When I sent you that message, I didn't expect you to request a personal meeting, least of all with my two children, stated Zeus, snapping the Shinto goddess from her thoughts. The situation has changed, Zeus, and I think this meeting will benefit all of us, she replied with a sigh. Why are Apollo and I here? You didn't seem to care about us last time we asked you, pointed out Artemis, whom glared at Amaterasu. Tsukuyomi simply didn't tell me. After all, you were talking about your deceased champion rising from the void of death, something even we gods struggle with, explained the Shinto goddess. I see, so that was what had the two of you so riled up, muttered Zeus as he turned to face his children. Artemis nodded as she folded her hands over the table. Both my brother and I felt something familiar coming from the Shinto territory. At first we thought nothing of it and just dismissed it as our imagination. But then we both heard it ... The prayer of divine protection. Neither of us could believe it as we felt our power being summoned by the complaint message. You mean, trailed off Zeus as he looked at them in shock. There is no doubt, Father, even though it felt slightly different, it was definitely Teuropoulos, replied Apollo with a nod. Amaterasu frowned as she spoke up. But how does that mean that your champion is alive? Could not the bow have just been found and used by another? Artemis just shook her head. Tauropolos doesn't work like that. By itself the bow is a fearsome weapon capable of destroying most objects with a single arrow. But the bow by itself is unable to create the effect of Phobos catastrophe. That ability requires multiple conditions to use, one of which is that the weapon is being used by our champion. So we have the chaste huntress herself apparently rising from the grave as well as my son. Truly the world has gone mad, sighed Zeus. Is Heracles really that big of a surprise? Father frowned Apollo, making everyone turn to face him. He has already done the impossible 12 times before. Who's to say that my brother hasn't done the same again? Shrugged the Greek sun god. You have a point there, said Zeus with a faint smile as Apollo turned back to Amaterasu. So why have you wanted this meeting? If Tsukuyomi thought this was nonsense, then what has changed? Something must have happened for you to now take us seriously. He frowned. The Celts, replied Amaterasu, getting shocked looks from her fellow gods. The Celts, what do Dagda and the rest of those isolationists have to do with this? Asked Artemis. Not so isolationist anymore, reminded the Shinto goddess. Indeed, but you still haven't answered the question, Amaterasu, replied the Greek sun god. At ease, my son, I'm sure our Shinto friend was just about to start explaining herself, calmed Zeus before gesturing for Amaterasu to continue. The sun goddess gave a grateful nod as she began. Shortly before I got your message, Zeus, we detected something that should have been impossible in our territory. You are aware of my experience in the human world? Yes. Getting a nod from the three gods, she continued. Well, after my death as Tamamo, my soul was split into fragments as the humans broke the killing stone. Thankfully my brothers quickly collected what we thought was all of them. Thought, repeated Apollo. Yes, you see, we detected someone accessing my territory's ley lines. Odd, but not that unusual for skilled magicians. However, when we focused on it, it felt exactly the same as my own power, informed the goddess. So they missed collecting all your fragments. Is that so unusual? Asked Artemis, only for Amaterasu to shake her head. You don't understand. Those fragments cannot gain their own sentience. It is simply impossible. Let alone have the same authority as myself to let them access the ley lines with my name, explained Amaterasu. They only siphoned a small amount of power this time, but the Shinto goddess trailed off. But what if that was simply a test, to find out if the concept could work before putting more effort into taking more of you power? Finished Zeus with a worried expression. Exactly, replied Amaterasu. If they have found a way to synthesize a god's power, then that would explain why I felt my son in your territory. But what do the Celts have to do with this? Questioned Zeus with a frown. During the time that all of us detected these anomalies, Morrigan and Scathach were infiltrating my territory, informed Amaterasu. I heard that they were there to investigate the new descendant of Cuchulainn, frowned Apollo. Yes, that is what they said. But was he really a descendant or just their first successful experiment? Questioned Amaterasu, and a deep silence filled the room. You think they used the same method on the boy using Cuchulainn's power? Amaterasu, do you have any proof? I think I'd be able to recognize a fake of my champion, argued Artemis. Nothing yet. But the timing is just too convenient for me to throw it away as chance. It would be easy for Scathach and Morrigan to hide their presences with their skills, reasoned the Shinto goddess. So the Celts are responsible. I will have dagged his head for this, roared Zeus, and they all heard the loud clap of thunder. No, or at least not completely. I believe that Morrigan, Scathach, and possibly Lug are acting on their own accord, assured Amaterasu quickly. You say that, Amaterasu, but the behavior of the Celts as a whole in recent years suggests they are preparing for conflict, pointed out Apollo. I know, but I don't think it's us that they are preparing for, mused the Shinto god. What do you mean? Questioned Artemis, curiously. When I went to see Dagda, he was too passive, eager to see the conflict put to a peaceful end as quickly as possible. Something has Dagda worried, and I don't think it was us, stated Amaterasu, and once again a silence descended on them. So we're back to square one. If the Celts aren't behind it, then who is it? Just Morrigan and Lug, or is there more to this? Frowned Apollo as he began rubbing his temples. I think I might know. We've all heard the rumors of a new faction forming, taking elements that are unsatisfied with the current world and bringing them together under one army, informed Zeus. You talking about this Chaos Brigade? Answered Amaterasu with a frown. Scathach's opinion is obvious, but tell me, Amaterasu, did either Lug or Morrigan seem dissatisfied with the way Dagda was running things? Asked Zeus, causing her to frown as she thought back to her meeting with the Celts. Morrigan definitely, however Lug didn't seem that unhappy, she replied. And yet Dagda stopped him from bringing his son back. A perfectly good reason to hold a grudge, reasoned Apollo. We should inform the Celts about this, suggested Artemis. Not possible. Dagda recently assigned Morrigan and Lug as the Celts' official diplomats. There's no way we could get a message to him without them intercepting it, sighed Amaterasu. Of course he did. So what do we do? Groaned Artemis with a shake of her head. We need to keep a closer eye out for anything related to this Chaos Brigade, stated Zeus. I must go back to my territory and keep monitoring the ley lines. I'll inform you if something comes up on my end. I would request that you three do the same, request Amaterasu. Of course, thank you for the information. We'll be in touch, replied the leader of the Greeks. Zeus, you need to come see this, yelled an old man whom rushed into the room. Poseidon, what is it? I'm in the middle of an important meeting, frowned Zeus. Then it can wait, cried Poseidon, making everyone stare at him in shock as he then turned to face the twins. Apollo, Artemis, you need to come as well, he shouted. Brother, just what is going on? Demanded Zeus. There's a raiding game going on that you need to see, informed the Greek god of the sea. More with those devils, honestly, Poseidon, I don't see why you enjoy them so much, scoffed Zeus with a shake of his head. Zeus, it's who's fighting that you all need to see, explained Poseidon. What do you mean? Questioned a frowning Zeus, only for them all to hear quite gasps of shock from the twins. No way, breathed Apollo. It's not possible, muttered Artemis. Apollo, Artemis, what's wrong? Questioned Amaterasu. The two Greeks just silently held up identical arrows with pieces of paper attached to them. The chaste huntress has returned. All right, Issei, you ready to show them how powerful Cuchulainn really is? Grinned Scathach as she, Issei, and Asia walked into the preparation room, waiting for the match to start. Actually, I'm not going to be using the Lancer card for this, informed Issei, making Scathach's eyes widen. Issei, you can't. You're supposed to be a descendant of Cuchulainn. If you use any of the others, you'll cause so many problems that it's not funny, even to me, frowned the witch. Scathach. Issei, what are you talking about? Asked the nun, watching from the sidelines with a confused expression on her face. Don't worry, Asia, you'll find out in a minute, assured Issei before turning back to the witch. Scathach, I know what I'm doing, trust me. Indeed, this should be interesting, agreed a familiar male voice. Zelrich, what the hell are you doing here? Exclaimed Issei, shocked at seeing the magician revealing himself like this. Come now, Issei-kun, for something like this even I want a front row seat, smirked the magician. Issei, are sure about this? There's no turning back after this, the whole world will change. Not to mention you'll be painting a huge target on your back. I like a good fight, but I don't think you would, asked Scathach with a frown. I'm sure. Besides, they'll be looking for the chaste huntress, not Issei Hayaudu, replied the teen with a grin as he handed her the rune necklace. What do you mean? Asked the witch as she grabbed the necklace off him. Just wait and see, smirked Issei. The witch nodded and stepped to the opposite end of the room with Asia, the two of them watching with bated breath as Issei removed the archer card from his holder and moved to the center of the room. All right, Deidre, just like we practiced. Boost my mana as much as you can without getting us killed, he ordered, as the familiar red gauntlet appeared on his arm. Interesting. Using the sacred gear as a power source to boost your reserves. Now what will you do next? Issei Hayaudu, grinned the magician. Instantly the room was bathed with a green light as the gems in the boosted gear began glowing brightly, and a pained grimace appeared on Issei's face as he felt himself begin to be flooded with pain. The energy now coursing through his body threatening to erupt as Issei crouched down on the floor, the archer card glowing fiercely as he placed it on the ground. Taking a deep breath, Issei heard the words that Atalanta taught him echo in his head as a red magic circle spread out from the card and along the floor until Issei was in the perfect center of it. Then it began glowing faintly. Zelrich's eyes widened slight while his grin turned into a concerned frown. I knew his power was growing fast, but not this fast. And certainly not enough to attempt this. You really are full of surprises, aren't you, boy? I guess I was right after all. He really is a user. I can't wait to see how it affects the class cards. Fill, intoned Issei as the circle began pulsating with each word, Scathach instantly shielding Asia as a massive amount of energy began filling the room, while Zelrich looked on unaffected. Issei didn't seem bothered by this as he closed his eyes and continued chanting in a monotone voice, repeat 5 times, but destroy each one filled. The entire room began shaking from the growing energy as Scathach quickly drew a circle of protective runes around Asia and herself, the nun fearfully grasping onto the witch while Scathach herself just remained silent as she continued to observe. Let silver and steel be the essence, continued Issei, unimpeded by the forces now acting on the room they all occupied. Scathach and Asia just watched as they saw the floorboards beneath them begin to crack and the window panels began vibrating in their sills. Still, despite this, their attention was focused entirely on Issei, who was beginning to be obscured by the red glow of the magic circle. None of them noticing the magician's face gain a confused and yet intrigued expression as he heard Issei's next area. Let the power of the Welsh dragon and the Archduke of Contracts be the foundation, chanted the teen as the light from the magic circle completely engulfed the teen in its red glow. Scathach and Asia heard the building give a low groan before the sound of cracking glass from the windows began, followed by the door rattling in its frame. Let red be the color I pay tribute to, cried Issei as they heard his voice beginning to sound extremely pained. Let rise a wall against the wind that shall fall, he shouted before the two of the observers were blasted by the winds now rushing around the room, the door and windows shaking much more violently than before. Let the 4 cardinal gates close, coughed out the teen as the glass windows finally shattered, sending glass shards flying around the room. Scathach continued shielding the nun from the glass fragments, and her runes began glowing as they warded the worst of the debris away from them. Zelrich just teleported any incoming projectiles away as he kept his gaze focused solely on Issei. Let the 3-forked road from the crown reaching unto the kingdom rotate, called Issei, his voice rising in volume as the howling winds grew louder with him. Let it be declared now, shouted Issei as his voice finally reached its crescendo, and Scathach pushed Asia to the ground as the door suddenly blew off its hinges and buried itself into the wall behind them. I, who is about to awaken, cried the teen as the walls of the building itself began cracking from the energy now assaulting them, and everyone heard what sounded like multiple voices whispering all around them. It would seem that even the boosted gear isn't unaffected by his power. How intriguing. I wonder if this too will change things, pondered the magician. Call upon you, the chaste huntress, my flesh is your catalyst and our souls your power, he coughed out, struggling to maintain his consciousness from the pain now burning throughout his body. Now submit to the beckoning of the red dragon emperor and remake each in your own image, intoned Isay before coughing again as the coppery taste filled his mouth. I ask of you, Atalanta, to become one with our souls, continued the struggling teen as Scathach and Asia cautiously got up from the ground in time to see the magic circle on the cracked floorboards begin to slowly rise. Answer, if you would submit to this will and this truth, chanted Isay as the circle rose up to his midsection. An oath shall be sworn here, he shouted in an oddly high-pitched voice before his observers were blinded by sudden flashes as the pulsating circle grew brighter, forcing them to shield their eyes. Together we shall attain all virtues of all of heaven, cried Isay as the energy that had been swirling around the room began rushing back into the circle. For I am the heavenly dragon who has stolen the principles of domination from God, chanted the teen as the circle reached up to his neck. Together we shall have dominion over all evils of all of hell, called Isay, the bright crimson light now shooting through the broken windows and illuminating the entire area. For I am the red dragon of domination, he announced, his high-pitched voice beginning to lower in volume as the circle's light started dimming. And together we shall sink into the depths of crimson purgatory, continued the teen in a soft voice, the crimson magic circle finally reaching over his head before staying there and giving one final blinding glow. In order to fight all the world's evil, finished Isay as a last shockwave of energy rippled across the room, knocking Scathach and Asia off their feet as Zelrich briefly blinked out of existence as the shockwave passed over him. Install Archer, Scathach stat sheet, STR, Con, A, AGI, A, Mag, C, LCK, D, Magic Resistance, A, Rune Magic, A, Godslayer, B. Due to Scathach's past experience with fighting gods, she deals more damage to those that have divine running through their veins. Haunts of Wisdom, A+. Haunts of Wisdom is the intellect of the abyss, acquired as a consequence of surpassing humans, killing gods and being left behind in the outside of the world. Scathach can use this to learn any skills at a B-ranked level except for a few that are unique to only that hero. However, the witch must first consider the person she is copying to be a hero for the skill to activate. Due to her isolation and high standards, very few have ever been able to reach this status, such as Kuchulain. This skill also gives the user the ability to teach these acquired skills to others. However, the success rate is dependent on the student. Known skills copied, clairvoyance, the ability to predict certain events before they happen. When used by Scathach in combat, it acts as an eye of mind. Protection from arrows, disengage, battle continuation, magic resistance, Gibolg alternate, A+. The ultimate attack of the immortal witch Scathach, in which she produces 2 prototype models of Gibolg to cause heavy damage to her opponents and immobilize them, each ranking at a B-ranked noble phantasm. After they have been immobilized, she uses the current Gibolg and throws it at her trapped enemy. The attack then hits with the force equaling in a ranked noble phantasm. Okay, sadly the chapter is over, and if you enjoyed, just leave a like and subscribe with post notification, so when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.